Picture this mountain kid just chilling on the grass and staring at clouds, when an old guy randomly walks up to warn him that a deadly monster is heading straight for them. The kid doesn't even flinch, refusing to even sit up to hear the news. Fast forward a couple of hours, and Turan suddenly picks up the heavy scent of blood wafting through the air. He walks into the thick woods, only to discover Old Man Rabbis collapsed on the ground, completely lifeless. It turns out the old man wasn't bluffing after all. The monster was very real. Even while staring down at this gruesome, bloody scene, Turan's heart doesn't skip a single beat. Right on cue, the beast returns. A massive demonic tiger surrounded by an aura of dark energy oozing like thick smoke. Yet right after letting out a deafening roar, the tiger is actually the one that steps back. The beast's survival instincts are blaring non-stop danger alarms. Realizing this tiny human is absurdly dangerous, the predator plays it smart and keeps its distance. Seeing that the beast refuses to move, Turan calmly pulls out a tiny pebble, fits it into his leather sling, and lets his eyes glow with power. That glowing right there, pure magic. His next shot shreds through the atmosphere, delivering a blow so destructive it erases the tiger instantly. Turan executes the entire thing without even blinking once. This insane composure makes sense considering he was already slinging spells 8 years ago when he was just 10. When his mother caught him casually floating things around the house, it scared the living daylights out of her. She forced him to promise never to reveal his abilities to a single soul. Her terror stemmed from a simple reality. The world believed mages possessed the sacred bloodline of the Frans, making these spellcasters view ordinary people as lesser beings. Even the proudest, most skilled knights were treated as mere slaves in their presence. That was the moment his mother decided to drop the ultimate truth on him. His father wasn't some noble mage, he was actually a knight. If the elite mages discovered their divine lineage had mixed into a common knight's son, they wouldn't just brush it off. They would literally launch a full-scale crusade just to wipe him out. Because in their minds, true mages are never born from ordinary blood. End of story. Turan lives a secluded life on the outskirts of an obscure, forgotten village. His mother passed away years ago. The morning after he obliterates that demon tiger, an angry mob of villagers arrives at his doorstep with pitchforks and bad intentions. They are hunting for a scapegoat for Rabbis' gruesome death, and they've already pinned the target right on Turan. He's genuinely stunned by how fast these idiots managed to blame him. One hothead grabs Turan by his shirt and spits the accusation right into his face. They claim he murdered the old man himself and made up a fake story about a non-existent monster to cover his tracks. Turan loses all patience and bluntly tells them they're a bunch of pathetic fools. Infuriated, the leader loses his temper and swings a wild punch at him. Turan effortlessly dodges the blow, realizes these clowns only understand violence, and drops a brutal headbutt that knocks the guy out instantly. The idiot behind him lifts a wooden club, only to get dropped to the ground like a sack of rocks. A third villager attempts to hit him, but Turan redirects his arm, forcing the guy to punch himself square in the face. Single-handedly, he lays every single one of them out in pure humiliation. A mob of fully grown men getting utterly crushed by an 18-year-old. Village women watch from nearby, wisely deciding not to step anywhere near the chaos. Turan head back inside to relax, but pretty soon, another knock echoes at his door. Thoroughly annoyed, he opens it up, but this time it isn't another brainless villager. Standing outside is a tall traveler, exuding an undeniable aura of authority. The man speaks politely, explaining that he's journeyed a massive distance to reach this location. Turan is about to direct him to the village and send him on his way, when the stranger's stomach lets out a thunderous growl. Cut to a few minutes later. The guy is sitting right at Turan's dining table chowing down, and that's where the real conversation starts. As Turan explains how he spent his entire life isolated in these woods, the visitor picks up on a subtle detail. Observing Turan's refined table manners, the stranger listens as Turan reveals his mother raised him in secret and passed down all her knowledge. Sadly, sickness took her life a few years ago. That's when the stranger drops a bombshell. He reveals he's actually a mage, dispatched on an official mission to eliminate a high-ranking monster lurking nearby. Keeping his cool, Turan nonchalantly mentions discovering the old man's dead body earlier. Mage begins connecting the dots out loud, remarking how weird it is that Turan remains completely unbothered despite a monster prowling his backyard. Not a trace of dread, nor even a moment of panic. Fixing Turan with a piercing gaze, the mage drops his friendly act and asks a pointed question. Who are you really? Quick flashback shows a younger Turan asking his mom why his magic must remain a complete secret. His mother blames the corrupt nobility, an answer that only leaves the young kid more bewildered. She uses an analogy. If nobles act as the shepherds, then the knights are merely their sheep. Nobles might pamper their sheep like family, but when push comes to shove, they won't hesitate to slaughter them for profit. She vows never to let him suffer that dark fate, asking if he'd rather stay safely hidden at her side. When the little guy eagerly nods, she makes it crystal clear. no one must ever discover his magic. She warns that other mages would gladly ruin their lives and turn him into a mindless puppet if they ever caught wind of his power. She leaves him with a chilling warning. Keeping the secret might one day require him to kill. Back in the present, Tyran realizes his entire existence is about to be put through the ultimate trial. Tyran senses that this strange traveler is actively trying to trap him into a confession. Guest observes the young host remaining entirely tight-lipped. Chuckling, the traveler remarks that the joke loses its flavor when Tyran looks so dead serious. Tyran isn't laughing, shooting back that he doesn't find suspicious interrogations funny at all. Faking absolute composure, Tyran adds that it's his first time hearing anyone crack jokes about dangerous mages. Guest laughs it off and apologizes, admitting Tyran's intense reaction was just too priceless to pass up. He formally introduces himself as Kjorn, a wandering nomad. Exchanging pleasantries, Tyran and Kjorn lock hands in a firm handshake. Both men feel a spark of mutual respect forming between them right at that table. Over a table piled with food, they swap stories about their backstories and true ages. The 18-year-old boy and the 65-year-old veteran chat naturally about how ridiculously slowly mages age. Curious, Tyran inquires how an experienced guy like him ended up living as a wandering nomad. Bjorn reveals that after devoting 65 years of service to a prominent noble house, he simply wanted to wander the world freely. It had been ages since Tyran enjoyed a genuine, warm conversation with anyone, let alone someone this pleasant. He hadn't realized how therapeutic and fun a simple chat could actually feel. He gets so utterly lost in conversation that dawn breaks before they even realize it. Wrapping up their morning catch-up, the nomad places a shiny Arabian silver coin on the wood, insisting it covers his breakfast. Tyran gratefully pockets the coin and wishes his new companion success on his monster hunt. Kjorn smiles, telling him not to treat this as a final farewell since he promises to drop by whenever he passes through the region. The scene shifts toward the tranquil, sunlit countryside. The landscape is filled with lush greenery and sprawling open pastures. We see the young shepherd back at work, calling out to gather his flock. Sheep respond instantly to his commands, marching in order right toward their designated pen. Tyran drifts off into thought, realizing he has never encountered anyone quite like Kjorn in his entire life. He genuinely appreciated the man's company, finding his relaxed, natural humor surprisingly refreshing. Kjorn left such a strong impression that Tyran considers him far superior to any adult he's ever crossed paths with. Guiding his animals, Tyran reminds himself of his mother's warning. Knights are nothing more than heartless hunting dogs bred to serve arrogant lords. He assumes their paths won't cross again anyway, believing all the monsters in the vicinity have already been dealt with. Meanwhile, out in the woods, the nomad quickly picks up on the total absence of wild beasts. Bjorn discovers obvious marks from a fierce duel, yet he can't detect a single monster's presence nearby. It becomes blatantly obvious that whatever dangerous creature lived here was recently slaughtered. Remnants of devastating impact marks lie scattered all across the forest floor. Glancing up at shredded tree trunks, Kjorn wonders if the village chief secretly hired another spellcaster behind his back. Either way, with the primary threat cleared out, the region should settle back into peaceful calm. Out of nowhere, an intense, suffocating aura washes over him, making his veteran eyes widen in utter shock. He spins around frantically, scanning his surroundings to pinpoint the source of this overwhelming power. A creature emerges with giant paws and a sheer, terrifying aura that chills him to the bone. The beast is hideously deformed, reeking of stench, and radiating enough raw mana to duel continuously for 48 hours straight. This nightmare is definitely a monster specter, a dark residual shadow, and Kjorn wonders who on earth could have spawned such a monstrosity. He doesn't have a second to deliberate, because lingering here any longer means getting ripped to shreds. The battle explodes into action as the specter swings its titanic paw, forcing Kjorn to leap out of harm's way. Displaying elite reflexes, he dodges the deadly sweep in the blink of an eye. As he locks eyes with the beast, he remembers the golden rule. Failing to absorb or cleanse a slain monster's core causes its leftover mana to warp into a specter. Every seasoned monster hunting mage knows this basic rule, yet the fight rages on wildly. It's undeniable that whoever took down the original tiger had to be a powerful mage. What boggles Kjorn's mind is why this mysterious killer abandoned the carcass. Were they completely ignorant of specter formation, or just plain reckless? Evading several more vicious swipes while priming his countermagic, he realizes no novice warrior could have taken down the original beast. There is definitely a deeper secret at play here, but right now, his duty as a hunter demands he destroy this monstrosity. Kjorn channels his magic to summon a glowing mana spear, locking his sights on ending this threat once and for all. Before his spear can connect, the unexpected occurs. His spell gets utterly negated in midair. Cold sweat breaks out as he realizes the specter's raw mana capacity dwarfs his own power. Suddenly, the creature dissolves into a pool of pitch-black sludge, vanishing into thin air. Realizes with dread that this beast possesses high intelligence, deliberately distorting spells using its own dark energy. The hunter has officially become the hunted, as the creature stalks its prey. Shadowy Titan materializes right behind his shoulder, waiting for the perfect split second to tear him apart. Thanks to decades of combat experience, Kjorn senses the killing intent and reacts just in time. This beast is completely beyond Kjorn's pay grade. Taking down a calamity like this would require at least a low-ranking noble mage. During the intense exchange, a brutal swipe connects, sending Kjorn crashing hard. He never envisioned facing an apocalyptic specter in some backwater rural borderland. Staring death in the face, he dryly accepts that life always finds ways to catch you off guard. But he glares back defiantly, refusing to bow his head and die without a final fight. Gritting his teeth, he resolves that if his time has come, he's dragging this demon to hell alongside him. Pumping every drop of his remaining mana into his right palm, he prepares to spear the beast the instant it lunges. Against an opponent this lethal, his timing must be pinpoint precise. Channeling his entire reservoir, he primes a colossal explosion of flame. This is the final clash between man and beast, a winner-take-all battle to the death. Just as tensions peak, a brilliant azure light flashes across the tree line. Before Kjorn can release his spell, an outside force strikes first, obliterating the specter with insane force. The veteran is rendered completely speechless, staring at the wreckage in sheer disbelief. Within a split second, the horrifying giant drops dead without Kjorn lifting a finger. Scanning the clearing frantically, he tries to spot his mysterious savior. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out, teasing that while the shepherd's story was great, this dramatic save had far better timing. His hero is none other than the farm boy he just shared breakfast with, strutting over with absolute swagger. Kjorn finds it mind-boggling that they spent the entire night chatting without the kid ever hinting he was a master spellcaster. Unable to hold back, he asks why Tyran kept his unbelievable talent completely hidden. Tyran just shrugs with supreme nonchalance, replying he could have easily left him to rot if he wanted. As the words leave his mouth, Tyran recalls the unexpected warmth this stranger extended to him over breakfast. He remembered a moment from his past when he drove off a vicious wolf targeting the local livestock. Back then, he had questioned why anyone would go out of their way to protect powerless strangers. Their chat turned toward how someone blessed with such absurd strength could easily line their pockets with fortune. But the nomad's philosophical response left young Tyran stumped, explaining he simply puts himself in the shoes of the defenseless. He spoke passionately about helpless border villagers living in constant terror without a single guardian. Back in those days, Tyran held a completely cynical worldview. He argued fiercely that possessing raw muscle doesn't automatically obligate anyone to babysit the weak. Kjorn countered that mages inherit divine gifts, so they carry a duty to shield ordinary folks with pride. In truth, however, few mages lived by that moral compass, as everyone harbored their own selfish motives. That's precisely why Tyran throws Kjorn's logic right back in his face, reminding him everyone lives by their own code. Mid-conversation, both men are suddenly slammed by a terrifying wave of violent mana. The veteran mage barks a stern warning, telling Tyran to listen carefully because this upcoming threat is far beyond their league. He stresses that unless you carry noble bloodline power, battling a monster of this magnitude is suicide. Locking eyes with the specter's glowing green gaze, Kjorn orders Tyran to run to the village chief and evacuate the locals. He vows to stall the nightmare solo, forcing a confident facade even though he knows he'll be dead within minutes. Tyran pretends to listen, but his senses pick up a dramatic shift, altering the atmosphere. A plain pebble near his boot begins vibrating violently as pure mana surges through it. Glancing sideways, Kjorn realizes this mountain kid is casually charging up firepower capable of crushing threats that terrify actual nobles. Realization hits the veteran knight like a freight train, leaving his eyes wide with stunned awe. He isn't just making a casual buddy in some forgotten backwater town, nor is this simply the tragic defiance of a runaway knight's offspring. What he's witnessing right before his eyes is the legendary birth of a monster mage, destined to reshape the entire world. Now Tyran steps directly into the monster's path. He coolly remarks that he's always wanted a real opportunity to test his absolute limits. Dorn shouts back that talent aside, this creature's sheer stats are completely off the charts. He insists that their only prayer of surviving is coordinating a joint attack. Before they can formulate a plan, a massive shockwave strike comes hurtling toward them. Bjorn sparks a yellow defense barrier, only to realize his reflexes are too sluggish to even keep up with the onslaught. He lowers his hands, admitting his defensive magic is completely useless here. Now, his only choice is putting absolute faith in Tyran's absurd potential as the youth prepares to strike. Tyran pauses briefly, analyzing the specter's movements with razor focus. Turan mutters under his breath that physical impacts aren't leaving a dent. Kjorn yells that raw physical force can never destroy an ethereal specter body. The beast bearing down, Turan asks what element can actually disintegrate it. Kjorn calls out that fire works wonders, so Turan immediately sparks a flame, adding that lightning would devastate it too. Turan hurls a blazing torrent of fire straight into the monster's core. Turan grumbles when the specter absorbs it, but Kjorn corrects him that his elemental choice wasn't the problem. Kjorn realizes with a shock that wielding elemental magic requires basic mana manipulation. Does this prodigy not even know the fundamentals? Suddenly, a massive revelation strikes Kjorn like a bolt of thunder. He remembers that Turan was the sole slayer who slaughtered the original beast and triggered the specter spawning, which means Turan has literally never formally absorbed or refined mana in his entire life. Blast of Force sends Turan tumbling backward. Kjorn screams at him to stop, just holding the flame, and blast it out immediately. Turan wastes 0 seconds, leaping right back into action. Begins gathering an intense inferno right in his palm. Summoning sparks is easy, but commanding a wild inferno requires intense discipline. Turan lifts his arm high as the flames roar into a roaring inferno. Refusing to hesitate, he locks his posture firmly onto the earth. Bracing for recoil, he unleashes the towering stream of fire straight into the specter. The attack engulfs the wraith, its glowing green core shining brightly through the sea of fire. To end it, the specter must be totally incinerated down to nothing. Kjorn shouts for Turan to hold his focus, pouring continuous mana to keep the blaze raging. Their singular goal is burning the specter to fine gray ash. Amidst the roar of inferno, Turan's face shifts into sheer, ruthless determination. Pumping every ounce of his power, the fireball swells into a giant apocalyptic firestorm. Kjorn watches in awe and pride, knowing this unbelievable kid has won a hard-fought victory. A crisis that normally demanded high-ranking nobility was just solved by a kid from the mountains. He can hardly believe that a completely green kid actually managed to take down a monster like that. Now that the battle is settled, Turan looks over at the knight and asks if they're finally out of danger. The knight quickly warns him that if he wants to avoid attracting another wraith, he has to absorb its leftover mana immediately. He breaks down the process, instructing Turan to angle his hand just a bit and picture the power draining straight into him. Taking his words to heart, Turan shuts his eyes and settles his breathing to clear his thoughts. Gradually, he begins to sense a strange green current of mana seeping into his system. Having never absorbed power before, Turan finds the rush absolutely mind-blowing. As the pure energy surges inside him, his eye color flickers for just a brief moment. It feels like a wave of energy is rushing through every single core point in his body simultaneously. Experiencing that raw power firsthand, Turan gets his very first real taste of what mana truly feels like. Knight casually notes how intoxicating that sensation can be, but then stops dead in his tracks, staring in shock. It suddenly clicks for him that Turan wasn't kidding. This actually was his first time ever absorbing mana. He knows that once someone awakens, their mana reserves usually take ages to expand, making monster hunting or fighting mages the only quick way to scale up. The knight is utterly stunned, realizing for a fact that the boy had 0 prior experience with this. It can only mean one thing. Turan is sitting on an unreal amount of untapped talent. The knight speaks up to get his attention. He calls out once more, placing a hand over his heart. He apologizes for underestimating him and asks about his noble lineage. Turan simply responds that he comes from the house of Kjorn. Right after, he suggests they focus on wrapping up the mess around them before talking any further. Short time passes, and we see the Duke relocated to a quieter spot. Knight offers a sincere apology for his harsh tone and for letting someone of such high potential do grunt work. Closing his eyes, Turan dismisses the praise, telling him he's just a simple shepherd who never even met his own dad. Looking a bit irked, the man tells Turan to drop that humble expression. He genuinely can't wrap his head around why a mage with this much raw talent is living as a lowly shepherd. He adds, with all due respect, that such a modest life doesn't fit him in the slightest. Turan reveals it was his mother's dying wish, explaining she made him promise to stay hidden like this until her final days. He mentions that had he ever shown the world he was a mage, people would have simply exploited him and tossed him aside. Nodding in understanding, the man admits his mother was remarkably sharp for thinking that far ahead. Turan catches himself off guard, confessing he assumed the knight would write her off as overly paranoid. But the man doubles down that she was spot on. Dropping his head, the knight explains how powerful mages are constantly pulled into endless power struggles, recalling a devastating war between 2 major houses 2 decades ago. He details the clash between his own masters, House Arabian, and the formidable House Zahar, a war that claimed countless lives. A force of roughly 3,000 Arabian knights, nearly a third were wiped out on the battlefield. Turan remains silent as the knight opens up, sharing that every single person he cared about ended up in that fallen third. Nostalgically brings up his friend Denver, who dreamed of running a laundry business post-war, and his old instructor, who never stopped nagging him to keep training. Neither survived. His whole family perished as well, crushed under House Zahar's campaign, leaving him as the lonely survivor of his lineage. Bowing his head again, he insists that Tiran's mother knew the truth. A warrior's life can get snuffed out way faster than a simple peasant's. He notes that the only flaw in her reasoning was vastly underestimating just how insanely gifted Tiran actually is. Rubbing the back of his neck, he awkwardly confesses that Tiran wiped out the monster's spirit with ease, a feat he couldn't pull off himself. He argues that Tiran's capabilities far outclass any typical soldier, putting him squarely on par with high-ranking nobility. Studying Tiran intently, he reinforces the point that his talent is ridiculously off the charts. Tiran brings up how his mom always claimed his dad was a knight, though he now suspects that was just a story. Standing to his feet, the knight urges Tiran to leave this lonely mountain behind and step out to see the real world. He points out that while society revolves around knights and aristocrats, humans aren't actually at the top of the food chain in this world. He believes there's almost certainly a shadow power calling the shots behind the powerful lineages. It was that very puppet master that engineered the Great War, systematically destroying most of the involved noble houses. Veteran knight chuckles and apologizes, remembering that young Tiran is still pretty clueless about the broader mechanics of magic. He gets why the kid is bursting with questions regarding his true origins and bloodline. He insists that uncovering the truth is something Tiran owes to himself, and the only way to get answers is to face the world headfirst. He vows to stand by Tiran's side and mentor him as he embarks on this path of discovering who he really is. He reminds him that an enormous, unexplored world is out there, just waiting for him to step into it. All Tiran needs to do now is walk away from this secluded spot and start living with a fresh drive. Having spent 65 years chasing his own path, he has plenty of wisdom to open the boy's eyes to how big the world truly is. He cautions Tiran that he'll inevitably clash with fighters far beyond his level, but every single encounter should be treated as a valuable lesson. Tiran hangs on every word, soaking in all the wisdom the veteran passes down. Up until now, after all, he'd never had anyone willing to sit down and teach him the bare basics of magic. Even so, he finds it odd that a warrior connected to a rival faction is being so unbelievably open and helpful. To the veteran, however, this kid is anything but a foe. Simply the young man who stepped in, saved his hide, and patched up his injuries. He goes on to clarify that unique abilities are inherited bloodline traits passed down from their ancestors, the Freyans. Points out that certain spells look surprisingly basic and smooth once a proper mage casts them. Tiran clarifies that he isn't some monster. He just possesses a mage's natural physical stats and channels mana to boost his speed. He adds that he has a super keen sense of smell and a knack for throwing rocks, pondering if those are hints toward his heritage. Knight notes that pinpoint accuracy with projectile weapons is a trademark of House Arabian, though plenty of other elite houses share that trait. Out of nowhere, Tiran watches the old man's face turn dead serious as something dawns on him. There's clearly one specific noble family whose bloodline directly accounts for Tiran's skill set. Grown visibly tense, the knight realizes he must belong to one of the great houses, the infamous clan known as the Stalkers or Hunters. They were none other than the Zahar clan, the bitter enemies who fought against House Arabian in the disastrous war. Hearing this utterly crushes Tiran, as it was the absolute worst possible connection he could have made. After surviving so much, discovering he might be tied to the enemy was the ultimate buzzkill. Her disbelief is plastered straight across his face. Tiran glances at his companion, sinking into the awkward reality that he carries the blood of the men who destroyed his mentor's life. He struggles to find the words to apologize, knowing deep down he shouldn't take the blame for atrocities committed by relatives he never knew. Kjorn quickly picks up on how awkward and uneasy the boy feels, so Kjorn places a reassuring hand on Tiran's shoulder and gently tells him not to beat himself up. Tiran breathes a sigh of relief when Kjorn admits he hated being part of that senseless war in the first place. Kjorn shrugs it off, explaining that the conflict was purely the foolish mess of older generations. Though relieved, Tiran still wonders if the old veteran feels any second thoughts about letting a rival bloodline walk free into the world. With a somber expression, the elder admits that pursuing strength beyond the mountain will naturally bring Tiran face to face with the Zahar family. He recognizes the boy's terrifying potential, but ultimately states that he chooses to put his faith in him. Kjorn brings up the pure compassion Tiran showed by saving his life, even at the risk of blowing his lifelong cover. He reasons that if a good-hearted kid like Tiran takes a high place in the Zahar house, it might actually prevent another brutal war. The two exchange farewells, quietly wrapping up their heavy conversation. Deep down, though, both of them know their paths will cross again. Even after pushing Tyran to blaze his own trail, the old knight can't quite shake off his worry. Still, it warms his heart to see Tyran stepping down the mountain for all the right reasons. Kjorn can tell the boy has made his choice and stands firmly behind it. Tyran insists to the veteran that he won't take a single step forward until both of their injuries are completely cleared up. He proposes using their extra downtime for the veteran to share a few pro tips on mana control. Relying on his years of experience, Kjorn explains that mana is frequently described as the key to absolute power. He clarifies it's not literal godhood, but to cast spells effectively, your mana signature has to align with the element. He breaks down magic mastery into 3 distinct factors: bloodline, element affinity, and casualty. Tyran learns that the first core element is birthright, which applies heavily to aristocratic mages rather than standard combat knights. Bjorn illustrates this by explaining how ridiculously hard it would be for Tyran to heal his own wounds via magic. On the flip side, people born with Southern Revista blood can heal injuries instantly without breaking a sweat or training. Taking in the lesson, Tyran figures out that affinity simply measures how naturally attuned you are to an element. Basically, a spellcaster can execute certain magic far more smoothly if they naturally prefer or practice that specific style. Knight points out that if Tyran had attempted to cast standard fire magic earlier, it wouldn't have matched his recent speed or firepower. Glancing at a wooden cup of water, Kjorn reveals that the third principle, casualty, is the most crucial, even if it baffles him too. Tests the boy, asking what he thinks would occur if he tried to shatter the mug using pure, unrefined mana. Kjorn gathers energy in his palms to demonstrate what occurs when the element of casualty is missing. Clarifies that, without a direct logical trigger or cause, achieving your intended magic result becomes vastly harder. The kid nods, admitting he pretty much grasps the general concept. Tyran uses his own fire as an example, remarking that it's like finding a natural reason for the flames to go out. Hearing that sharp breakdown, the veteran smiles proudly, thinking the kid would make a genius scholar rather than just a mage. Still curious, Tyran asks if this logic means he could command regular beasts whenever he felt like it. Knight clarifies that magical creatures respond to that specific link due to his unique mana signature. Even after catching the general drift, Tyran still finds the inner workings of magic a total headache to fully wrap his mind around. When he inquires if the Zahar family holds signature traits, the old knight confirms they excel in stealth operations and tracking target prey. With that set up, the veteran dares the boy to give that specific stealth skill a test run. Tyran takes the challenge happily, knowing that learning to stay hidden will keep unwanted eyes off him on his travels. Closing his eyes, he focuses deeply on completely erasing his scent and muffling every footstep. Vanishing into thin air right before the knight's eyes, Tyran asks if he executed it right. The old knight is utterly dumbfounded that the kid nailed a high-level stealth skill on his absolute first shot. Gathering his composure, the veteran confirms that he pulled off the concealment technique flawlessly. He glances around frantically, trying to spot even a microsignal of where Tyran is standing. In reality, Tyran had slipped entirely off the sensory radar, vanishing completely from sight. A second later, the boy calmly steps back into visibility. Veteran sighs, mentioning it's been ages since he last witnessed that bloodline power in action, remarking how genuinely terrifying and cold-blooded the skill feels. He recalls how Arabian knights were deathly afraid of this move during the war because it felt utterly broken and unfair. He clarifies that Tyran isn't literally see-through, which is why he offers to teach him proper control methods to refine it. Tyran is puzzled by how generous the old man is being, wondering why he's schooling a wizard linked to his sworn enemies. The old knight, however, doesn't look at it through that lens at all. To him, he's simply repaying the debt to the savior who pulled him back from death's door. Sometime later, the bald chief of the village can't wrap his head around the kid, suddenly trying to sell off his flock and abandon town. Seeing how set in his ways Tyran is, the old chief whines about who will herd the flock now, complaining that walking out without warning is totally unfair. Tyran bluntly tells him that replacing the shepherd is their headache, not his. He demands a fair price for his sheep, dropping a cold ultimatum that he'll unleash the whole herd into the wild if they refuse. He warns them that trying to recapture a wild herd on their own will be a complete nightmare. The chief knows Tyran isn't bluffing. He's smart, dangerous, and sticks to his threats. Realizing that pissing off the boy brings zero benefit, the villagers bite the bullet and hand over the requested cash. Pocketing the payment, Tyran calmly steps away alongside his new veteran companion. Tyran notices the villagers skipped paying his buddy a reward, offering to turn back and beat it out of them. His companion brushes it off, insisting he doesn't want a dime since Tyran did all the heavy lifting taking down the beast. Tyran gives a quick shrug, deciding he doesn't give a damn about their coin either. Eventually, the moment arrives for the duo to part paths. Kjorn apologizes for declining the offer to join forces, admitting he operates far better as a lone wolf. Though Tyran had warmed to the idea of a partner, he takes the rejection in stride, figuring a solo journey builds character anyway. Veteran simply bids him to watch his back and build a life free of regrets. Tyran calls back, wishing for a reunion under far better circumstances down the road. Boy remains rooted on the path, tracking Kjorn's silhouette until it completely disappears over the horizon. Only then does it hit him why the warrior refused to act formal around him. Despite his mother showering him with love, Tyran had quietly longed for a father figure to guide him. He craved a role model to look up to, a blueprint for the kind of warrior he aspired to be. Narrative cuts to a completely dried up, lifeless desert expanse. Fresh tracks mark the dusty soil across the abandoned Badlands. Tyran trudges forward steadily, navigating his way deeper into the bleak Badlands. Feeling a strange shift in the air, he pauses to scan his surroundings. He gazes up into the open sky, buried in his thoughts. Far off on the horizon, he spots a caravan of traveling merchants drifting from settlement to settlement. Tyran breathes a sigh of relief, happy to finally run into living souls. He chooses to approach the caravan and request directions. One of the men barks at him for stepping into their path, so Tyran calmly clarifies he's a lost traveler seeking the nearest settlement. Scanning him up and down, the men mention that following the trail behind them leads straight into near town. Tyran thanks them and steps aside, but before he can move a muscle, one bandit blocks his exit and orders him to freeze. The thug scoffs, asking if he genuinely believed directions out here came free of charge. Tyran cocks an eyebrow asking for clarification, and the guy grins, stating that nothing in the desert comes without a trade-off. On cue, the rest of the gang unsheaths their blades, with one shouting for Tyran to drop his pack immediately. Tyran calmly asks if he's dealing with a bunch of highway robbers. The leader laughs at his cluelessness, mocking him for forgetting they are trapped in a dead desert where corpses vanish forever. Brandishing his weapon, the boss orders him to surrender his luggage and beat it while he's still feeling merciful, claiming looting a dead body is too much work. Tyran eyes the boss, dryly pointing out that thugs who go around murdering travelers rarely get a happy fairytale ending. In that instant, he flashes back to a key lesson shared by his old mentor. He mentally revisits the precise instructions on manipulating his internal mana reserves. His companion's advice rings loud and clear inside his head. Tyran smirks silently, deciding these foolish bandits will make the ultimate live target practice. He locks his eyes onto the group, tracking their movements. The thugs aim their steel directly at Tyran, bursting into laughter while mocking him for grandstanding like some hotshot wizard. The flick of his wrist, Tyran triggers his arcane power, whips up a fierce vortex of wind that instantly scoops all the thugs into the air. He observes that guiding the wind's shape manually, before amplifying its force, consumes drastically less mana. Tyran never expected to whip up such a massive gust with minimal effort, but before he can even digest that, the bandits begin picking themselves up. Without missing a beat, Tyran readies his next attack, grabbing his canteen to manipulate the water stored within it. He molds the hovering liquid into deadly, razor-sharp tips. Within seconds, that liquid freezes solid into lethal ice spears. Catching sight of this magic, one of the thugs totally loses his mind in terror. Before the guy can even turn to flee, the icy projectile hits him squarely in the face. Even with the successful hit, Tyran finds the spell underwhelming, figuring that hurling basic stones would have saved much more effort. Gang leader instantly falls to his knees, swearing they didn't realize he was a sorcerer and pleading for his life. As the chief stays busy begging and offering all their loot for survival, a few sneaky henchmen try to creep up behind Tyran. Tyran, however, catches the sound of their approaching footsteps and readies his leg. Slamming his foot down, he summons jagged stone spires straight out of the soil, skewering every single ambusher instantly. The boss's jaw drops in utter disbelief. He can't wrap his head around how a single person could possess such terrifying strength. Terror freezes him solid as he gazes around at his entire squad wiped out on the floor. Stepping up to the trembling leader, Tyran calmly announces that he has a quick question for him. He inquires why they were dumb enough to attack blindly, given that any random wanderer out here could turn out to be a spellcaster. Chieftain admits it was simply because Tyran had bowed politely to them. He points out that despite their disrespect, Tyran still bowed down and gave a humble greeting, which led the gang to assume he was merely a helpless pushover. Tyran offers a polite thank you, noting that he actually gained a valuable lesson from that mistake. The thug begs one last time for his life, but all hope vanishes the second he notices a stray water drop floating right above his forehead. Right then, a crucial tip from Kjorn flashes through Tyran's mind. Kjorn had warned him never to show sympathy to criminals, since they'd turn right around and harm innocent folks. Glancing down at an item on the surface, Turan realizes why people handle thugs with such absolute coldness. It dawns on him that letting a single villain live might directly result in several innocent lives being lost. Looking at the defeated leader on the floor, Turan remarks that he's burned far too much time here already. He begins tracking the wagon wheel grooves left behind in the mud. Even so, his mind keeps returning to the act he just committed. After all, this was the very first time he'd ever ended another person's life. A wave of guilt hits Turan, yet he understands that releasing them was impossible after Kjorn's explicit warning. Anyone who loots and slaughters without a second thought is bound to target more victims down the road. As the wagon trails disappear, Turan's anxiety subsides while he rehearses Kjorn's wisdom in his head. Reaching the end of the path, a massive, unfamiliar realm reveals itself right in front of him. Turan is completely blown away at the sheer scale of the entire location. This vibrant settlement is known as the town of Marais. Massive crowds are constantly streaming back and forth across the lively avenues. The overwhelming spectacle catches Turan off guard, as he's never witnessed this many people gathered together. Even the design of the structures looks drastically different from anything in his hometown. He mentally notes that this place truly matches what a real city should feel like. He walks up toward a nearby fruit vendor's cart. The shopkeeper asks what he wants to buy, but Turan clarifies that he isn't shopping today. He recalls Kjorn instructing him to locate an inn to catch his breath immediately upon arrival. Irritated, the merchant barks at him to get lost if he isn't spending any coin. Turan finds the merchant remarkably harsh, musing whether city law requires buying produce just to ask simple directions. He gestures to a piece of fruit to ask the cost, and the seller quotes 2 ducat. Spotting the puzzled look on Turan's face, the vendor adds that he takes different coins as well. Handing over the money, Turan inquires about the direction to the closest inn. The seller gestures down the road, mentioning that it happens to be the largest tavern around. Stepping inside the establishment, a staff member steps up to welcome him. He immediately asks her for the rate of a single night's stay. She promptly informs him that a room will set him back 16 ducat. Turan accepts the fee and hands over the required cash right away. Immediately after, he checks if any local beasts currently have active bounties placed on them. Turan realizes hunting creatures is essential to harvest mana while earning a steady income. Noticing her silence, Turan stares and asks why she's holding back her answer. The staffer flashes a smirk, reminding him that information never comes free in this world. After Turan shells out the cash for the intel, she directs him to City Hall, though Turan, utterly lost, asks what a City Hall even is. The staffer is totally stunned that he doesn't know such a basic location. She clarifies that City Hall is the central hub, managing all official matters for the township. She notes that it's likely shut down for the night, suggesting he visit first thing tomorrow. She then asks whether he's a monster hunter, but Turan remains completely clueless about the term. She elaborates that ordinary folks hunt beasts in hopes of becoming mages, inquiring if that's his ultimate goal. She quips that anyone foolish enough to buy into those urban legends is a total fool. Out of nowhere, a guy standing nearby interrupts, claiming it's no myth since he witnessed it with his own eyes. Staffer's face lights up as she asks Maidan if he's still kicking, to which he retorts he won't die until he turns into a mage. Uncomfortable with Maidan resting a hand on his shoulder, Turan scowls, prompting Maidan to back off and apologize fast. Intrigued, Turan requests the stranger to share more details about how that magic transformation works. Maidan breaks down how mages grow powerful by harvesting monster mana, claiming ordinary humans can awaken magic the exact same way. Gesticulating toward his group, Maidan mentions that the 4 of them party up specifically to achieve that goal together. When Turan asks if any of them have succeeded, they admit none have, adding that only the Lord and his elite trio wield magic here. Maidan wonders aloud how Turan manages to slay beasts with his setup, requesting a glance at his weapon. Turan pulls out his slingshot, prompting Maidan to comment that its battle-tested wear proves Turan sees plenty of action. Maidan chuckles, remarking that a tool like that is only good for hunting small game like rabbits and foxes. He proceeds to extend an invitation for Turan to join their squad as their dedicated marksman. Turan thanks him politely, but turns down the invitation without hesitation. Later that night in bed, Turan reflects that teaming up with those guys wouldn't benefit him at all. He ponders just how insanely eventful his day turned out to be. It still feels surreal to him that he truly packed up and left his home village behind. He speculates on what kind of future awaits him going forward. Catching a sudden sound, he snaps upright in bed and calls out, demanding to know who's lurking outside. Remembering Kjorn's advice, he doubts whether he genuinely needs to keep his guard up inside an inn room. In his flashback, Kjorn confirms it, warning that cities are rarely as secure as they appear. Kjorn sternly advises him never to drop his vigilance for even a single second. Nearing the doorway, Turan readies a spell behind his back with his free hand. Yanking the door open, he comes face to face with the late-night intruder. The guest turns out to be Lena, who innocently asks if she woke him up. She smirks, claiming she figured he might be feeling chilly, and offered to keep him warm. She begins playfully, pitching her special nighttime services to him. When he inquires what she means, she chuckles, replying that it's precisely what it seems. She lays out that for a modest fee, she's willing to cater to his every desire. Though she ponders if he's disinterested, she quickly brushes it off, assuming he's merely playing hard to get. She teases that his secret cravings are painted clear across his expression. Regardless of her teasing, Turan's expression stays totally expressionless, resembling a peaceful monk. Turan recalls how intensely serious Kjorn sounded when cautioning him against girls hawking those arrangements. Keeps Kjorn's advice in mind to stay extra wary of the maids and hostesses hanging around inns. Kjorn used to explain that mana users rarely get sick themselves, yet they can effortlessly spread diseases to unsuspecting partners. He urged Turan not to let dirty impulses blind him, reminding him that urban existence is brutal. Once the lady stomps off in anger, Turan lays back down, realizing he was asked to pay for simple chats both at the stall and now in his room. It appears townspeople demand money for every single exchange, convincing him that urban folks are completely cold-hearted. While Turan sits lost in his thoughts, a few thugs disgruntled by his attitude start marching up the staircase. The crew boss remarks that Turan looks weak but runs his mouth off, turning him into ideal monster bait. Reflecting on his youth, the boss feels slightly uneasy seeing Turan rely on that particular weapon. Calculates that if Turan retains even a fraction of that legendary talent, he'll make it out alive, since he's actually the renowned hunter Midam. Inside his quarters, Turan second-guesses himself, pondering if city dwellers might not be so ruthless deep down. If that holds true, he's genuinely eager to discover what experiences await him next. Before he knows it, dawn breaks and the next morning kicks off. The moment Turan reaches his destination, someone calls out to welcome him. He quietly questions if the guy waiting there happens to be an official representative. Turan boldly declares that he's arrived to slay some monsters. Whenever he meets cold hostility, Turan recalls the old master's advice that the world rarely treats anyone gently. Mentor noted that nobody offers kindness without reason, though he shared a simple trick to force respect. Simply revealing your status as a mage is enough to make commoners revere you like a deity. Keeping this in mind, Turan inspects the flyer presented to him, planning to glance at it before returning it. Unable to keep the flyer, Turan examines the sketch of the targeted beast intently. The sketch depicts a sinister-looking giant crow creature. Barely acknowledging Turan, the officer scoffs that he'll likely fail, but demands proof of the kill should he somehow succeed. Clarifies that if a magic user doesn't dissolve the beast's remains with mana, the carcass turns into a wraith. He emphasizes that abandoning a slain monster body is a capital offense, resulting in execution. Turan is well aware of this rule, knowing full well the horrors that occur when they shift into wraiths. Memorizing the creature's features, Turan returns the notice and inquires if knights participate in monster hunts as well. Sensing the guy is dismissive and won't offer a proper reply, Turan figures it's best to simply walk away. A few seconds later, the official snaps back to reality, realizing Turan had cut the conversation short and left. Watching the boy walk off, the official writes him off as dead meat, never expecting him back, only for Turan to slam the dead beast down right in front of him shortly after. The entire room gazes on in pure disbelief, completely unable to process the sight. Onlookers scramble to figure out how a kid managed to slay and haul a monster of that caliber. Stunned official begins pelting Turan with relentless questions, turning it into a heated interrogation. Once Turan affirms that he took down the target single-handedly, he demands to know the reward amount. They promptly hand over the cash bounty to settle his payment for the completed contract. Even after settling up, the bystanders keep inspecting the corpse, stunned to find its wings completely undamaged. None of them had ever witnessed a blade-winged crow brought in with zero structural damage. Meanwhile, Turan remains standing patiently, clearly waiting for his next move. With that contract settled, he immediately inquires if there are more target monsters available. Turan keeps sending shockwaves straight through the local townspeople. Despite hearing his request loud and clear, the locals struggle to digest that he wants to go hunt even more. Pockets full of cash, Turan returns to his inn and orders a gargantuan feast. Staring at the pile of cleared dishes, Tyrell confesses she never imagined he possessed such overwhelming power. She's floored that he took down 30 beasts in a mere 3 days, earning a fortune while Turan simply ignores her and keeps devouring food. Turan then sets the record straight, explaining that cash isn't his primary motivation. Clarifies that harvesting monster mana is his true target, adding that this power boost is actively making him vastly stronger. She rambles on. Turan mentally calculates all the energy reserves he's absorbed up to this point. He notes his mana has exploded since his days with Kjorn, yet recognizes that hunting weak fodder has diminishing returns that will stall his growth soon. Shifting the topic, Tyran eyes the girl suspiciously, asking if she swiped a portion of his meal. She fires back that he cleared the whole tray himself, teasing how such a scrawny guy packs away so much food. Even the chef looks delighted watching a guest devour his dishes with such genuine enthusiasm. Tyran simply replies that he polished off the food because the meal was genuinely delicious. Suddenly, a heavy hand clamps onto Tyran's shoulder to cut him off. A couple of young thugs hover over him, demanding to know why he's hogging all the high-end meals. They mock that a skinny runt like him has no right gorging while sitting on a pile of hunt profits. One idiot suggests Tyran should spread his cash around, only to catch an instant counterpunch. Tyran has zero patience for bad jokes, and he despises random strangers getting overly cozy with him. He informs them that if they were seeking a donation, he just handed them a remarkably generous punch. Dude's buddies shout that Tyran shouldn't act high and mighty just because he scored one cheap shot. They charge forward together, promising to break him down and teach him a lesson. One attacker snatches a wooden chair to gain an unfair advantage in the brawl. Tyran snatches the airborne chair with ease and cocks his finger to flick the guy. He opts for a soft finger flick, confident that even minimal force will launch the idiot backwards. Despite being a tiny tap, the impact lands like a truck, dropping the guy flat onto his spine. Enraged by the destruction, the blonde receptionist screams that brawl scenes won't be tolerated, especially when broken tables come out of her pocket. Seething with fury, she warns the group that she won't give a second warning. Terrified by her explosive rage, the instigators drop their tempers and apologize instantly. A short while later, the dudes head up to Tyran's quarters to offer a sincere face-to-face apology. They swear it won't reoccur, admitting they acted out of pure envy since they hadn't earned a single coin in months. The entire party bows deeply, pleading for his pardon. They explain how brutally tough circumstances have been for them recently. They reveal they haven't even been capable of clearing their room rent for the past 3 days. Mulling over their plight, Tyran pulls out some coin to help clear their debts. He explains he's helping out as a gesture for their prior recruitment offer, though he reminds them that nothing in life comes without a price. Tyran demands full intel regarding the surrounding region in return for the cash drop. The boss accepts the offer immediately and begins spilling every detail he knows about the territory. Armed with fresh intel, Tyran selects his next target zone, resolving that his current hunt will be his final contract here. Now equipped with facts about the neighboring city, he concludes it's time to pack up and depart. Tyran credits Maidan for providing valuable insights, viewing him as a surprisingly helpful contact. While Maidan lacked Kjorn's seasoned wisdom, that lack of harshness made him significantly friendlier. Thought, Tyran's eyes snap wide as his senses detect an approaching presence nearby. His keen nose catches a faint scent, instantly giving away the direction he must head. Tyran dashes toward the smell, praying his gut is mistaken, yet fresh claw gouges on a trunk confirm his worst fears. He arrives a moment too late, surveying the gruesome scene from afar. Tyran spots a young fellow collapsed against a tree trunk, instantly identifying him as one of Maidan's companions. The fatal blow had already been struck. Glancing around, he discovers that the young hunter wasn't the only casualty of the attack. Tyran spots Maidan, the squad's leader, who suffered an equally brutal demise. Unaware of the exact sequence of events, he deduces that only an exceptionally powerful monster could have wrought this carnage. Drops to one knee to examine his companion's remains up close. Observing the body littered with brutal gashes, Tyran mutters aloud, asking what kind of nightmare unfolded here. He turns his head as the dying youth struggles to gasp out his final words. In a feeble, faint whisper, the boy croaks out that their attacker was a rabbit. Tyran catches sight of the creature gnawing on flesh, doubting whether that horrific thing could truly be called a rabbit. Perspective pulls back, bringing the monstrosity into full, horrifying focus. As it happily devours its meal, the creature overhears the humans branding it a monster. Tyran's eyes, the beast is nothing short of an absolute monstrosity, and the beast is already locking eyes on its next target. Tyran pivots around, trying to get a clearer view of the creature. Out of nowhere, the rabbit snaps into total attack mode and lunges straight at him. In a blink of an eye, the atmosphere turns dead serious. As the rabbit hits the dirt, Tyran realizes that blow missed his face by a hair's breadth. Not one to take hits lying down, Tyran preps a brutal counter to put this monster in its place. Going full focus, he cocks his free arm back and swings his weapon with everything he's got. He drops his assault onto the giant rodent, expecting to finish it, but the oversized pest holds its ground and gears up for a deadly strike back. Tyran inches closer to connecting a clean hit, yet the nimble beast deflects every blow coming its way. Dawns on Tyran that this creature is no stranger to fending off long-distance strikes. Visibly pissed off, the monster rockets itself right toward Tyran. It locks eyes with him, radiating pure venom through its wide, glowing red pupils. The creature tries to suffocate him with pressure to prevent an escape, only to discover Tyran is dangerously quick and absurdly strong. Touchdown. The monster stands completely stunned that its targeted meal somehow slipped away. Locked and loaded, Tyran launches high into the sky, poised to drop the hammer. Monster rabbit or not, Tyran makes sure he doesn't leave even a microsecond for a comeback. The moment his hit connects, Tyran leaps back to reevaluate, but his attack just turns the rabbit into a hungrier beast. Despite bleeding out, the creature charges Tyran again, only for him to disappear into thin air. Determined not to lose him, the rabbit literally bites an entire tree in half to clear its line of sight. Smarting from the injury and having lost its target, the beast completely loses its mind. Goes on a frantic rampage, throwing blind attacks that whip up a huge dust storm. Once the adrenaline fades, reality hits hard, and the monster lets out an ear-piercing shriek from the agony. Turns out, Tyran's hit had carved in much deeper than the beast initially felt. Moments later, the dust settles as the creature finally drops dead onto the dirt. Staring at the lifeless body, Tyran ponders how much sweet mana he can squeeze out of this kill. To the victor go the spoils, so Tyran extends his arms to siphon away every drop of its residual magic. The moment the energy hits his system, a massive surge of power rushes through his veins. He immediately registers that this yield blows whatever he drained from that leopard clean out of the water. He observes the flow in absolute awe, struggling to digest what's taking place. Just as he's wrapping up, a kid walks over and asks point-blank if Tyran is actually a mage. The youngster pushes, asking why he kept his true identity under wraps all along. He even asks if Tyran wants his stuff mailed to any living kin, similar to what the other wounded folks were setting up. Meanwhile, someone in the crowd stares closely at Tyran, getting a weird sense of recognition. Rewind a few hours. This exact kid had brought up that the huge nearby city of Orem possessed a massive library. He discussed how famous the spot was simply because of its absurdly huge repository of ancient texts. Second Tyran caught wind of how big that collection was. His ears perked right up. There was a catch, though. The kid clarified that entry was strictly locked to registered mages only. That detail threw a wrench in Tyran's gears, forcing him to rethink his next move. Flash forward to now, Tyran declares he's making a beeline for that major city. Looking utterly broken, the boy whispers the name of his buddy who didn't survive. Trudging off, he sends a quiet prayer that his buddy finds peace in the afterlife. Cut to later, Tyran is stuck standing in a ridiculously long queue outside the city gates. Loki feels cringe, thinking about how blown away he was by that tiny backwater village of Murray earlier. Towering right ahead of him stands the grand, majestic city of Orem. He seriously didn't anticipate this level of crowd, lining up just to cross the border. Observing how intensely the sentries are screening everyone, Tyran wonders if a manhunt is underway. He rationalizes that a metropolis of this scale naturally requires a tight defense protocol. Mid-thought, a harsh shout cuts through the air, telling him to freeze right in his tracks. Sentry points a finger at him, flat out denying him entry, which leaves Tyran utterly baffled. The guard trashes his appearance, calling his fit disgusting and telling him to get washed before coming back. Tyran zones out the guard's trash talk completely because a colossal structure, piercing the sky, steals his gaze. Standing tall, the massive spire practically screams the immense riches and status of the realm. It hits Tyran that this marvel has to be the legendary Library of Midden. The size of the monument is so ridiculous, he figures only high-tier sorcery could have pulled off its construction. When Tyran walks up to the gate, a guard barks at him, asking business he has here. The moment Tyran mentions entering, the guard cuts him off, repeating that this place is mages only. Nodding along, Tyran casually drops that he is a mage, leaving the sentry dead frozen. The guard scoffs, holding a hand out and warning him not to mess around, insisting a dirty guy like him couldn't possibly cast spells. Holding his position, a bright crimson aura begins flaring around the guard. It strikes Tyran that casters can automatically read each other's mana to register who holds the real power. Even so, Tyran looks visibly annoyed by this whole unnecessary flex. Guard makes an unhinged expression, straining hard to size up Tyran's actual magical depth. Irritated as he is, Tyran holds back, giving the guy room since it's standard procedure. However, the second he taps into Tyran's terrifying aura, the sheer backlash knocks him flat on his face, panicking his buddy. Sprawled out on the pavement, the fallen guard figures out this guy is far beyond a simple magic wielder. He must be royalty, or elite lord at the very least. Terrified, the surviving sentry bows, introducing himself as a knight of House Kenya, and nervously asks for Tyran's house name. Tyran raises an eyebrow, asking if drop naming is mandatory for access, and the guard backpedals instantly. Shaking in his boots, the guard clarifies that the Master of Voltas controls access, so he'll need to go clear it with House Voltas. Tyran lets out a heavy groan, foreseeing a massive administrative delay. He laments that red tape in a place like this could easily stretch a simple entry request into a decade-long wait. Adding insult to injury, he now finds himself forced to deal with a maid. The situation keeps worsening, as this staff member shadows his every footstep. Scratch that, an entire flock of maids is cornering him, and he's completely lost on how to handle it. Puts up with it as long as he can before snapping and telling them to beat it. The issue is, they plead that rejecting their service will get them brutally penalized by their masters. Cornered, Tyran throws his hands up and surrenders, letting them do as they please. After getting cleaned up, one of the maids stops dead in her tracks, completely mesmerized by him. Tapping her hands over her lips, she gasps out loud, mentioning his glow-up. Catching her mid-gaze, Tyran wipes his chin, asking if he has gunk on his mug. Blushing hard, she stammers an apology, confessing she was simply stunned by his stunning looks. Assuming she's just kissing up, Tyran cuts her off, telling them to drop the flattery and stop saying sorry. Glancing sideways, Tyran sighs, wondering what fresh trouble is walking in. Out of nowhere, a high-status young girl steps into the room with a bulky bodyguard following her. The redhead double-takes at Tyran's clean upgrade, recalling how he looked like a homeless dude earlier. She teases that a shower and proper drip somehow transformed him into royalty overnight. He introduces himself simply as Tyran, and she responds that she goes by Aisla. Standard noble protocol demands stating your house lineage, but Tyran prefers keeping his cards close to his chest. Aisla taps her chin playfully, sighing that his secrecy is a big disappointment. A mischievous smirk plays on her lips as she decides she's going to mess with him a bit. Suddenly, a warm, golden aura begins surging off her figure. It feels like every single person here is obsessed with flex-testing Tyran's magic output. Tyran looks utterly exhausted at having to play the stupid, dick-measuring contest again. Meeting her gaze, Tyran unleashes a deep blue aura right back at her. Blue force and golden waves collide in midair, creating intense pressure. Her bodyguard jumps in front of the staff, acting as a human barrier against the overwhelming shockwaves. Tyran lets out another heavy sigh, fed up with this non-stop petty clout chasing. A pleased smirk spreads across her face. Out of nowhere, she erupts into giggles at the entire encounter. The fiery-haired girl addresses Tyran directly. Striding right up to his face, she proposes to him without a single second of hesitation. Tyran's brain short-circuits on the spot, completely lost for words. He's genuinely trying to figure out if this chick is dead serious or trolling. Feeling a little awkward at his frozen stance, she pouts, asking why he's freaking out when she expected a simple shocked expression. Pivoting away, she drops a hint that the slot for her partner is vacant, so he better consider the offer. Tyran remains glued to his spot, watching her exit. The unexpected confrontation leaves him processing everything in deep contemplation. Staring at the floor, he tries to piece together the madness that just went down. Looking at his palm, Tyran spots a subtle tremble. He realizes her mana output matched his own, making him wonder if a mere human could really wield that kind of heat. Cut to an official study room. Tyran is standing across from a nobleman resting in a chair. The noble greets him and asks if Tyran has already figured out his title. After Tyran states his name, the lord asks if his visit is purely for the library. He chuckles, noting that most folks swing by searching for strange, obscure stuff. Tyran assures him he has no such interest, so the man advises that no clan secrets are buried in those archives regardless. Noting the late hour, the lord suggests Tyran turn in for the night to process the paperwork tomorrow, and Tyran offers his gratitude. Following morning at the Grand Library, 2 guards bow respectfully, confirming his pass is officially cleared. Slowly, the massive doors creak open. Tyran stands floored by the towering staircases and endless rows of literature. He's so stunned he stammers, unable to form a coherent sentence. Out of nowhere, a soft voice greets him, welcoming him as their leader. A little girl steps forward, identifying herself as the head librarian. She announces that per house rules, she must brief him on the library guidelines. Tyran finds it wild that a child runs this place as she lays down the law. Break a book, you pay. Plus, no taking books outside. She warns she'll be keeping hawk eyes on him, and while Tyran accepts, he politely asks for some personal space since her staring is uncomfortable. Tyran tests her by asking if she's mastered every book in the hall, and she flexes that her whole duty is pointing him to any information he wants. She inquires what he's searching for, asking if he's in the mood for a compelling tale. She playfully smirks, teasing if a guy his age is looking for spicy adult literature instead. Tyran shakes his head, stating he just needs a solid primer on world history and lore. Hearing that, she slams a thick stack of heavy tomes right onto his desk. She clarifies that most volumes here are centuries out of date, but singles out one specific guide that fits his query. Tyran grabs the manual, his eyes gleaming with genuine curiosity. He smiles inwardly, realizing this volume hits the bullseye. Dives straight into flipping through the pages. Inhaling deeply, Tyran locks in and concentrates on the text. It dawns on him that the content inside is pure gold. Tyran falls into a grind, spending back-to-back days doing nothing but reading. He slowly maps out the world's complete geography inside his head. Learning the formal etiquette of mages and the mechanics behind magical artifacts hooks him completely. He digests lore regarding terrifying monsters and lost artifacts from ancient empires. As he hoards information, every confusing plot point in his mind finally clicks together. Back in the study, the noble checks in on Tyran, asking if the library is meeting his expectations. Lord reminds him that granting entry was a massive personal privilege, and it's time to settle the score. He reveals that a dangerous beast emerged north of Orel, and all 4 knights dispatched to kill it went MIA. He assesses that a mage is required for the job, but he's currently sitting on only 2 casters. If Tyran tags along, a trio of mages will drastically boost the mission's success rate. Tyran agrees, reasoning internally that shielding civilians comes with the spellcaster territory anyway. Even so, he finds it sketchy, as mages rarely get deployed for basic pest control. Lord explains that the affected path is Orel's sole trade artery, and it's been completely shut down for 10 whole days. Tyran resolves to just rush out, clear the threat, and speedrun back to his books. Fast forward a few hours, and the party hits the road. A squad of armored knights marches beside Tyran and the young redhead girl. Throwing her arms in the air, the girl whines about how ridiculous her dad is being. She rants that dragging a guest into a monster hunt is insane, asking if their own soldiers are truly that useless. She shrugs it off, adding that whatever, her father is just overreacting as usual. The guy walking beside her chimes in, insisting the master is being reasonable and that she's blowing things out of proportion. Girl shoots him a death glare that unmistakably screams, "Keep your mouth shut." Turning to Tyran, the young man asks if he's new to questing, introducing himself as Marvin Baltus. Girl kicks a pebble down the path, staring off blankly. As she kicks it, she mutters under her breath that she just wants to finish this chore and sleep in her own bed. Marvin leans in and asks Tyran straight up if he's eyeing his sister, to which Tyran gives a cold no. Closing his eyes in relief, Marvin responds that it's music to his ears. Out of nowhere, a sharp command to freeze brings the whole party to a dead stop. Directly ahead, shattered pieces of a destroyed carriage lay strewn across the trail. 2 knights examine the debris, noting the wreckage trails from the northern path, implying an ambush occurred mid-transit. Rubbing his chin, Tyran senses something is deeply off about the scene. There's even a massive, clear handprint pressed right onto the shattered wood. One soldier catches sight of the mark and alerts the team. The girl looks confused, so Tyran physically points out the handprint to her. Tyran analyzes that the monsters jumped the traders and fled into the woods, suggesting they follow the footprints. The girl, who struggles with basic innate spells, admits she forgot tracking magic anyway, and asks Marvin if the strategy sucks. Tyran announces he's stepping up to trace the path himself. She asks if he was a professional scout in his past life, but Tyran simply replies he's just experienced at hunting. With that, he picks up a scrap of fabric from the wreck and takes a sniff. His eyes snap open as an incredibly strange scent hits his nostrils. Visually, Tyran can literally track the physical trail of the scent floating through the sky. Pointing down the path, Tyran signals that the trail leads forward. They arrive at a riverbank where Tyran notes the scent cuts off, joking that the creature took a dip. Girl questions if a wild beast would genuinely have the brain cells to wash off its scent intentionally. Tyran deadpans that it likely just wanted to get clean. Suddenly, his pupils dilate as the stench hits maximum intensity. Spinning on his heels, Tyran screams a warning that the monster is standing directly behind them. Right on script, a colossal beast looms over the entire squad. The titanic beast immediately commands the whole squad's focus. Soldiers pivot, gaping in absolute terror at the giant menace. Before they can react, the creature scoops up a handful of boulders to launch their way. A knight screams at the top of his lungs for everyone to take cover. Monster chucks the debris, sending multiple knights flying from the blunt force. Tyran's instincts kick in, backflipping effortlessly to clear the blast zone. He scans the battlefield to check the damage on the rest of the unit. Turns out, not everyone was fast enough to dodge clean. The red-haired girl straight up uses a knight as a human meat shield, then coldly dumps his body onto the dirt. Tyran reflects that his mom's harsh lessons about human nature were 100% accurate, as the girl barks orders for the surviving guards to rush the beast. Soldiers follow command, rushing headfirst toward the towering enemy. She yells at them to press the assault, but a soldier screams back that the target is stupidly fast. In the background, Tyran stays calm, aiming precisely at the creature. The squad leader screams at everyone to step up their pace. Out of nowhere, a high-speed attack skims inches away from the girl's cheek. Sensors on high alert, she freezes instantly, realizing a shot was just launched from right behind her back. Every single knight stands petrified as a blinding surge of blue light slices straight through the gap between them. That attack packs such absurd power that it obliterates the solid boulders, landing a direct hit on the beast. Stunned by the unbelievable marksmanship, the lady and her squad turn around, only to realize that Tyran was the one behind that insane attack. Tyran glances toward them with a grim expression, looking totally annoyed with how things played out. Squad quickly realizes that Tyran's single blast completely flattened the monster. Refusing to give the beast even a second to catch its breath, Aizla readies her ultimate attack. Violent, blazing flames begin gathering and coiling around her arm like a tempest. Without hesitation, she hurls a colossal serpent of pure fire right at the incapacitated monster. A titanic blast rocks the field upon impact, grabbing everyone's undivided attention. Tyran stands speechlessly watching the terrifying fire magic unique to the Volta's bloodline. A collective sigh of relief escapes the soldiers now that the brutal clash has finally ended. Zella admits that Tyran's initial attack gave her goosebumps as it skimmed past her head. Marvin jumps on the chance to mock her, teasing whether she was genuinely terrified of Tyran's move. As the leaders banter, the remaining soldiers bandage their injuries and support their fallen allies. Observing the battered soldiers, Tyran acknowledges the absolute mess of a fight, though he's grateful nobody lost their life. He considers how, despite being caught off guard, proper coordination could have minimized their severe injuries. Tyran is well aware that magic inherently reinforces and toughens these fighters' physical bodies. Given their superior durability compared to regular guards, they ought to have positioned themselves better rather than hiding behind weaker allies. Catching Tyran's gaze, Marvin questions why he's getting such an intense side-eye. Tyran immediately brushes it off, saying it's not important. Aizla cuts through their banter to keep them on task, inviting Tyran to siphon the beast's residual mana. In short order, the trio gathers around the corpse of the fallen beast. Without missing a beat, Tyran starts channeling the core mana into himself. He remembers a theoretical concept from his reading. Shared mana absorption does not diminish the individual gain for each participant. Before long, Aizla and Marvin pull back, grumbling that their mana capacities have reached their absolute ceiling. Observing Tyran's seamless technique, Aizla remarks that his skill level rivals her own, justifying his presence on the team. It creeps them out to think that a young noble like him still has uncapped potential left to unleash. With the mana completely drained, the whole party begins their journey back to the Voltis estate. During the trek, Marvin gives credit where it's due, acknowledging they'd still be searching for the beast if not for Tyran. Tyran modestly plays it down, kicking himself for taking so long to analyze the target's mechanics. He specifically refers to its tracking systems, which leaves Marvin completely baffled by his analysis. Tyran clarifies that a beast's unlocked abilities directly mirror its distinct biological attributes. Points out that the ape's oversized eyes and long limbs made it built specifically for long-range vision and sniper-like throwing. When Marvin wonders how he picked up on that so fast, Tyran attributes it to a monster archive he studied back in the library. Both companions mention how ancient that place is, admitting they visited once but dropped it because the text was insanely dense. Tyran casually hints that they should simply ask the staff member inside to give them simplified reads next time. Throwing him a puzzled glance, Aizla questions who on earth he's talking about. She insists that to her knowledge, that abandoned building has been completely unmanned for ages. Once the expedition wraps up, Tyran heads directly back toward the library doors. The second he steps inside, he's greeted with a bright, energetic hello from the girl at the desk. Tyran mentally scolds himself for his lack of caution, realizing a normal townsperson would never address a noble so casually. On top of that, it makes zero sense for anyone to run a desk in a completely forgotten facility. Skipping the small talk, he demands to know how she managed to learn his identity. Taken aback briefly by his blunt interrogation, she quickly shakes it off and giggles, asking if the realization just hit him. When Tyran confirms his suspicion, she smugly reveals that she simply checked his official identification card. She brags that literally nothing within her domain goes undetected. Moving forward, Tyran inquires what title or name he should address her by. She explains that she lacks a personal name, giving him full freedom to improvise. She playfully hints at pet names like Sweetheart, but Tyran coldly rejects the idea and settles on plain librarian. She calls out his sudden attempt at manners, teasing him for bossing her around for the past few days. Denying the claim, Tyran asks for some personal space, admitting her close presence makes him uneasy. Hovering smoothly off the ground, she reveals her non-human nature, describing herself as a manifestation like a spirit. She clarifies that a soul binding to a biological entity results in a living spirit. If it anchors itself to a corpse, it manifests as an undead spirit. However, possessing an object neither living nor inanimate turns it into a pure spirit. She drops the bomb that she is the library building, having molded her avatar to match Tyran's subconscious preferences for easy interaction. As she prepares to tease his taste, Tyran calls bluff, but she insists her words mirror pure truth, transparent like still water. Unconvinced by her mysterious pitch, Tyran leans in to inspect her entity up close. He stretches out a hand to test her physical reality, only for his fingers to glide right through thin air. Annoyed by the intrusion, she snaps at him to stop groping the air, calling him an absolute creep. The spirit vents about her restrictive programming that prevents her from physically ejecting unwanted guests. She notes that given the authority, she would brutally penalize anyone disrespecting her books. Tyran questions why no other readers in the facility have ever reported seeing her. She clarifies that hitherto, not a single visitor possessed the specific perception criteria needed to perceive her. Her architect bound her visibility to high-tier individuals, making Tyran the sole person capable of perceiving her. Puzzled by caliber, Tyran asks if it links back to the specialized mage bloodlines he keeps hearing about. Inquiring about his lineage, she snarkily tells him to ask his family, which forces him to confess he's raised alone. Licking her lips slyly, the spirit offers a personal diagnostic scan of his physical anatomy. Flustered by her suggestive wording, Tyran hesitates while she double-checks whether his form is authentic. Finding the awkward exchange hilarious, he snorts and confirms that his body is indeed real. Out of nowhere, her phantom hand plunges straight through Tyran's ribcage, striking absolute panic into him. She announces their souls are linked, while Tyran realizes to his shock that the intrusive phase felt completely painless. She identifies his main lineage as a specialized stalking predator type, identifying it directly with the infamous Zahar house. Moments later, a wave of shock hits her as she detects an entirely different secondary lineage hidden deeper inside. This dual resonance confirms he is the direct product of two completely distinct noble heritages combining. Eager for answers, Tyran presses about the second bloodline, but she concedes it remains locked behind a heavy magical seal. She promises him that dual bloodline seals naturally break open as his power pool expands over time. Taking in this revelation, Tyran lowers his gaze, plunging deep into reflection. Reflecting on memories of his mother, he realizes she had to be a secret bloodline descendant herself. Her refined intellect and knowledge were far too high class for any standard peasant background. Expressing gratitude for her assistance, Tyran listens as she negotiates for him to stay by her side for another month. Understanding her nature, Tyran turns her into a personal mentor, constantly grilling her on various ancient topics. Her depth of knowledge proves absurd, holding information on lost archives stolen millions of years prior. Absorbing fundamental natural laws directly through her feels like unlocking an unlimited cheat code. She teaches him how microscopic bacteria trigger illnesses and how biological matter decomposes over time. He absorbs concepts of light physics, heat creation via friction, and biological wound regeneration. Equipped with scientific theory, he immediately sets up a field experiment targeting rapid decay. Instant his finger touches a fresh apple, it completely dries up into a withered husk. The test outcome is nothing short of breathtaking. Though brute force magic could achieve the same effect earlier, this scientific understanding drains virtually zero mana. Simply adjusting his conceptual view of reality gives Tyran's magical application an astronomical power spike. Concludes that high clans intentionally hoard scientific truths to secure their permanent monopoly on power. The spirit nods along, noting that such suppression directly caused humanity's cognitive decline across history. When his study period wraps up, Tyran informs her that his time at the archive has ended. He notes that the actual owner of the domain is getting fed up with his endless squatting. Heartbroken by his departure, the spirit desperately pleads with Tyran to carry her along on his journey. Dodging her dramatic clinginess, Tyran points out the obvious flaw: she can't even sever ties with the physical building. Unable to exit, she flips her argument, begging him to stay forever while promising total hospitality. Upon his cold rejection, she zips away dramatically, pretending she never cared in the first place. She mentions ancient divine relics scattered across the map, suggesting he hunt for them if he wants a spirit smarter than her. Floating off, she tosses back a comment that she might drop in on him sometime later. Grumbling with a pout, she huffs that it's his loss if he refuses to stick around. Tyran simply chuckles, noting he still has plenty of unread material left to consume. Steps outside the building, Tyran mentally cross-references the strategic map he uncovered earlier. Knowing the Zahar stronghold sits east of Orem, he locks in his destination on the spot. He resolves to travel straight toward Zahar to uncover hard evidence regarding his parents. Unburdened by frantic panic, Tyran advances through the dense forest at an easy, measured pace. He sets up a quiet camp to whip up a hot meal and recover his physical stamina. He rationalizes that if evidence was bound to decay, it would have wiped out over the past 18 forgotten years anyway. Besides, any surviving leads aren't going to evaporate just because he's taking his time. Out of nowhere, an unexpected rustle further down the trail snaps Tyran back into focus. Faint, distressed equine whinny echoes through the thick foliage. Peeking past a thick bush, he observes a vicious monster aggressively launching forward. The creature retains a worn saddle, hinting it recently bucked off its master. To make matters worse, a squad of rough bandits is surrounding the helpless beast. From miles away, you could sense the sheer rage radiating off these attackers. Suddenly, a far more dangerous detail locks Tyran's eyes onto the squad. These aren't ordinary thugs. They are dark elves, sinister users of psychological hexes. They are going all out, completely engrossed in channeling a dark ritual. Given the surge of foul energy gathering, this is without doubt dark elf necromantic magic. Calling texts from the archive, Tyran knows firsthand how lethal dark elf necromancy truly is. Watching the forbidden spell unfold, he briefly freezes in place, debating internal logic on whether entering this mess is worth the hassle. He rationalizes that the unconscious traveler likely dug his own grave by provoking dark elves. However, Tyran's expression twists into pure horror as he witnesses their gruesome feeding routine. He stares as one elf brutally tears off a huge chunk of meat from a severed human arm. A nearby elf eagerly asks for a piece, begging to taste whether the human meat is fresh. Identifying them as savage cannibals, a wave of disgust and fury instantly inflames Tyran. Neutrality flies out the window. He is forced to intervene and annihilate these monsters. Utilizing stealth magic to monitor their final bites, he readies his surprise ambush. Tyran's lethal strike lands with such raw speed that the distracted cannibals never even sense it. Hungry elf stands utterly bewildered, wondering how his eating partner literally vanished mid-sentence. His stomach turns in a heartbeat when he spots nothing left of his ally except a crimson stain on the soil. Despite sweating bullets, the twisted elf thinks his buddy deserved it for hogging the human limb. Shifting into survival mode, his immediate priority becomes securing a window to escape. Refusing him any exit route, Tyran instantly peppers him with a volley of razor-sharp rock projectiles. Amidst the violent stone hail, even their massive horned beast gets mowed down in the assault. Panicking, the elf can't grasp why his mind-controlled summons are fleeing instead of shielding him. The entire pack of mutated creatures plunges into absolute, unbridled chaos. A barrage of rock shrapnel saturates the air so heavily that evasion becomes impossible. Regardless of where they scramble, the lethal stone rain continues pounding them down. Surviving Dark Elf assumes he is facing a target wrapped in high-tier concealment magic. Aims to test whether the hidden assassin can sustain camouflage while soaking area of effect damage. Desperate to expose his stalker, the elf prepares his most devastating curse to flush Tyran out. Ironically, Tyran is having the time of his life, comfortably executing targets from the shadows. However, the horn-headed cannibal elf refuses to play along with his hide-and-seek game. The intense power behind the curse forces Tyran to abandon stealth and step directly into view. Having locked onto Tyran's position, the elf directs his remaining monstrous pet to charge. Yet Tyran has zero desire to play defensive games with wild monsters. He channels heavy magical essence straight into his palms, readying high-density fire. The greater the heat output, the more immediate the destruction. The beast, leaping blindly at Tyran, gets completely incinerated before it can even reach him. The sheer concussive force of his fire magic blasts the surrounding hostiles off their feet. Even so, Tyran makes note of the Dark Elf's exceptional movement speed. Luckily, he had already erased one opponent right at the start, making the battlefield math significantly more balanced in his favor. Just as he catches his breath, a wild beast sinks its fangs into his calf, instantly sending Tyran into a furious rage. Furious, he shoves the attacker off, only to spin around directly into the path of an enraged buffalo monster. Vicious Brute charges at full velocity, pinning Tyran brutally against a thick tree trunk. Taking the brutal gore attack to his core, Tyran collapses onto his knees, coughing violently from the impact. Tide shifts negatively. He is visibly wounded and heavily overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The remaining Dark Elf celebrates, thrilled that the human who killed his ally is finally collapsing. The celebration ends abruptly as a heavy horse hoof smashes straight into his jaw. The enraged horse follows up viciously, repeatedly stomping the Dark Elf into the dirt. As the Dark Elf gets pulverized while screaming for assistance, his summoned beast allies just stand watching neutrally. Finally reacting, the remaining creatures leap forward and begin tearing into the horse's flank. Crawling out from under the horse, the battered elf vows brutal retaliation against everyone present. In the middle of his rant, a blinding blur zips past before his eyes can process it. Precision Strike connects squarely with the elf's vital point. Having stumbled directly back into Tyran in the thick woods, his escape chances drop to absolute zero. Meanwhile, the faithful horse kicks fiercely, repelling the beasts attempting to swarm it. Tyran respects the animal's grit, though it's clear the severely wounded steed is operating on fumes. Tyran forces his battered body forward, fighting through waves of exhaustion and internal damage. Agony tears through his nerves, momentarily convincing him that he might pass out on the spot. However, the intelligent steed steps in, eager to repay the human who risked his life for it. The horse nudges and neighs urgently, straining every muscle to grab Tyran's focus. Tyran pieces together that the horse is expressing deep gratitude for rescuing both itself and its unconscious owner. Much later, the wounded traveler slowly blinks his eyes open as consciousness returns. He scans the strange woodland clearing, utterly disoriented about his location. Seeing the open campfire triggers a momentary panic after his horror encounter with cannibals, but observing Turan resting peacefully nearby settles his nerves. Noticing the man's eyes open, Turan gently asks how his body is holding up. Shaking off the brain fog, the rescued noble rasps out a question regarding Turan's identity. Keeping explanations brief, Turan summarizes that he stumbled upon the dark elf ambush and cleared the threat. Faithful horse bobs its head emphatically, seemingly validating Turan's summary in real time. Turan is genuinely amazed by the steed's intelligence, observing its intense loyalty and complete grasp of language. Expressing heartfelt gratitude, the blonde noble introduces himself and states his high-ranking family lineage. Curious about the regional threat, Turan asks whether additional dark elf squads are roaming nearby. Guy opens up about how he was just traveling with his attendants when they got hit out of nowhere, leaving them completely helpless. He admits he'd always heard rumors about wild, aggressive species, but he never actually expected them to be this lethal. Glancing over at his horse, tears well up in his eyes as he recalls the terrifying moment the poor beast was nearly devoured. Excuses his emotional breakdown, mentioning that the companions he lost during the ambush meant the world to him. Turan steps in and gently asks whether those victims were part of his actual family. The more they converse, the clearer it becomes to Turan that this guy is a truly decent human being. Turan reassures him, explaining that he personally took down 2 of those elves, so the forest should be completely clear by now. Just to be entirely certain, Turan decides to activate his specialized scouting ability. This particular spell expands his vision, allowing him to scan vast distances in an instant. Once he gives the surrounding area a complete sweep, he verifies that no other dark elves are lurking nearby. The coast clear, the guy asks Turan if he has anywhere important to be right now. Learning that Turan is simply wandering around, the blonde noble wonders aloud if he happens to be the heir to a high-ranking house. Turan brushes off the compliment, insisting he really isn't as overpowered as he might seem. He breaks down the fight, admitting he caught the first elf off guard and genuinely struggled to beat the second one. Points out that he wouldn't have survived at all if that red horse hadn't stepped in to back him up. The pair carry on talking relaxed and easy, chatting like 2 old friends. Internally, though, Turan realizes he would have been in serious trouble without the mana he drained from those dark elves. At the same time, the noble studies Turan, questioning if the kid actually possesses the raw stats to solo 2 necromancers. He assumes the boy must either wield a top-tier martial style or belong to a legendary family line. Completely baffles him why a prodigy with that much skill would be wandering around with no escort. Seeing an opportunity, he proposes that if Turan isn't heading anywhere specific, he should come along and join his household. Gazing at Turan, he makes a mental note to craft a personalized magic item for him as a token of appreciation. Before setting off, they agree that their top priority should be giving a proper burial to the victims of the necromancers. With the graves dug, the blonde noble grows solemn, lamenting that he couldn't return the remains to their grieving relatives. Turning back to Turan, he expresses his deepest gratitude one more time for standing by his side. He chuckles bitterly, acknowledging that a highborn man weeping over common soldiers probably seems weak. However, he firmly believes that those who fall honorably in combat earn a place in a divine realm alongside the gods. He adds that if true strength requires him to be heartless about losing his men, he'd rather stay weak forever. Turan counters that showing emotion isn't weakness at all. It's a sign of genuine nobility and heart. The knight smiles, pointing out that since they're journeying together now, they can drop the formal speech. Hyped up, he exclaims how pumped he is to team up with Turan moving forward. Having grown up as a simple mountain shepherd treated poorly by villagers, having someone genuinely offer friendship so quickly caught Turan off guard. Even so, gaining a trustworthy ally is never something to complain about. With the heavy work behind them, the noble proposes they halt and take a well-deserved breather. Turan can't help but wonder what's hidden inside the container the guy's been hauling around. Noticing his gaze, the knight reveals it's a magic cooling container and pops it open to display a spread of fresh meals. He mentions he stocked up on heaps of provisions back at the previous settlement. He eagerly flexes his gear, showing how one button dispenses fresh water while another gadget morphs into a full tent when stacked with timber. Then flexes a third artifact designed to blare a warning tone if anyone creeps too close. He even reveals that his outfit is enchanted to automatically wash off dirt and stain. Turan is mind blown, having never realized enchanted gear could be applied to everyday life like this. Staring at the self-cleaning gear, Turan remarks that a set of those clothes would be more than enough reward for rescuing him. Noble dismisses that as peanuts, vowing to hook him up with something far superior once they reach his estate. He assures Turan that even if the clan council opposes it, he'll personally bypass them to make it happen. Switching topics, the knight asks if Turan is truly a first-time traveler, noting that he lost track of all the distinct spell elements Tyran threw down. He starts counting them off his fingers: beast taming, frost, levitation, hydro control, body buffing, light, earth sealing, and even straight-up lightning strikes. To Tyran, firing off all those spells felt as second nature, as taking a breath. Feeling a bit awkward, Tyran reminds him of their deal not to dig into his family background. Knight laughs off the tension and casually pivots, asking Tyran how old he actually is. His jaw drops when Tyran casually reveals he's barely 19 years old. Guy, who was flexing earlier, stammers that it makes no sense since he's 43 himself, though he quickly brushes off the massive age gap as no big deal. He then connects the dots, realizing he should have guessed Tyran was an anomaly given how easily he crushed 2 necromancers. He notes there must be 2 absolute prodigies in this generation, and though the other isn't quite on Tyran's tier, she's surprisingly close. He mentions that this prodigy happens to be his second cousin, sparking Tyran's interest in whether she could craft an item for him too. However, the noble warns that might be tough, since she belongs directly to the main family branch rather than a side lineage. He reveals she's the Princess of Arabian, uniquely positioned to take over as clan patriarch down the road. Continuing their trek, he clarifies that unlike mid-tier wizard families, a major clan leader must possess absolute raw power. Because strength is everything, simply passing the title down to your biological offspring is never guaranteed. When dozens of cousins are competing, a stronger relative almost always eclipses the current leader's child. Yet against those odds, Mesa was born to the clan leader, boasting talent that completely outshines the entire family. Notes that within 10 years of her awakening, she fully mastered their signature clan magic, alongside every form of combat spellcraft. Tyran wonders if that level of mana is typical for someone her age, or if her house funneled secret resources into her. Noble nods, explaining she absorbed a massive chunk of their grand uncle's mana upon his death, while others only got scraps. Hearing this, Tyran realizes this systematic power hoarding is how noble bloodlines maintain their grip at the top. Listens on as his companion announces that their long trek is finally drawing to a close. Tyran scans the horizon, genuinely stunned by the breathtaking scenery before them. The pair press forward without a word. Before their eyes, a massive, endless expanse unfolds. Legendary Dakin Plains. This represents the inner sanctum of Arabian rule, the famed ancestral domain of the Burke line, known as Zabalin. Azaz sets foot back home at last, greeted warmly by his mother's loving embrace. Following all the chaos, he finally collapses into a comforting hug from his mother. Tyran just stands there dumbfounded, witnessing a grown 43-year-old man sobbing like a baby in his mom's lap. A strict retainer steps in, ordering Azaz to pull himself together and address his mother with proper formal titles. Pivoting quickly, Azaz introduces Tyran, explaining they crossed paths down in the Southern Territories. He reveals that Tyran is his absolute savior, a guy who put his own head on the line to rescue him. His mother frowns, remarking that a standard pilgrimage trail shouldn't carry that kind of deadly threat. She demands a full recount of the events, and flies into a rage the second he brings up the dark elf necromancers. The strict officer urges her to restrain her temper, warning that onlookers could be observing them. Turning to Tyran, he inquires which prestigious family line this brave savior hails from. His eyes flare with suspicion the moment Tyran hesitates, calling that a complicated inquiry. Tyran keeps it completely real, admitting straight up that he honestly has no idea. He clarifies that his mom was just a regular commoner, and his father's identity is a complete blank. Upon hearing this bombshell, Azaz freezes dead in his tracks. He genuinely had zero inkling about Tyran's background. Though disappointed by his low status, the mother still expresses deep gratitude for preserving her most cherished son. She delicately explains that housing a commoner in the main manor is problematic, offering to book him the finest suite in town instead. Azaz tries to push back, but his mother silences him, pointing out that an elite high-priority VIP is currently residing in the manor. Out of nowhere, a fiery red-haired woman steps into view, remarking that if she's the obstacle, there's no issue at all. She reasons that anyone who put their neck on the line to save Azaz isn't about to randomly assassinate her. All eyes snap toward her, as if she materialized straight out of the gloom itself. With glowing eyes and crimson hair, she carries a visibly exhausted, worn-out aura. Azaz appreciates his cousin's chill attitude, though he's bewildered as to why she's at the estate at all. Observing from afar, Tyran connects the dots and realizes this girl is the famous Princess of Arabian. Can't help but notice she resembles a walking zombie far more than a refined royal. He catches her muttering about a recent near-death encounter with those scum from Zahar. Azaz panics at the thought of enemies infiltrating the main grounds, given their top-tier defense barriers. He dryly points out that an insider snake is likely pulling strings, as half the clan despises her guts. Scanning the room, she excuses herself, mentioning she's completely spent and needs to crash for the night. The tension diffused, Aziz's mom instructs the servants to set up their second-best suite for Tiran. Dusk fades into night across the vast estate. Despite being wrapped in ultra-plush blankets inside a royal suite, Tiran remains wide awake. Surrounded by mind-boggling opulence and high-tier decor, he finds himself utterly restless. He spends the night staring up at the strange magical lamps glowing silently on the ceiling. Giving up on sleep entirely, he hops out of bed to take a late-night stroll through the corridors. Out of nowhere, a familiar voice calls his name, causing him to pivot around. It's Aziz, who asks if Tiran is always an early bird and wonders why he's creeping through the hall alone. Tiran points toward the strange contraption on the wall, admitting it piqued his curiosity. Aziz chuckles, explaining it's just an entry-level magic lamp that beginner mages craft as warm-up homework. Just as he says that, a blinding flash outside the window derails their conversation. Tiran instantly shifts into combat readiness, keeping his composure locked down. Aziz clears the confusion, mentioning his cousin is probably grinding her skills out in the yard. Tiran asks if that visual represents her family magic, and Aziz nods, confirming it's the legendary storm element. Aziz admits that while he loves his own family, moments like this make him low-key jealous because she looks like a straight-up deity. This sparks Tiran's competitive curiosity about the true ceiling of the Arabian heiress. Glancing over, Aziz asks Tiran if he wants to catch her combat demo front and center. He adds that he's dying to see how Tiran's unorthodox magic stacks up against her top-tier prowess. Aziz sheepishly reveals he sparred Mesa years back, and he's still traumatized by how badly he got wrecked. Pumped up, the two head down to the courtyard to witness her terrifying strength firsthand. The second they shout her name, Mesa spins around, sporting a look of pure irritation. Ignoring pleasantries, she coldly demands to know who this random guy standing beside her cousin is. Aziz introduces Tiran, sensing right away that she's already figured out their motives for dropping in. Quickly covers, explaining they just came to spectate her session and maybe throw down a bit. Mesa smirks, bringing up how Aziz took a full week to learn a high-tier spell she mastered on her second attempt. She adds that the painful outcome of their previous duel is still crystal clear in her memory. Finding out that Aziz literally ran away weeping from that fight, Tiran bursts out laughing. Aziz defends his honor, insisting things are different now because Tiran is an absolute magic prodigy. He then proposes a quick duel between the two to really spice things up. Mesa scoffs at the proposal, finding it insulting that she should bother fighting a nobody. Tiran maintains a calm posture, quietly observing her without displaying an ounce of arrogance. He locks eyes with Tiran, fully intending to put this commoner in his place. Tiran doesn't take the bait and casually glances toward the heavens instead. He notices the sky illuminating bright, with the raw aura radiating off Mesa's body. Within seconds, an insane surge of elemental mana overflows around her. It's crystal clear she's pissed off about having her grind session disrupted. To put them in their place, Mesa launches a colossal bolt of lightning directly at Tiran. Tiran absorbs the impact head-on, taking massive damage in the process. After a tense moment, the lightning dissipates and the sky settles back to normal. Tiran is trembling violently, yet he remains standing, genuinely enjoying the adrenaline rush. Drenched in sweat, he successfully tanks the full force of her lightning attack. Catching his breath, Tiran catches Mesa eyeing him with a shocked expression. She scoffs, declaring that calling this one-sided beatdown a match is a total insult. Tiran gets low-key annoyed hearing her dismiss him as beneath her standard. Aziz jumps in, arguing that while Tiran has less raw reserves, his instant spell copying ability is downright absurd. He insists Tiran is an absolute spellcasting genius that even Mesa might struggle against. Irritated by all the hype surrounding Tiran, she locks in and officially accepts the challenge. Tiran pitches the rules for their duel. Each will perform an unfamiliar spell, and whoever replicates the rival's magic faster takes the win. Aziz thinks the setup is brilliant and asks Mesa if she's down for the condition. Mesa agrees, with the sole condition that bloodline secret arts are off-limits. Assuming Tiran lacks a proper origin, she declares she's making the first move immediately. Boys brace themselves to watch her demonstration. Suddenly, green shoots rupture through the dirt and rapidly expand. Sprouts multiply exponentially, surging into massive, thick tendrils. Vines snare Aziz, yanking him right into the air. As he struggles up high, Mesa smugly identifies it as plant control magic, asking Tiran if he can pull that off. Dangling above, Aziz screams to be let down, but Mesa teasingly tells him to hang tight since it's hilarious. Tiran immediately dissects the magic flow to decode its inner mechanics. He drops to one knee, channels his mana into the soil, and attempts the duplication. Tiran calculates that fire requires heat generation, while water relies on atmospheric moisture. He deduces these vines operate similarly. He simply needs to trigger instantaneous growth in subterranean seeds. Projects a command pulse, and the hidden seeds instantly burst forth. Thick tendrils explode from the dirt, coiling around his forearm. Mesa is caught totally off guard by his instant success. Aziz is equally stunned, even if he secretly anticipated Turan's brilliance. Noticing he used the precise command phrase, Mesa suspects he's seen it before, but Turan insists it's his maiden attempt. Dropping back to the dirt, Aziz quips that for once, Turan actually delivered instead of talking trash. Mesa yields the floor, prompting Turan to show his spell. Turan notes that displaying a technique from the rival Zahar clan would be complete suicide. Instead, he recalls an alternative dark spell in his arsenal. He extends his palm toward a thick bush nearby. Small rat darts out from the leaves, running straight to his feet. Underwhelmed, Mesa sneers, asking if his grand trick is just simple beast control. Turan clarifies that the rodent is merely a physical medium for the actual technique. Focusing his mind, he channels dark magic down his arms. He injects a pulse of decay mana into the rat, causing it to rot instantly before their eyes. The horrific spell leaves Mesa completely speechlessly horrified. Holding the decayed rodent, Turan calmly announces he's finished his move. Mesa nods, stepping up to attempt replicating the decay magic. With the flick of her fingers, she calls forth a subject. A fresh rat scampers out and approaches her feet. She scoops up the creature, closes her eyes, and starts pumping mana into it. Her elemental mana floods the rat, yet the animal remains completely untouched. She pumps even higher output, baffled as to how Turan pulled off such weird spellcraft, since it clearly deviates from conventional elemental spells. Aziz grimaces, asking why he chose such a repulsive spell, to which Turan shrugs that it was just his first thought. Internally, Turan smiles, confirming his theory was right on the money. He starts to question whether even a high-status group like the Arabian family is totally in the dark about this spell. Watching Mesa sweat it out, Aziz suggests they just wrap it up and officially declare Turan the winner. Irritated, she snaps back at him to stay quiet, stubborn that she'll make the spell work no matter what. Magic operates on a super intricate chain of cause and effect, with countless variables involved. It comes down to how well the caster grasps the natural phenomenon, along with the precise amount of mana poured into it. If you truly comprehend the mechanics behind it, your odds of success skyrocket while using a fraction of the mana. So, if you don't actually understand the spell, your only option is to overpower it using sheer brute force and a ridiculous amount of mana. Pumping every drop of mana she can scrape together, Mesa puts all her focus into decomposing the rat. Gradually, the spell kicks in, and the rat's body actually begins to decay. Both of them are completely caught off guard, having doubted she had it in her. Barely able to stand from fatigue, she still manages to brag about her victory. However, her energy drops to zero, and her eyelids begin to feel heavy. Right after that, she drops unconscious to the ground. Aziz quickly dashes to her side, desperately pleading with her to wake up. Frantically tries to analyze the situation, knowing that simple mana depletion shouldn't knock a person out cold. The worst that should happen is intense physical fatigue. Upon inspecting her more closely, however, a critical detail catches his eye. Glancing down at Mesa's hands, the full picture suddenly hits him. Lifting her off the ground, he demands a healing mage, but learning none are around, he snaps orders for salt and water to be rushed to her quarters. While carrying her, it dawns on him that she was burning through her mana, simply to hold her own body together. Honestly, she shouldn't have even possessed the physical strength to remain standing. After some time passes, Mesa slowly comes back to consciousness. Her aunt, sitting beside her with deep concern, immediately asks how she's feeling. Pushing herself up with great difficulty, Mesa asks how she ended up in bed, to which her aunt explains Aziz claimed she passed out training with the guest, though she presses Mesa to reveal if that's really what took place. Concerned, her aunt inquires if the guest harmed her, but Mesa rapidly clears Turan's name and requests privacy, complaining of a severe headache. As she heads for the door, her aunt notes that she prepared some soup, urging her to eat a little despite any magical strain. Met with complete silence, her aunt lets out a soft sigh and gets to her feet. Right as her aunt reaches the doorway, Mesa quietly offers her thanks. She remains seated with her head lowered, completely consumed by her chaotic thoughts. Glancing over at the meal her aunt brought, she figures she should force herself to take a few bites. Yet the instant the soup hits her tongue, she is paralyzed by a horrifying vision. Flashes of deceased individuals flood her mind, showing her fallen servants and her own sister. Overwhelmed by horror, the bowl slips from her hands and shatters on the ground. She pulls herself into a ball, shaking uncontrollably from acute pain and sheer dread. Meanwhile, down in the underground temple of the Beck estate, a family guard named Haram informs Turan that the walls and doors here are entirely seamless. He cautions him against wasting energy on trying to shatter the room or make a break for it. Remaining entirely unbothered, Turan nods and says he gets the message. Closing the distance, the guard reiterates just how unbreakable the walls are. Leaning in further, he stresses one more time that they are super tough. Turan mentally questions if this man is simply showing off. Out of nowhere, though, an odd detail grabs his attention. The sharp sound of a blade slicing through the air catches his ear. As it turns out, the guard didn't want to idle away his duty, and began running sword drills right then and there. Baffled by the sudden display, Turan asks him what on earth he's up to. Replying that it's just routine practice, the guard seamlessly shifts into a new combat posture. He executes a crisp, blindingly fast forward stab. He follows up with a downward strike powerful enough to kick up a small draft. Observing the sequence, Turan realizes every action is executed with pure efficiency. Every slash flows effortlessly into the following attack. Drill, the guard spins around and catches Turan watching intently. Turan swiftly offers an apology for distracting him. Approaching him, the guard inquires how his technique looked to an observer. Turan candidly confesses that the demonstration was beyond impressive. Stepping back, the guard gives a satisfied nod of agreement. He points out that nobles dismiss martial arts as irrelevant purely because they lack the discipline to master them. Turan notes that, for most lineages not dedicated to raw combat, specializing in magic offers far better efficiency. Yet in extreme survival moments, relying solely on magic is bound to fall short. Haram extends his blade toward Turan, prompting him to grab hold of it. Turan pauses, questioning the wisdom of giving a weapon to a prisoner currently under guard. Nudging the weapon forward, Haram dismisses it as mere steel, noting Turan's weakened state means he poses no threat regardless. Accepting the hilt, Turan wonders what performance he's expected to give. Haram observes attentively, eager to see how the youth reacts. Channeling a sliver of magic, Turan attempts to mirror the guard's combat stance. Haram immediately interjects, telling him his posture is completely off. Tightening his grip, Turan lets his internal energy envelop his form. Haram clarifies that this particular drill functions entirely without magic. He guides him to drop his center of gravity into his base leg, anchoring himself firmly into the floor. He directs him to lift his guard higher, advising against restricting his reach. He recommends that Turan spend his free time straining his body to its physical peak. The veteran labels magic as a mere illusion, arguing that spellcasters wrongly assume it compensates for physical weakness. He asserts that a peak-condition warrior can overpower any opponent without relying on magic. A sudden sound interrupts them, catching Turan's attention toward the entry. Right at that moment, a young lady steps into the chamber. The head guard reprimands her, stating that acting so cold toward their savior is completely unacceptable. Intervening smoothly, Turan expresses relief at her recovery while apologizing for any inconvenience caused as a visitor. The girl reveals that Mesa wishes to speak with him to make amends, asking if he can spare some time. Inside a private chamber, Mesa acknowledges that he was detained due to her situation and offers a genuine apology. Turan reassures her that caution was reasonable, emphasizing that her well-being was the main priority. She points out that his beast-rotting spell from yesterday featured a chant in an unrecognized dialect. Turan explains that mastering the underlying concepts will allow her to execute the exact same magic. She counters that unless he demonstrates it properly, she can't be sure it isn't reliance on unique spell wording. She admits her standing will suffer greatly if she walks away without mastering it. Because of that, she lays out a trade. In exchange for explaining the mechanic of his spell, she offers to train him in a classified Arabian technique. With the terms settled, Turan proceeds to break down the mechanics for her. Grasping the specimen, Mesa asks if the magic manipulates microscopic organisms to accelerate decay. She notes her suspicions were right. The method burns an absurd amount of mana, proving it only succeeded due to overwhelming power. Mesa remarks that she anticipated this during their wager, as aptitude exams never evaluate actual mana reserves. She proposes declaring the bet a tie to protect Aziz's ego, mainly to spare herself his annoying gloating. Therefore, she decides to fulfill her part of the deal immediately. Reaching for a comb, she states it serves as the ideal demo object. With Turan watching, Mesa begins drawing the comb through her hair. Positioning the comb near her scalp, she illustrates how friction generates attraction between surfaces, breaking down the physical logic. Turan interrupts to complete her thought, identifying the effect as static electricity. Shocked by his response, she asks if he was already familiar, and he gives a quick nod. Mesa realizes she needs a fresh concept to share, having aimed to teach him something entirely foreign. Turning back to him, she proposes joint training sessions until she decides on an equivalent lesson. Grinning, he nods and suggests meeting outdoors every afternoon. By nightfall, a massive feast is laid out across the dining table. Hosts invite everyone to tuck in and enjoy to their heart's content. Astonished by the spread, the young heir remarks that even his birthday banquets lack this level of variety. Diner chuckles that comparing the meal to his birthday is a bit odd. The elder matriarch shifts focus, prompting him to resume their earlier discussion. Once Turan verifies the specifics, the young lady asks if he has a particular gear piece in mind. He states that defensive gear, capable of deflecting ambushes, would be ideal. She notes that such protective gear is straightforward to make, though she currently lacks pre-crafted inventory. A younger family member steps forward, volunteering to craft it since he just wrapped up work for the primary house. When asked for his plan, He argues that an everyday accessory provides the most reliable protection against surprises. He recommends creating a ring, earring, or pendant that automatically projects a protective barrier upon danger. What might sound boastful, the gear will indeed be forged by a top-tier magic artisan. Expressing gratitude, the boy mentally wonders if such lavish treatment is overkill. The head matriarch insists that as an honored guest for the month, he should accept their hospitality without reservation. Elsewhere, the heir whispers that his mother seems particularly intrigued by Tyran. He notes that during their late-night chat, he spoke glowing reviews about Tyran's dedication and talent. He simply aimed to stop her from underestimating his ally, only to realize she now wants to scout him into the lineage. The tactic involves lavishing him with gifts before dangling an attractive noblewoman to seal the deal. He tells Tyran not to stress, clarifying that the barrier item is merely courtesy. Asking about his current agenda, he learns Tyran is set to train with Mesa soon. Blonde youth highlights that practice isn't for hours, noting the surrounding town offers plenty of entertaining locations. He teases whether Tyran intends to spend such fine, whether rotting indoors over textbooks. Yanking him along, he preaches that life ought to be spent enjoying oneself. In a bustling square nearby, townsfolk gather around interactive stalls. The heir gestures toward a betting desk swarming with gamblers. The blonde companion proposes trying their luck, but Tyran declines. Redirecting his attention, the companion leads him to another section. Scanning the space, Tyran locks eyes on an intriguing display. He steps closer to inspect a notice pinned to the brickwork. Reading the advertisement, his expression shifts to absolute astonishment. He grasps that the figure drawn on the poster represents a legendary icon. To Tyran, the face depicted matches Kjorn down to the finest detail. Elsewhere on stage, an array of combat arms is presented before the audience. The speaker recounts how back in the year 2195, during the Desert Campaign, a holy knight named Kjorn rose to renown. Aided by divine power, Kjorn vanquished his opponent following a savage duel. Dramatic reenactment concludes to roaring cheers from the crowd. The blonde heir inquires if he found the show engaging, earning a nod from Tyran. Calling how the veteran claimed to be a mere foot soldier, Tyran chuckles at how modest he was being. He resolves to question Kjorn about the authenticity of the tale whenever they cross paths. Next morning, sunlight filters softly through the bedroom window. Opening his eyes, Tyran jolts awake upon spotting a figure looming over him. Standing right, there is the scarred veteran himself. The veteran inquires about his stamina, and as soon as Tyran confirms he's fit, he asks what prompted this early drop-in. The instructor notes he recognized massive physical promise in him, sending Tyran's mind spinning over his hidden intent. Ordering him out of bed for workout drills, he lectures that sitting idle never made anyone formidable. Asking if he has the stomach for it, Tyran internally agrees, viewing it as a prime chance to absorb combat skills. Right on cue, the blonde heir bursts in to hype up a local theater show, only to freeze dead when he spots his uncle. The veteran announces a conditioning drill and invites his nephew to sweat it out as well. The blonde youth bolts instantly, blurting out a lazy excuse about needing more sleep. Tyran watches him disappear and wonders why he fled in such panic. A few hours into the session, Tyran fully understands the reason behind that escape. The instructor yells at him to push past exhaustion, demanding one more repetition. To conclude the punishing session, he commands one last grueling sequence. At long last, the coach calls time and halts the training. Completely drained of energy, Tyran drops flat on his back. Veteran asks if he's wiped out, receiving a heavy sigh in response. The mentor notes that as a magic wielder, he won't need to endure this physical torture permanently. Tyran asks why. The trainer breaks down how ordinary physical bodies deteriorate regardless of workout routines. Mages, however, utilize mana to lock their muscular structure, so once forged like iron, it never degrades. Grinning wide, the veteran decides that short break was plenty of recovery time. Tyran protests, arguing that his muscles need significantly more downtime. Ignoring his complaints, the trainer's smile grows broader as he announces it's time for weapons drills and hand-to-hand combat. This conditioning regime under the Burt clan proves to be pure torture for the young spellcaster. Inhaling deeply, the youth pushes himself to match their harsh standards. Veteran cautions that their custom blades amplify user weight, meaning a single misstep results in severe trauma. Later on during practice with Mesa, she instructs him to channel the friction off his fingertips. 3 full weeks pass in a blur of constant training. Abruptly, the atmosphere crackles as a heavy surge of magic materializes. Tyran lets out a sigh, convinced he messed up the skill execution yet again. Mesa remarks that this technique appears surprisingly tough, even for someone as capable as him. He clarifies that his struggle is understandable given that he doesn't hail from the Arabian lands. Mesa confesses she's finding it tricky as well, never expecting to manipulate precise electrical sparks like this. She questions if it's not as simple as launching a projectile at a target, but he clarifies the complexity involved. At that moment, a voice shouts Mace's name from beyond the training grounds. Glancing at Tyran, the intruder demands to know the boy's identity. Mesa dismisses him harshly, recalling her strict order that main clan members stay far away from her. The guard excuses his intrusion as a direct mandate from the clan leader, but Mesa threatens him with severe fallout. The messenger then drops the urgent update. Dark Elf battalions have initiated a full-scale assault across the Southern Territories. He clarifies that multiple territories were already wiped out, prompting the Patriarch to mobilize an army. Tyran connects the dots, realizing the opposition has officially kicked off their plan. Taking in the news, Mesa dismisses the scout, promising to return to ancestral ground shortly. Given the crisis, she decides it's time to bid farewell to her companions. She also feels obligated to repay them for employing that gross decay spell earlier. She gazes upward toward the clouds as though sending a quiet prayer. Turning back to Tyran, she asks if he is aware that electrical force originally existed inside human bodies. This cryptic bit of trivia sends his mind spiraling into deep contemplation. Mesa chuckles, pointing out he couldn't possibly know, as it's a top-secret truth of her bloodline. She concludes that their mutual obligations are now fully resolved since she passed on the knowledge. She details how any sensory experience, whether sight or touch, causes the body to flash a minuscule electric impulse straight to the mind. According to her, visual signals travel directly from the eyes to the brain, while scents take a similar path right from the nose. Listening to this breakdown gets the kid super hyped to test out the ability on his own. He figures it shouldn't be harder than focusing on a simple sight, like a butterfly fluttering its wings. Continuing her explanation, she assures him that someone with his talent should easily trigger the ability. All he has to do is concentrate hard and sync his awareness with the faint electric currents inside his muscles. She cautions him that while the spark will start off microscopic, it won't be long before voltage streams through his whole frame. She points out that speeding up these signals along a targeted route gives him total mastery over where the charge lands. Without missing a beat, the young guy follows her guidance to a T. A surge of electrical energy instantly floods his system, blowing his perception wide open. Silence settles over them as they lock eyes, just as she starts pulling a magnetic aura into reality. An intangible spark connects between them, and she puts her raw capability on full display. Mid-sentence, her playful facial expression noticeably shifts into something much more intense. The kid immediately absorbs the entire concept behind her demonstration. Out of nowhere, it hits him like a million bolts of thunder, violently striking his veins at the exact same moment. Unbearable searing pain rips straight through his entire form. Mesa grins, realizing he pulled it off, and clarifies that the agony stems from him recklessly bursting his mana all at once. He cautions that splitting headaches will plague him initially, but mastering the rhythm will let him sustain the state effortlessly. Tyran is immensely thankful, feeling that whatever small favor he offered her pales in comparison to this insane power. Bringing up into the sky, she chuckles that he should view this lesson as an advance investment in his potential. She teases that if he unlocks even wilder spells down the line, she will definitely drop by to collect her interest. Tyran stands frozen watching her soar off, her distant voice echoing that she plans to invoice him for every single trick she taught. Far above, a lone eagle cuts swiftly through the open clouds. From its high perspective, a massive arming of troops is clearly visible on the ground. That bustling site is the city of Morgan, serving as the central hub of the Dakin Plains. Elite soldiers under the House of Arabian enjoy massive prestige for their legendary power. Though this march is merely a send-off for a dark elf hunt, the pomp rivals a grand victory celebration. Ziz excitedly breaks down the scene for his pal, hyping up how this battalion will effortlessly wipe out any necromancer in their path. Noticing his cousin in the crowd, he waves frantically, only to get instantly scolded to act dignified like a true noble. Crowd erupts with excitement as the house leader makes an appearance, drawing awestruck glances from Tyran and his companions. Row upon row of troops snap to strict attention, eagerly awaiting their leader's command. It dawns on Tyran that the figure taking center stage is indeed the reigning patriarch of House Arabian. That grim-looking man with striking red hair is indeed the supreme authority of the clan. Onlookers cast nervous glances toward Badal Arabian, whispering in hushed tones about his intimidating stare. Beyond his scary demeanor, Tyran picks up on the fact that the leader looks sickly and pale. Word on the street is that a legendary clash against the Lord of House Ajar left him permanently scarred with fatal injuries. Considering how many years have passed, Tyran figures the guy might just be feeling the heavy weight of old age. Out of nowhere, a heavy chill falls over the scene, draining the cheering crowd's bold enthusiasm. Spectator even glances nervously skyward, half expecting some catastrophic threat to drop down. Before anyone can react, the bright day swiftly turns pitch dark. The clan patriarch lifts his arms wide, assuming a posture like a priest delivering a sacred benediction. Sudden shift in his eye color signals that he is drawing up insane amounts of raw magical power. In a flash, he weaves his energy directly into the swirling clouds overhead. Blinding radiance illuminating the sky serves as absolute proof of House Arabian's dominant influence. Roars split the crowd as they chant praise, begging the Lord of Thunder to shield their bloodline. Turan is stunned that a guy with a frail body can still unleash such an overwhelming flex of magic. Effortlessly shrouding the landscape in lightning, he displays the absolute pinnacle of what human mages can achieve. Later, someone gifts Turan a specialized gear designed to instantly bolster his defensive stats. Even without channeling mana into it, his durability skyrockets to match high-ranking guardian nobles. The guy presenting the gift cautions him that it eats up mana rapidly, so leaving it on for long runs is dangerous. Turan bows in sincere appreciation, fully aware that he just scored a top-tier relic. The head lady hints that he's got an open invitation to officially marry or integrate into their clan whenever he wants. She holds genuine warmth for him, mostly because he saved her beloved kid from danger. Turan expresses gratitude while keeping in mind that accepting isn't going to be a walk in the park. She acknowledges that her son already filled her in on his backstory, making it clear she respects his personal ambitions. Turan offers a polite salute, swearing that he'll always cherish the incredible treatment he received. Wrapping up his chat with the matriarch, Turan packs up to take his leave. Right then, he catches a crowd of locals, gathering to give him a proper send-off. The whole group is genuinely indebted to him for stepping up when their relative was in trouble. Out of nowhere, one guy flings a small item over and tells him to hang on to it. The sender mentions that it functions as a specialized enchanted gear. While lacking flashy gimmicks, it boasts unbelievable toughness along with a razor-thin edge. Turan offers heartfelt thanks, realizing this gear will come in clutch down the line. Overcome with respect, the guy goes as far as addressing Turan as master. A faint, amused smirk plays across Turan's features. Rushing off the moment, he spins on his heel and strides down the road. Showing true loyalty, Aziz steps up and hands Turan a travel cape. Draping the fabric over his coat, Turan blinks and inquires about its special properties. Aziz recalls Turan admiring their outfits earlier and points out that this garment is completely stain-resistant. Throwing in a full set of garments, Aziz adds that the fabric auto-knits itself back together whenever torn. Turan is pumped, now fully decked out in a fresh cloak, shirt, trousers, and extra equipment. Gifting complete, his buddy asks where his friend's journey leads next. Taking a long pause, Turan announces he's setting off for Carmine, a town Aziz knows well. Knowing the route, Aziz drops some wisdom, warning him against taking the sea route due to lethal tides. Bidding a friendly farewell, he urges Turan to stay alive so he can eventually drop by to repay the debt. As days go by, we catch Turan trekking along a dusty highway. Strolling along, he reflects on the fact that he's fully on his own for the remainder of this journey. With no one holding him back, he decides to gear up and sprint full power. Building momentum, he rockets down the path, passing travelers like a speeding bullet. Bystanders whip their heads around, utterly clueless about what just zipped by. Others catch a blur of wind, though they can't even tell what broke the sound barrier. Sustaining that ridiculous pace, local village huts turn into a sheer blur. He flashes along the water's edge of multiple lakes along his route. After maintaining that sprint across vast distances, Turan finally decides to tap the brakes. He transitions down into a light trot, steadily easing his momentum until he drops into a stroll. At this point, he has already arrived right at the base of the mountain chain. From this point forward, he locks in on his sharp sense of smell, a trusted tool that never fails. Pausing to catch the breeze, he instantly catches a distinct scent wafting from a precise spot. Initially mistaking it for routine campfire smoke, he quickly realizes it's a foul odor akin to scorched flesh. Dialing in his focus, he locks onto the exact location of that nasty stench. Stepping through the tree line, he discovers a horrifying sight: a completely raided, charred, and deserted village. Scattered remains across the dirt show heavy signs of advanced decay. A lot of victims had been bound hand and foot prior to getting slaughtered. He suspects local raiders ransacked the place, as dark elf squads shouldn't have penetrated this deep. Yet an uncomfortable gut feeling tells him key details aren't adding up here. Driven to uncover the truth, he pushes deeper into the ruins. However, every step reveals nothing but blackened debris and total annihilation. Despite combing the area thoroughly, Turan uncovers nothing beyond the crumbling remnants of an old structure. He locks his fingers onto floor hatches, checking if a secret cellar lurks below. Applying brutal strength, he rips the heavy wooden doors straight off their rusted frames. The instant the entry snaps open, his expression turns completely ghost-white. Down in the dark shelter, he spots a figure bearing an uncanny match to the goddess of corruption. The tiny girl huddled inside leaps in sheer terror as the heavy barricade gets shattered. Descending the steps, Turan speaks in a gentle tone, promising her that he means no harm. Reassured by his words, the child relaxes slightly, realizing he came to rescue her. Stepping forward softly, he asks her to share what unfolded at the village. She stammers that a single intruder butchered the entire settlement, suspecting the attacker was a magic user. Mid-explanation, exhaustion takes over, and she swoons into unconsciousness. Turan catches her safely, relieved that she's merely passed out from fatigue rather than injured. His immediate goal switches to delivering the young survivor to a safe zone. Out of nowhere, an abrupt shout echoes nearby, claiming they've located their target. Glancing up, he catches an armed individual pointing a finger square at his chest. Turan finds himself encircled by a hostile squad, commanded by a lady who looks ready to murder someone. She barks a harsh order for him to drop to his knees, making it clear she won't give a second warning. It's obvious she has misidentified Turan as the psycho who torched the settlement. Running out of patience, she barks at him to release the kid right this second. Fellow wizard in her squad, though trembling heavily, raises his staff to attack anyway. Turan attempts to defuse the situation, insisting that this entire setup is a massive mix-up. However, the squad refuses to reason, winding up to strike at any moment. Their body language signals they are about to unleash hell without hesitation. In a panic, the leader screams at her ally not to fire straight, fearing collateral harm to the little girl. The teammate blurts out an apology for his hasty move, while the leader stares ahead in total shock. Turan had casually thrown up his forearm to block the explosion from reaching him and the child. As the smoke clears, they gawk at him standing unfazed, shielding the child without breaking a sweat. Glancing at his newly acquired artifact, Turan grins, shocked he had to test it out so early. The hostile mages stand frozen in disbelief that he tanked their hit without taking a scratch. Even more terrifyingly, he didn't even channel magic. He relied strictly on raw physical toughness. Intrigued, the leader demands to know what prestigious bloodline grants him such ridiculous durability. Turan raises his voice again, emphasizing that he didn't wipe out the village and that they have the wrong guy. He warns that another assault will force him to strike back hard, causing their archer to freeze in her tracks. She realizes her main concern must be ensuring the young girl's survival. Dropping her weapon, the leader grants that a total massacre doesn't fit the profile of someone protecting a survivor. Even so, she finds it tough to buy that a random stranger hung around solely to rescue a kid. She offers her own identity and demands to know who he is. She explains that despite the evidence stacking against him, she's open to giving his side of the story a shot. Turan proposes waiting until the child wakes up, since she's the eyewitness who saw the actual attacker. The moment he speaks, he catches a sketchy reaction from one of the group members. The blonde girl voices doubts, questioning whether a child could really identify the monster. She drops the murderer's infamous moniker, expressing surprise that our hero is completely clueless about him. She clarifies that the criminal is a rogue wizard who's been torching remote towns for months on end. Because he wipes out every living soul, no one can even confirm if the psycho is male or female. A single detail everyone agrees on is his alias, the Flame Maniac, due to his arsonist tendencies. When the little girl finally wakes up, she identifies the killer as a guy with a beard wearing a red cape. She adds that he gave off the vibe of a terrifying woodsman. An awkward chill hits the squad, and the leader glances at our MC, realizing he looks nothing like that description. Realizing their error, the team formally apologizes for jumping to conclusions and treating him like garbage. This gesture triggers a quick flashback for our MC, reminding him of a noble buddy who never hesitated to own his missteps. The hero brushes it off, stating he understands their caution since protecting the survivor was their primary goal. He then inquires whether they intend to hunt down the Flame Maniac in the nearby city. The blonde girl beams that with an actual visual, tracking him down will be smooth sailing thanks to their expert scout. Intrigued, our protagonist asks if they belong to the Zahar lineage and why they are wandering this remote zone. Waving her hands, the blonde introduces herself as Bison Carmine from the Carmine line, hailing from Abacha. She clarifies that her teammates belong to vassal households, with only Asha carrying Zahar blood. Bison notes that Asha's heritage bloomed weakly, resulting in what folks label a primitive bloodline. She swings around to ask if our MC wants to team up and hunt down the Flame Maniac together. She sweetens the deal by promising him the complete reward bounty, along with her personal cut of mana. Taking in her proposal, our MC questions if they have any real intel on the target's power ceiling. Bison estimates he operates at a noble tier spellcaster level, given he comfortably handled armored knights. Our hero realizes this target is the ideal warm-up, since fodder monsters along his path no longer yield X. Locking eyes with her, he nods and formally joins the hunt. First, the party prioritizes escorting the kid to a nearby settlement for proper care. They pay a local household handsomely to raise her, dropping a stern warning that they will check in regularly. MC pitches in, adding that he'll make surprise visits over the coming years to monitor her status. Hearing that threat, the guardian who took the coin instantly breaks out in a sweat. Mission complete, the party heads back to the charred ruins to comb for fresh tracks. They put full faith in their scout's ability to pull vital evidence out of the ash. Her eyes flash with a distinct light, marking the activation of her tracking skill. Locking onto a trail, she points ahead and warns the crew that they've got a distance to cover. Scouring the wreckage, they inspect every inch of burnt wood for residual footprints. Before long, heavy indentations gouged deep into the dirt catch their eyes. Destruction leaves an unmistakable path, pointing straight into the dense forest. Relying on her olfactory skill, the tracker begins sniffing out the arsonist's distinct scent. She kneels to touch the earth, taking deep sniffs of chosen soil samples. Glancing back, she clarifies to our MC that her initial priority is identifying human boot prints. From there, she will follow the lingering scent of ash trapped on the suspect's attire. Her eyes pop open wide as she shouts that she's locked onto a hot lead. Dashing forward, the scout bolts along the fresh scent trail. Her companions yell at her to hold up, but she tunes them out and charges through the woods toward the mountain foot. Few bounds later, she stumbles across a hidden cavern entry, proving her trail was spot on. The blonde girl turns to our protagonist, asking him to take the lead position while the squad covers his rear. She creates a glowing orb of light right over her palm to illuminate the pitch-black tunnel. With the cave illuminated, the entire squad files in right behind the tracker. While marching down the tunnel, the blonde checks if the scout can still trace the target's smell. Activating her sensory skills, the scout confirms that a target is indisputably lurking in the shadows. With intel secured, the entire party advances steadily toward the indicated point. Trekking down the dark passage, the blonde girl momentarily drifts into deep thought. As they push deeper in, the wall torches suddenly ignite one by one, lighting up the passage. Much to their shock, a creepy figure is already standing right there, waiting for their arrival. Guy gives them a sinister glare, asking why on earth they've wandered into such a desolate spot. The lead directly asks if he's the infamous fire criminal, and the tracker behind him immediately backs him up, confirming she catches that exact same bizarre smell off the guy. The archer agrees this has to be their man, though she advises double-checking his identity before launching an all-out attack. Speaking in a twisted voice, the man chuckles that he knows why they're here and figures they came looking for a fight. He boasts that if trouble is what they want, they picked the perfect target because he'll gladly roast them like kebabs. The creep proves he isn't bluffing, instantly igniting sparks and flames all across the cavern floor. His mana explodes outward, causing the flames to rapidly swell into a massive, uncontrolled inferno. Fully prepared for a moment like this, our main guy readies his abilities to shield both himself and his allies. Deploying a powerful defense spell, he puts up a solid barrier that keeps him and the archer totally safe. Villain stands stunned as the smoke clears, unable to believe his deadly fire didn't even singe them. Taking advantage of the pyromaniac's confusion, the archer unleashes a relentless barrage of shots. A heavy arrow pierces right through the rogue's leg, inflicting a brutal hit. The force behind the arrow almost completely knocks him off his feet as he struggles to stand. His eyes roll up and he staggers, looking like the agony is about to knock him completely unconscious. Despite the unbearable pain, the lunatic refuses to go down without a desperate fight. He pulls out a fresh surprise, summoning giant claws made of solid rock directly out of the cavern floor. The hero realizes this guy can control earth magic too, which catches him off guard since he was supposed to be a pure fire user. Regardless of the unexpected trick, our lead wastes zero time and shifts instantly back to the attack. Knocking a projectile into his slingshot, he pumps a dense surge of mana straight into the stone. The pyromaniac tries to wind up one more spell, but our hero knows casting a spell is pretty impossible if you don't have hands to cast it with. Atmosphere in the cave turns intensely oppressive, sending a thrill of pure terror even through the villain. Our protagonist mentions picking up a couple of dangerous techniques from a buddy in the previous town. He can now infuse raw lightning into his shots, turning his simple slingshot into a lethal weapon. The lightning shot strikes with such force that the villain's eyes snap shut as he completely blackouts. As the villain drops, his lingering stone construct shatters and collapses right toward one of the party members. Our lead doesn't lose focus for a second, moving in swiftly to finish securing the criminal. The girl looks on in absolute disbelief at how smoothly he shut down the entire situation. Next, he pulls a handful of unusual seeds out from his pouch. Without hesitation, Tyran flings the mysterious seeds directly onto the unconscious noble. Almost instantly, the spell inside the seeds activates. Binding magic bursts forth, thoroughly trapping the man's body and blinding his senses. Tyran steps up to the immobilized guy with a drawn blade, advising him to speak up if he wants to live. The rogue hesitates with a defiant look, clearly needing a bit more pressure to break. Pressing the razor-sharp edge directly against the guy's beard, Tyran warns him to keep motionless and think carefully. Sternly promises that if the guy tries to channel even a speck of mana, he'll end him right then and there. When Tyran demands full answers, the villain stubbornly scoffs, asking how a bunch of brats even tracked him down. Annoyed by the attitude, Tyran bluntly tells him he has his own methods. He presses the rogue noble to explain why he's been incinerating villages and murdering innocent civilians. The lunatic chillingly responds that God personally commanded him to reduce everything to ashes. The group shudders at his words, unable to comprehend such insane logic. Ranting wildly, the noble screams that God revealed the secret method for stealing other family bloodlines. He insists that roasting just a few more people will finally grant him the ultimate fire bloodline. The blonde kid shakes his head, convinced the guy is totally nuts since stealing a bloodline like that is impossible. Tyran feels pure disgust that anyone could slaughter innocents over such absurd delusions. Still, something about it catches his attention, forcing him to pause and process the claim. He remembers a past conversation where someone noted that regular folks could gain mana by slaying demon beasts. It was Medem who claimed to have personally witnessed multiple mages obtaining power that way. And right now, this rogue keeps blabbering that burning more victims will award him fire magic. Realizing this might not be total insanity, Tyran forcefully grips the noble's arm. Terrifying thought hits him that this murderer might have actually uncovered a core secret of their world. Without another word, Tyran delivers a swift, decisive blow, killing the rogue. The noble's corpse drops limp to the floor, ending his reign of terror forever. Looking visibly disturbed, one of their companions turns pale, prompting Beeson to check on him. He stammers that executing a bound captive felt less like justice and more like straight-up murder. Beeson shuts him down instantly, reminding him that this psycho almost turned them into ash moments ago. She adds that after murdering so many villagers, skinning the guy alive wouldn't have even the score. Meanwhile, Tyran notices a small diary lying discarded near the body. He flips through the pages, his expression darkening at the contents inside. It contains detailed logs of every town he wiped out, providing undeniable proof of his atrocities. Turning to the back pages, however, Tyran's eyes widen in shock. He finds bizarre magic formulas he's never encountered, wondering if that mysterious God dictated these as well. Beeson interrupts his thoughts, calling his name while he's studying the pages. She informs him that it's time to harvest the lingering mana from the body. Together, the 4 party members proceed to drain all the residual mana from the dead criminal. Later on, an official praises Beeson for taking down the rogue, complimenting her as the Carmine family's rising prodigy. Accepting the bounty payout, she modestly brushes off the heavy praise. Turning to Tyran, Beeson mentions her squad will continue roaming to hunt down demonic beasts. He passes him his portion of the bounty, asking what his next destination is. Tyran states he's heading out immediately, setting his sights directly on Abacha. Leaning in, Beeson seriously cautions him never to repeat the lunatic's words, as it could cause widespread panic. They exchange farewells, both feeling sure their paths will cross again down the line. Tyran agrees mentally, knowing it's pointless to stir up panic without hard proof to back up the claims. He sets off across the burning sands, beginning his long journey toward Abacha. As he travels, he notices a heavy shift in the atmosphere as the air grows thick with moisture. Testing his environment, Tyran snaps his fingers to spark a minor flame spell. Watching the weak spark struggle to stay lit, he realizes fire magic won't be very effective in this humid air. Fortunately, the damp climate makes a completely different elemental magic effortless to cast. His water spells feel significantly boosted, drawing almost 0 mana to maintain. This drastic elemental shift signals just one thing. He has officially arrived at his destination, the coastal city of Abacha. Over inside a bustling pub, a patron asks the crew if their vessel sets sail the next morning. The captain nods, confirming they must sail back toward the Emerald Desert, though he warns the route is infested with vicious mermen. His crewmates chimed in gloomily, reminding him that hostile pirates are an even bigger threat on those waters. The captain groans, grumbling that he'll end up spending his gold on their coffins rather than their actual paychecks. Eavesdropping on the whole exchange, Tyran casually walks over to their table, interrupts, asking if they're truly bound for the Emerald Desert region. The captain confirms the destination, but immediately warns that every single spot on his ship is taken. He jokes that taking another soul on board would mean dumping a barrel of rum into the ocean, which he refuses to do. Without saying a word, Tyran steps forward and rests his palm over an open mug. Baffled by the strange gesture, the captain asks what he thinks he's pulling. Within seconds, frost spreads from his palm, flash freezing the entire drink into solid ice. Captain's eyes pop out, stunned to realize an actual mage is standing right in front of him. Realizing his rank, the entire crew leaps up to bow and flatter him, though Tyran quickly tells them to cut the brown-nosing. Captain respectfully asks what his business is, and Tyran states he simply needs passage to Enrol. He specifies he's not asking for a free ride, but offering his magic to guard the ship against any monsters or raiders. Captain sheepishly admits his vessel is crude, lacking both proper wages and comfortable sleeping arrangements. Tyran brushes it off, promising that neither gold nor luxury matters as long as he reaches his destination. Overjoyed by the response, the captain nearly leaps out of his boots with excitement. He eagerly seals the deal, welcoming Tyran onto the crew on the spot. Leading him down to the harbor, the captain proudly escorts Tyran onto his modest vessel. Elsewhere in a distant realm, violent fires reduce entire neighborhoods to ash. Pure pandemonium reigns as the unchecked inferno consumes everything in sight. The lone knight clutches his hilt tight, completely paralyzed by sheer terror. Standing right before him, a towering demonic beast snarls down at his trembling prey. Mustering every ounce of bravery, the warrior swings hard, cleaving the beast right down the middle. Glancing sideways, he spots a ruthless dark elf closing in on his flank. He barely manages to strike the elf down before another assassin manifests directly behind him. Channeling all his force into a full swing, he carves through one foe to hit the next, only for another to ambush his blind spot. The onslaught feels never-ending as an endless wave of dark elves encircles the isolated knight. Panic sets in as the soldier realizes he'll be ripped to shreds if backup doesn't arrive fast. Out of nowhere, bright blue electrical sparks start dancing across the dark sky above. Those sparks escalate into massive lightning strikes, obliterating every enemy encircling the soldier in a flash. Baffled by the sudden divine rescue, the knight turns around to see who saved him. He spots Mesa standing there, the spellcaster responsible for the dramatic save. He gasps out his gratitude, but she sharply commands him to fall back to the main army immediately. Nodding hastily, the warrior sprints off to rejoin the rest of the troops. Right on cue, Kadram materializes from the shadows right behind Mesa. Glances over her, asking if she sustained any injuries during the clash. She dismisses his concern, but he urges caution anyway, reminding her that her life is far more vital than a few low-rank foot soldiers. Mesa, brushing off his worry, asks for a status update, to which Kadram reveals they've nearly secured the sector, though the secret tunnel remains missing. Acknowledging the news, Mesa instructs him to alert her the second the tunnel is spotted, declaring she'll enter it solo. Without waiting for a response, she takes off into the sky. Kadram glares after her retreating form, utterly exasperated by her reckless attitude. Grumbles under his breath about how unbearable she is, blaming her brother for spoiling her completely rot. He muses darkly that if she maintains this foolish arrogance, she'll meet the exact same tragic fate as her mother and brother. View shifts back to the ocean vessel, now gliding across the open, blue sea. Tyran leans against the railing, gazing out over the endless waters while deep in his thoughts. Dawns on him that he lacks a concrete plan once he sets foot in the dangerous territory of Zahar. He has no lead on his father's whereabouts, and infiltrating Zahar blindly is practically a suicide mission. Armed with nothing but his mother's portrait and a few trinkets, he worries how many months he'll waste hunting for a single clue. As he worries over his uncertain future, heavy footsteps approach him from behind. The ship's captain strolls over, asking the young mage what's weighing so heavily on his mind. Tyran lightly dismisses it, replying he was merely reflecting on the vast expanse of the open sea. Captain chuckles, asking if the waves are making him seasick, but Tyran assures him his stomach is fine. Captain notes that word reached him about Tyran picking up naval skills from the chief mate. Tyran nods, admitting he's been enjoying the lessons and finding seamanship surprisingly entertaining. Before they can continue, a crew member shouts across the deck that mealtime has arrived. Grinning, the captain dismisses the crew to head down and grab their rations. Tyran picks at his plate, staring at a dull slop that looks entirely unappetizing. Nearby, he listens to a sailor praise the gods that the ship stocked up on pickled cabbage. Sailor explains to his mate that without sour cabbage, their gums would bleed and rot from ocean scurvy. Curious, Tyran asks how sailors discovered that cure, to which the man shrugs, noting that word of mouth just carried the trick around. He adds with a laugh that back in the old days, clueless sailors used to eat raw mermaid flesh to survive. Interrupting their meal, a loud alarm bell suddenly blares across the ship. A mid-sized vessel appears on the horizon, heading straight toward their position. Crewman screams up to the crow's nest asking if it's a pirate vessel, but the lookout shouts back that he can't confirm it yet. He alerts the deck that the approaching ship isn't flying any noble house banners. The sailor curses under his breath, swearing they're raiders and complaining that the ComC was too suspicious from the start. Without waiting for commands, every sailor draws his weapon, bracing for an incoming clash. Sailor frantically asks for orders, pointing out that the enemy vessel is swifter and will easily run them down if they flee. He suggests that if the tailwinds hold, they might just manage to make a break for a neighboring island. Ignoring the panic, the captain looks straight at Tyran, asking if his magic can take care of this threat. Tyran casually replies that as long as no high-tier knights or nobles are aboard, he'll wipe them out without trouble. Gaining confidence, the captain commands his men to spin the helm and charge head-on for a surprise attack. Crew executes the maneuver, steering their vessel directly alongside the pirate ship. Seeing them pull up, the pirates scream across the water, demanding full surrender in exchange for their lives. Tyran naively asks if pirates actually keep their word, to which the sailor snorts that getting thrown to sharks is their idea of mercy. Nodding at the harsh reality, Tyran gathers his strength and prepares to strike. Taking a quick burst of speed, he leaps clear over the gap, landing squarely on the enemy deck. His fearless invasion leaves the pirate crew stunned in absolute disbelief. None of the raiders anticipated a lone kid jumping onto a hostile ship like a suicidal target. Before they can laugh, massive currents of ocean water begin defying gravity around the hull. Hovering seawater rapidly solidifies, shaping into deadly, jagged ice spikes. Realizing they're facing a mage, the thugs charge to disrupt his focus. But the rain of ice spikes impales half their forces before they can even reach him. Scanning the panicking raiders, Tyran cold-heartedly concludes that lowlifes like these deserve zero pity. Decides right then and there that not a single pirate on this deck will leave alive. Knowing these bandits live by murder and theft, Tyran unleashes his full offensive power. Surviving raiders freak out, screaming at their crewmates to do something before they all get wiped out. Desperate to survive, a small group of thugs forces themselves to charge at Tyran despite knowing it's a suicide run. Tyran glares back at them with absolute calm, his cold blue eyes locking onto his attackers. He knows his target, and on cue, the ocean around the vessel violently churns under his command. Driven to insanity by fear, half the crew charges blindly into battle while the rest leap into the ocean to escape. But regardless of whether they fight or flee, every single one of them faces the exact same doom. Shaking with fear, the bandits keep swinging their blades wildly, driven by sheer survival instinct. They foolishly believe that overpowering the young wizard with sheer numbers will give them a fighting chance. Unfortunately for the raiders, Tyran is fully committed to annihilating every single foe in his path. Sharpening his focus, Tyran glides around the deck with blinding speed, effortlessly countering multiple attackers at once. With a quick glance, he reads their clumsy swing trajectories, dodging every strike before it lands. The raiders quickly learn that melee combat is useless against him, as he deflects every single sword strike. Demonstrating top-tier combat mastery, he redirects one pirate's sword swing straight into the chest of another. With total chaos breaking out on deck, Tyran decides it's time to shift tactics and wipe them out even faster. No matter how many he cuts down, more armed thugs keep pouring up from the lower decks to swarm him. Unfazed by their numbers, Tyran continues his assault while commanding massive sea waves to batter the hull. Whenever the crowd gets tight, he creates distance with a quick leap to set up his next spell. He knows heavy elemental attacks require range, and the chaotic sea bends to his will with increasing force. He keeps hurling pressurized water strikes, instantly crushing any remaining bandits foolish enough to resist. Condensing the ocean water into lethal spears, he pierces straight through the charging pirates. A few remaining thugs attempt a sneaky ambush amidst the chaos, but their pathetic hope vanishes instantly against the mage's overwhelming power. Suddenly, a burly pirate grabs Tyran from behind, screaming for his crewmates to slash him down while he's trapped. The other bandits swing their swords at the target, but seconds later, the attackers' eyes widen in absolute horror. No matter how desperately they swung their blades, they couldn't even leave a tiny nick on Tyran's skin. It was like his entire body was coated in unbreakable armor that no weapon could ever hope to cut through. Seeing that these guys couldn't deal a single scratch, Tyran decided it was finally his turn to attack. He had zero intention of dragging this fight out any longer. In one smooth move, he wiped out half a dozen attackers simultaneously. His counter was so vicious and rapid that the pirates didn't even get a second to figure out what was happening. Once he decided these scum didn't deserve any pity, their fate was pretty much guaranteed. For the next few minutes, the ship echoed with nothing but the pathetic screams of terrified men. When the dust finally settled, Tyran was the last man standing on deck, gripping his glowing blade. Every last pirate who thought they were hotshots ended up completely destroyed. Thanks to this total wipeout, the other crew now had a golden opportunity to take the pirate ship for themselves. Naturally, the entire crew was absolutely hyped. Offering a lift to this random strange guy turned out to be the best decision they ever made. Captain was super impressed with Tyran, playfully teasing that he'd make a world-class cleaning guy. He kept giggling, adding that if Tyran kept clearing out threats this thoroughly, his own sailors would end up unemployed. Spotting all the blood splatters covering Tyran, a sailor advised him to check in with their onboard healer. Tyran casually told them not to sweat it since none of the blood was actually his, and just like that, they launched their trip. Now floating with a small two-vessel fleet instead of just one, the key figures met up inside the captain's room. Captain mentioned that this seized ship was originally a trading vessel that disappeared around Abacha ages ago. Tyran was pretty stunned when the captain dropped the bomb that he used to be the rightful owner of that exact vessel. After getting over the initial shock, Tyran questioned what the captain intended to do with the stolen ship now. The captain laid out his choices, like claiming a reward from the owners, but said his best bet was flipping it at the Northern Sea Archipelago since it was directly along their way. Added that boats were in crazy high demand over there, meaning they'd get maximum cash for it. Tyran realized he still needed to compensate the crew properly for giving him a ride. He offered to cut them in on the ship's sale profits as a fair payment for their sailing services. The captain loved the sound of that deal and immediately shook on it. Right in the middle of their chat, a terrified sailor barged in yelling that they had discovered a mermaid down below. Captain freaked out instantly, assuming they were about to get jumped by an army of merfolk. But the guy quickly cleared up that it wasn't an invasion. Turns out, the pirates had previously snagged a mermaid and kept her trapped in the lower deck. He mentioned the entity was chained up in the cargo hold, catching both Tyran and the captain's full attention. Wanting to stick to their deal, the sailors jumped straight into tidying up the messy deck. On their way down, the captain wanted to confirm for himself if this rare find was actually locked up in the hold. He used the moment to invite Tyran along to inspect the strange captive. As they descended the stairs, Tyran asked if merfolk generally fetched crazy prices on the black market. Captain noted that while prices fluctuated, a hot female mermaid could easily command 3 times the normal rate. Walking into the hold, the captain remarked on how mainland folks were totally nuts for legendary beasts. The second they hit the cargo room, Tyran saw the creature huddled in the dark corner. Taking a closer look, they realized it was a guy, which instantly crashed its potential price tag. Captain let out a disappointed sigh, knowing this skinny little dude wouldn't bring in much gold. He added they'd only make big cash if the kid happened to be a high-ranking royal who could shapeshift into a fish. Pissed off by the insult, the creature barked back that he wasn't just anyone, but Prince Armani, 47th in line to the northern throne. Tyran and the captain conferred, admitting that if this brat wasn't lying about his royal status, he might actually fetch a fortune. Still skeptical, the captain figured the kid was just lying to save his skin, demanding proof that he could turn into a fish. The young prince whined back that he couldn't shapeshift while stuck out of the ocean and wrapped in thick ropes. The duo, it totally felt like a cheap ploy so they'd untie him and let him break free. Captain turned to Tyran, asking what he wanted to do with their little prisoner. Tyran bluntly stated he'd put him down, reminding him that merfolk are notorious for devouring humans. Glancing at the huddled captive, both agreed they couldn't risk releasing him back into the ocean. Tyran charged up his magic, prepping a fatal hit to finish off the young merman right then and there. Staring right down the barrel of death, the sea prince shrieked, demanding to know how they dared execute royalty like him. Unfazed by the screaming, Tyran's hand continued glowing with deadly magical aura. Desperate, the boy begged for mercy, swearing he had never tasted human flesh or even considered it. Despite his panicked pleas, both guys gave him the ultimate cold shoulder. His eyes shot wide open in pure horror as he clenched his teeth, knowing he was seconds from dying. Suddenly, a light bulb went off, and he shouted to Tyran that if he let him live, he'd guide them straight to a giant hidden treasure. Noticing them pause, the kid realized he had successfully hooked them and might just make it out alive. He blurted out that the loot was a gift from Freya's gods, the exact deity they revered. So the kid got a temporary reprieve, and not long after, the lookout finally spotted land ahead. The harbor town coming into view, the crew began cheering their successful approach. They were hyped to hit the local bar for some booze after being bored out of their minds on open water. Right after pulling into port, the captain turned to Tyran to check if he was actually going to hunt the treasure. Tyran confirmed he'd go investigate, noting it was close enough that he'd be back before nightfall. He grabbed the heavy chains, securing the young sea prince. Loading his captive into a tiny rowboat, Tyran paddled off into the vast ocean. The young prince whined, asking if all these chains were really necessary because they didn't trust him not to bolt. He flexed his pride, declaring that as royalty, he would never go back on a promise. Tyran ignored the bragging in complete silence, propelling the boat smoothly using pure magical energy. As they coasted across the water, the kid hedged his bets, warning Tyran not to blame him if the loot wasn't mind-blowing. Before long, darkness enveloped the endless ocean. Brushing off his excuses, Tyran simply ordered him to keep pointing the direction. Arriving at the exact spot, Tyran prepped himself and plunged headfirst into the waves. He descended deep into the abyss, hunting for the sacred relic of the goddess. Submerged in the dark water, he began carefully scanning the murky surroundings. Exactly as he anticipated, a colossal, hyper-dangerous sea serpent was patrolling the ancient ruins. Now he was forced to go toe-to-toe with this gigantic-scaled leviathan. Tyran breathed a sigh of relief when he caught sight of the tiny islet the kid had talked about. Honestly, the island offered a pretty breathtaking view. Channeling magic through his hands into the water, he forced the rowboat to zoom ahead. Tyran cast a detection pulse to scout for hidden threats lurking above or beneath the waves. He was super glad there were no other merfolk nearby, as fighting them underwater would be a giant headache. At the very least, this spot didn't seem to be their main hideout. Despite the violent waves crashing against the jagged cliffs, the surrounding area felt surprisingly quiet. A short while later, their abandoned boat rocked at the shore as the duo ventured into the woods. Scanning the trees, the Sea Prince insisted that the target location had to be right around here. He didn't lock eyes on it immediately, though. Taking a second look, he realized they were practically standing right on top of it. The prince pointed toward a clearing, but Tyran squinted at it, doubting if the kid was pulling his leg. It looked like any random body of water, just a plain, peaceful lake. Tyran remarked that the lake looked shallow, but the kid corrected him, stating it plummeted down nearly 300 meters. For an underwater creature, that depth was a total walk in the park. For a land-dwelling human, diving that far was a nightmare task. Without dropping his guard, Tyran promptly secured the prince to a thick tree trunk. Annoyed at being restrained again, the young prince whined that Tyran should trust him, promising he'd never flee. Panicking slightly, the kid reminded him that if Tyran died down there, he'd be left to rot and starve while tied to this trunk. Stripping down for the dive, Tyran dryly told him he'd better pray extra hard for his survival then. He paused at the edge for a beat, watching his distorted reflection dance on the water's surface. Taking a massive gulp of air to steel his nerve, he launched himself right into the murky depths. Slicing through the water, he kicked as hard as he could, aiming to touch the bed in record speed. Surrounded by pitch-black, freezing blue water, he had to navigate blindly for the target artifact. He darted his eyes everywhere, desperate to spot it before running out of air. After all, he wasn't built with gills and couldn't breathe underwater forever. Eventually, he broke into a glowing pocket of water, where he could actually see clearly. Clinging onto his remaining air, he swam closer to investigate a strange shape in the distance. His jaw practically dropped beneath the waves at the insane sight awaiting him. Positioned before him was a monstrous, completely petrified megasnake. The petrified beast was utterly humongous, but Tyran realized he'd hit the jackpot. Perched right on top was the frozen statue of an armored knight who had clearly battled the serpent. The shock was so intense that he almost opened his mouth to gasp underwater. Flapping a hand over his mouth, he reminded himself not to waste his precious oxygen. Kicked hard, rushing straight toward the armored figure. Even turning to stone hadn't robbed the massive serpent of its terrifying presence. Having risked everything, he scrambled onto the statue to see if his trip was worth it. Inspecting the knight up close, nothing about the armor seemed extraordinary at first. Doubted if this guy was truly a divine warrior of Freya, bewildered by how perfectly preserved the body remained. Just then, a faint, radiant glitter on the knight's belt caught his attention. It was a glowing golden compass, confirming this was indeed the legendary artifact. Meanwhile, back on dry land, the young sea prince remained stuck tied to that tree. Suddenly, Tyran broke through the surface of the lake, coughing and inhaling air greedily. The merman cheered in relief, shouting to ask if he actually secured the loot. Treading water, Tyran gasped back that he snagged an item, though he had no clue what it actually did yet. Looking at the merman with his new senses, Tyran could suddenly view the boy's raw life energy radiating outwards. The kid's power nodes and health bars were completely exposed to his vision. Touching the golden compass, Tyran pieced together that this artifact was giving him the ability to sense life force. Figuring the deal was satisfied, he pointed a finger toward the captive and unleashed a snippet of magic. Under the magical strain, the heavy chains binding the prince shattered instantly into pieces. The young sea prince was totally stunned. He was actually let go without a catch. Honestly, he had fully expected to be hauled away and auctioned off again. Tyran dryly remarked that he always pays back his debts, and since the kid kept his word, he was doing the same. As Tyran pulled his clothes back on, the kid gave him a backhanded compliment, calling him a surprisingly decent demon. Offering that brief note of thanks, the sea prince flipped and dove straight back into the lake. The second he submerged, his body shifted, morphing into a majestic giant aquatic creature. That transformation proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he really was genuine royal blood. Watching him swim away, Tyran chuckled, realizing the kid had been telling the absolute truth from the start. Shortly after, the focus shifts back to their ship anchored safely at the harbor. Stepping back on deck, Tyran caught a scene of multiple crewmen receiving a harsh beatdown from their commander. They were getting flogged for wreaking absolute havoc in the local town overnight. Watching the chaotic discipline session, Tyran asked around to find out what triggered this punishment. Crewmate explained that those idiots had broken curfew and stayed out partying all night. They blew off the captain's orders, wrecked property, and ignited a massive brawl inside a port tavern. His newly unlocked compass vision, Tyran effortlessly scanned the vital meters of every single man present. He watched their health bars drain lower with every heavy hit they took from the whips. Once the drama wound down, Tyran prepped to head into the market to restock on essential supplies. Meanwhile, over in the captain's office, the boss was haggling hard with a potential buyer for the captured vessel. The captain flinched slightly in surprise when Tyran casually strolled into the room. Tyran had basically barged right into the middle of their serious business deal. The captain introduced the buyer as Captain Samuel, noting he was ready to hand over the cash for the boat. Listening to the terms, Tyran agreed it was a solid payout, but pointed out one critical flaw. A guy raised in a quiet town, hauling around mountains of heavy gold coins, was just asking for trouble. He reasoned it made way more sense to get paid in high-tier magic items or rare relics instead. Samuel chimed in, suggesting Turan travel to the regional capital's rival city, famous for its legendary beast tamers. He assured him that with that kind of capital, buying a powerhouse combat pet would be a walk in the park. Settling all business details, the crew weighed anchor and set off into the sea once again. Initially, sailing was smooth, and the men joked that their biggest headache was just lugging all that heavy gold. Out of nowhere, the lookout spotted ominously dark tempest clouds brewing directly in their path. Within seconds, daylight vanished into pitch blackness as severe winds whipped up violence. Giant rogue waves slammed against the hull, tossing the heavy ship around like a wooden toy. Panic erupted as sailors screamed at each other to drop the sails before the wind snapped the masts. Securing all crates below deck was the only way to keep the ship from capsizing and sinking. Every tick of the clock brought even more aggressive waves slamming into the deck. Walking on deck was pure suicide, and a couple of poor souls got tossed straight into the roaring ocean. The whole crew was trapped in a total nightmare scenario. They desperately needed to untie the ropes, but stepping out meant courting instant death in the ocean. Fortunately for these desperate guys, they had Kim standing right beside them. Kim reacted without hesitation, activating his abilities to stabilize the boat and save the cargo. Mind control telekinesis was just a fraction of the broken abilities he had in his arsenal. Utilizing telekinesis to handle the heavy ropes, he ordered the sailors to retreat below deck. Maintaining his focus, he steered the entire hull telekinetically, forcing it to slice straight through the waves. If Kim hadn't taken direct control, the vessel and every soul on it would have drowned deep in the ocean. Thanks to his clutch intervention, every single man pulled through alive. Outdoors, the tempest raged on, while blinding strikes of lightning split the black clouds. Inside the lower cabins, the shivering sailors huddled together, trying to recover some body heat. Half the crew was violently trembling from the ice-cold ocean spray that had soaked them to the bone. Kim checked in on them, but scanning their energy signatures showed a few guys were approaching hypothermia. Captain bowed his head in gratitude, admitting they'd all be fish food without Kim's quick intervention. Asked if they'd survive the night, the captain noted it came down to the ship's sturdiness and the driver's skill. Even so, the sight of his shivering, freezing crew made it obvious they couldn't endure much longer. Watching them struggle, Kim realized he needed to step up and provide a quick solution. Taking charge, he instructed all the freezing sailors to huddle close around him in a wide circle. Captain panicked, assuming Kim was about to light an open flame, a total death sentence on a wooden vessel. But Kim calmed his fears, promising to control the magic fire so it wouldn't scorch a single plank. Delivering on his promise, he conjured a localized warmth sphere that instantly cut through the freeze. Soothing heat radiated across the space, transforming the freezing cabin into a cozy haven. It didn't take more than a few seconds for the crew to stop shaking and feel total relief. Bathing in the soothing magic, the sailors relaxed, blown away by such precise spellcasting, which was insanely rare. Watching Kim, the captain silently realized the old proverbs about the noble authority of true sorcerers were 100% real. Those ancient sayings declared that while humans serve sorcerers and sorcerers hold dominion, mages ultimately act as humanity's shields. Pushing past the storm, they eventually arrived at Kamad, the massive desert hub of the northern Enrol region. Docking at the busy harbor, local laborers immediately began hauling the heavy cargo off the deck. Handing over a pouch of cash, the captain told Kim it was a modest tip for saving their skins. He revealed the sailors collected it from their pirate ship payout, begging him to accept it so the gods wouldn't curse them for ungratefulness. Kim happily takes his reward, promising the crew that the next time they run into each other, dinner is entirely on him. That promise gets the sailors hyped, and they all start chanting his name, proudly calling him Sir Knight. They give him a roaring send-off, shouting about how much they're going to miss having him around. Showcasing pure respect and gratitude for saving them, the captain lowers himself into a deep bow. As Kim looks back at the cheering crew, he chuckles to himself, thinking what a lively group of guys they turned out to be. Stepping into the city, he's greeted by the everyday hustle and bustle of townsfolk carrying on with their business. He leisurely strolls through the crowded streets, taking in the lively atmosphere around him. Out of nowhere, a weird sensation hits him, causing him to freeze and lock his glare on a specific spot. Standing right in the center of the crowd is an extraordinary figure, practically radiating a vivid blue aura. Compared to the ordinary people nearby, this person sticks out like a glowing thumb. Driven by curiosity, Kim walks up to the person and respectfully calls out to get a reaction. The individual spins around and immediately inquires whether Kim happens to be a knight serving house Dermot. Realizing who's talking, the knight turns, bows respectfully before Tyran, and offers his full service. Tyran states his name, briefly explains his origin, and requests a private meeting with the leader of the household. It doesn't take long before the guide leads Turan right up to the gates of a giant estate. Cut to the next scene, and Turan is lounging comfortably inside, sporting some top-tier fancy attire. The host seated opposite him praises his refined appearance, remarking how well the clothes complement him. Exuding an overwhelming sense of authority, this formidable individual is none other than Cal Durman, the patriarch of the house. An intense silence fills the room as both men quietly evaluate one another in an unannounced battle of wills. Despite the suffocating aura directed at him, Turan holds his ground firm and stares right back without flinching. Breaking the heavy atmosphere, the house leader politely opens the dialogue by inquiring about his guest's identity and heritage. Turan introduces himself openly, disclosing that he belongs to a once great, now ruined bloodline of guardians. Without wasting any time, he skips the small talk and mentions he's here, specifically, to purchase one of their famed magical beasts. Cal rises from his seat, informing Turan that his daughter will handle the rest of the business deal. Unable to suppress his growing suspicion, Turan asks Cal straight out if he has ever encountered a man with his exact appearance. Catching a subtle, split-second pause from Cal at the mention of this, Turan becomes even more intrigued. Cal concedes that Turan's face does indeed bring back memories of a figure from his earlier days. Cal's daughter then escorts Turan out, casually remarking that she originally mistook him for just another broke, fallen aristocrat. She notes that buying expensive magical creatures as a guardian descendant implies he must be making serious money as a high-tier mercenary. While she continues babbling, Turan tunes her out entirely, unable to shake off the patriarch's subtle answer. Searching for any clue regarding his origin, he reflects on his father's distinct features: curly hair, prominent ears, and a sharp, defined jawline. Knowing his mother had unremarkable looks, he concludes that the individual Cal recognized had to be his father. Deep in contemplation, Turan is brought back to reality when the host's daughter calls him out to enter the next chamber. Navigating through an extensive corridor, they finally step inside the sprawling, enclosed family sanctuary. Watching scores of magical creatures thriving in environments mirrored after their natural habitats leaves Turan completely thrilled. He's absolutely thrilled. He's blown away by how impeccably designed the facility is, tailored to suit the exact living conditions of every individual species. Stunned by the display, reality kicks in as Turan begins stressing over the outrageous price tags attached to these beasts. Following closely behind her, he contemplates whether he should just cut his losses and abandon the whole idea of buying one. They pause in front of an enclosure, with Turan internally panicking about how he can't possibly afford a beast that demands a chest of pure gold. At that moment, a set of magnificent dark wings rustling inside a nearby cage catches his attention. The creature within remains poised and silent, tracking Turan's every single movement with composure. Its eyes glow with a sharp, captivating intensity that commands instant respect. Sensing a realistic opportunity, Turan turns to the girl and inquires about the asking price for this particular beast. Examining it closely, he realizes it's an absolute steal, even if buying it drains practically every coin in his purse. When he asks about its unique trait, she informs him that the bird possesses extraordinary intellectual capacity. She elaborates that despite being a sought-after breed, its ego is the real issue. It flat-out rejects masters it views as inferior in intelligence. Throughout her explanation, the magnificent bird keeps its piercing gaze anchored firmly on Turan. Glaring back, Turan asks out loud if the creature can genuinely comprehend their conversation. He decides to test whether the bird's reputation holds true, regardless of its annoyed expression. She confirms its sharp mind, sharing that she even attempted to teach it how to read, albeit without much success. She considers it a missed potential since the beast boasts powerful stats, great size, and a proven track record of preying on rival monsters. It simply lacks obedience. With proper discipline, its market value would easily double or triple. In an unexpected shift, the bird appears as if it's attempting to communicate directly with Cal. The girl gets chills, stunned by the possibility that the unruly creature is actually cooperating. Gesticulating toward his chest, Cal asks the bird if it's choosing him as its new master. However, the sudden shift strikes him as rather bizarre. He doesn't consider himself extraordinary, leading him to believe there's a hidden motive behind its choice. He lays down a strict condition right off the bat. If he purchases the beast, it must commit fully to learning how to read. Demonstrating its high cognition, the bird nods back in clear understanding. Without further delay, the magical ritual is initiated. Cal executes a binding spell, establishing a permanent master-servant connection with the creature. The moment the contract solidifies, the bird glides down gracefully onto its master's arm. The house patriarch is amazed watching an untamable creature follow Cal's directives without hesitation. Impressed, he advises Cal to look after the extraordinary bird with care. He then mentions that Cal is free to depart with his new companion. Yet, a lingering doubt nudges at his mind. He asks if Cal shares any ties with a figure named Lord Talus, a name that means nothing to Cal. Noticing Cal's genuine confusion, the host quickly backtracks and asks him to disregard the question. Despite brushing it off, Cal ponders if his physical appearance reminded the host of that specific nobleman. Seizing the moment, Cal decides to present a lead of his own and ask a crucial question. Drawing a folded portrait from his tunic, he asks the host if he recognizes the lady sketched on the parchment. The paper carries a detailed portrait of Cal's birth mother. Unfamiliar with the face, the host examines the portrait meticulously. Failing to place her, he remarks that a woman of such striking beauty wouldn't be someone he'd easily forget if they had met. Expressing his gratitude, Cal decides to let his new companion stretch its wings outside. With the gold transferred, the purchase is formally finalized. All that remains is for Cal to take his beast and depart. However, he insists on testing out its mobility first. Touching onto the eagle's powerful claws, he prepares for a test fly. The beast launches straight into the air, sweeping Cal across the terrain at breakneck speeds. Dangling from its claws as they soar, Cal thoroughly enjoys the thrilling flight. Returning shortly after, he is greeted by staff offering a grand meal. The sales daughter checks in on him, asking if he enjoyed his quick flight test. She then takes the opportunity to introduce Cal to the rest of their entourage. A battle-scarred warrior chimed in, inquiring if his destination lies near Arabian territory. The girl reprimands him instantly, telling him not to compare their distinguished guest to those desperate vultures. Taking the scolding in stride, the scarred man introduces himself, boasting about his proud ancestral roots. They exchange a handshake, though the crushing grip clearly signals a test of strength rather than basic politeness. The muscular warrior immediately registers the sheer physical power underlying Cal's hand. Proving his guardian ancestry, Cal's physical constitution is legit elite. When the lady requests a glimpse of his newly bought beast, Cal clarifies that he's released it to roam the skies. He reassures her that he can summon it back instantly whenever required. Single call is all it takes for the giant eagle to swoop down right to him. Intrigued, she reaches out to pet it, but the eagle lashes out aggressively, rejecting her touch instantly. Stung by the harsh rejection, the woman immediately vents her frustration by shouting insults at the bird. The insult enrages the eagle, but Tyran quickly intervenes to cool its temper. The mini-drama settled, an extravagant feast is brought out for everyone. As they enjoy the royal banquet, the topic shifts toward rumors of dark elf sightings in the western regions. Discuss the Arbian subjugation army, noting that a commander named Mesa leads the unit. The meal proceeds smoothly alongside chatter about various political rumors and local news. The annoying lady keeps mouthing off, claiming the opposing household's leader is hideously unattractive. She adds that the family's successor is a pampered brat living a life of soft luxury. Duran stays quiet, ignoring the noise until the mention of Lord Talus catches his attention. Interrupting the chatter, Tyran immediately presses for details on Lord Talus's identity. They clarify that he's the family head's younger brother and current vice master of House Zahar, effectively controlling all real power. Dawns on Tyran that his potential father might be a far more dangerous and influential political figure than he bargained for. As he sinks deeper into his thoughts, the eagle attempts to pull him back to reality. Using its beak, the creature scratches words into the dirt to show off its newfound skills. However, Tyran remains completely absorbed in his internal crisis. He panics considering the terrifying ramifications if that high-ranking leader is indeed his father. He fears that the second House Zahar discovers his survival. They won't hesitate to wipe him out instantly. Snapping back to reality, he lowers his glance to check on the eagle. Scratched across the dirt was the phrase Black Eagle. Reading the text, Tyran chuckles and corrects its minor spelling mistake. He then asks if the bird has settled on an actual name for itself. The bird quickly scribbles, "Not yet," into the soil. Tyran jokes around, asking if "not yet" is going to be its official name. Looking visibly insulted, the beast furiously shakes its head in refusal. Amused by the reaction, Tyran asks it to clarify what it actually wants. The creature spells out on the earth that it simply likes being with Tyran. Patting its head, he reminds the bird that it still has plenty of learning ahead. Even so, the hidden meaning behind its words stays stuck in his head. Right on cue, a guy strolls over, mentioning he's heading out for a quick warm-up hunt and invites Tyran to join. When Tyran declines, stating he's departing today, the man feigns disappointment, complaining that friends shouldn't keep secrets like that. Tyran sees right through the friendly facade, knowing the guy just wants an excuse to flex his martial superiority. The eagle scowls at the fellow while he brags about his mastery over the local terrain, offering his guiding services. Tyran turns down the offer politely, prompting the guy to walk off while leaving the offer open. How quickly the guy backed off feels unnatural to Tyran, leaving him on high alert. Taking off the bad feeling, he makes his way toward a nearby outpost structure. Once inside, Tyran remarks that an escort wasn't necessary, but the guard claims he's simply adhering to the master's direct commands. Stepping up to the counter, Tyran requests a survival manual for the desert alongside scriptures detailing Enril. He sets down 2 valuable artifacts as direct payment for the literature. Book in hand, Tyran wastes no time making his exit from the fortress grounds. He judges that despite the terrible map quality, the Zaharbak text likely holds reliable intel. Suddenly detecting a strange ripple in the air, he glances toward the tree line. Matches the exact ominous presence he felt back in town. Both master and beast picked up the unnatural threat simultaneously. Heavy gates swing wide, marking his transition out into the open wild. Putting distance between them and the fort, he suggests easing their pace to the bird. The eagle vigorously shakes its head, rejecting the idea of dropping their guard. Tyran insists, clarifying that he simply prefers taking a walk for a moment. Unbeknownst to them, an owl tracks their movements from afar. The owl sits motionless on a high branch as the pair walks beneath it. Right then, Tyran's combat senses trigger an alarm. He freezes, carefully reading his surroundings. He shouts into the open air, demanding the stalker step out of the shadows. Figure emerges from the brush, surprised that Tyran was aware of his presence all along. Pointing at the giant avian, the man ridicules Tyran for walking when he has a flying mount. He spins a phony story about spotting a solitary traveler and offering friendly backup. Tyran skips the games and bluntly asks if the stalker is targeting his mana pool. Caught off guard, Dolph scrambles to cook up a convincing excuse. Flashing a sinister grin, he mockingly asks if Tyran dared to walk into the danger zone completely unassisted. Tyran mutters under his breath that he now gets why nobility despises desperate, fallen aristocrats. Dolph sneers, laughing at being lectured by a guy whose situation is equally pathetic. He senses Tyran's massive magic reserves, but notes his frail physical condition. Tyran admits his physical body is weak, making his massive mana pool a tempting target for scavengers. He then gives a silent gesture, sending his eagle soaring into the clouds. Stalker focuses intently on Tyran's words. Releasing his aura, Tyran notes with satisfaction that the trap worked flawlessly. Watching Tyran fade into thin air, the stalker licks his lips, anticipating an easy kill. Dolph laughs it off, mistaking it for low-tier stealth magic used by weaklings to hide. He taunts Tyran to stop hiding, bragging that breaking basic stealth spells is child's play for him. Suddenly, his confidence shattered as Tyran's mana trace completely vanishes. His eyes dilate in horror as he realizes the sheer scale of the stealth spell. Without warning, a high-speed projectile hurtles straight toward his face. Dolph is thrown into absolute confusion. He panics, unable to figure out the trajectory of the strike. Before he can reposition, a second heavy strike lands square on his body. An even more brutal blow crushes straight into his abdomen. In absolute panic, he raises his arms to block the unseen onslaught. Pushing his mana to the limit, he erupts a wall of flames surrounding his position. Dolph believes illuminating the field will force Tyran out of concealment, leaving him open to a counterattack. Unexpectedly, a massive flaming orb manifests directly above him in the clouds. Except it isn't just a single projectile. 6 colossal meteor-like fireballs hover menacingly overhead. The fiery barrage begins descending at terrifying speeds straight toward the ground. Cocky look on Dolph's face dissolves instantly into utter horror. A massive spell detonates directly on top of him. Dolph channels energy into his legs, slamming the earth to launch himself clear of the impact zone. Following the blast, the residual flames dissipate into smoke. Severely wounded, he screams frantically into the empty desert for his opponent to fight face-to-face. Dolph loses his mind entirely, screaming blindly into the dust. His eyes dart around frantically, searching for an exit strategy. Overwhelmed by fear, cold sweat drips heavily down his forehead. Reaches the terrifying conclusion that survival requires immediate retreat. Taking on a noble mage within desert terrain is a suicidal disadvantage. Desperate for speed, he tears off his upper clothes to reduce wind drag. He gambles on the assumption that an opponent lacking physical specs won't be able to match his sprint speed. However, an uneasy feeling prompts him to glance up at the clouds. Hovering high above, he spots Ian casually clinging to the eagle's claws. The giant bird looks utterly murderous after dealing with Dolph's antics. Ian coolly remarks that Dolph should be dead already, unless he's reliant on a defensive artifact. Paralyzed by terror, the man falls to his knees, pleading for his life. Ian pauses briefly before shutting him down, pointing out that Dolph knows mercy isn't an option. Channeling the eagle's fury alongside his own spellcraft, Ian releases a catastrophic blast. A devastating shockwave slams into Dolph, pulverizing him instantly. Gazing down at the broken target, Ian acknowledges that the adversary possessed decent combat specs. He considers that against an actual Zahar Guardian, his basic stone distraction might have failed completely. Extending his palm over the corpse, Ian announces the start of his harvest. Instantly, every drop of residual mana drains out of the enemy's corpse. Ian absorbs the swirling kinetic mana, reserves in a single breath. Concurrently, The relic fastened at his hip siphons off its share of the stolen magic. Ian stares down at his hands, trying to make sense of what just went down. He and his eagle companions stand there in awe, as the strange item hungrily soaks up every bit of energy. Instantly clicks for Ian that this thing acts as a vessel for magical power. Curious about its inner mechanics, he makes a mental note to inspect the artifact thoroughly when he gets a moment. Eagle spreads its wings, getting ready to swoop in and carry Ian back into the sky. Blocking the glare of the bright sun with his hand, Ian scans the distant skyline. He reassures himself that his final destination, the Tomb of the Gods, is right around the corner. Cut to a new spot a little later, where Ian is locked in conversation with a local informant. She scolds him for being foolish enough to escape from home on his own, questioning if he crossed paths with any rogue bandits or terrifying beasts. Tyran laughs it off, claiming pure luck saved him, before asking how to gain entry into the Tomb of the Gods, noting a book mentioned paying a fee. The informant clarifies that while getting in is normally a walk in the park, the entrance is completely shut down right now. She reveals that some high-profile figures showed up a week back, and they've kept the entire entryway sealed off ever since. Gesticulating upward with her finger, she implies these individuals hold immense power and authority. Tyran can't help but feel that something totally fishy is going on here. Elsewhere, a bunch of rugged men have huddled up inside a dark passageway. One fellow demands to know where on earth Purga has vanished to. Purga snaps back that he's standing right beside him, telling the guy to pipe down. The younger man throws a fit and pins the whole blame on Purga, shouting that they wouldn't be trapped here if Purga hadn't dragged them in. Purga fires back, warning the kid to stop playing the victim since nobody forced him to follow along. Without hesitation, he forcefully orders the boy to keep his mouth shut. His mind drifts back to his grandfather's stories about a secret subterranean cavern in the Tomb of the Gods, a discovery that guaranteed him the position of family patriarch. He reflects on the old legend, wondering what reality lies buried beneath these ruins. He once wrote it off as a simple bedtime story. Seeing how thoroughly hidden this spot is convinces him that the secret is real. Mid-thought, his eyes lock onto a massive wave of beasts, charging directly toward his position. Panicking, he realizes this treasure hunt is a complete trap, regretting ever stepping foot inside a place infested with creatures. He frantically asks for their remaining water supply, only for the kid to break the news that every drop is gone. Total confusion grips him as the situation spirals out of control. Suddenly, an unnatural sensation passes over him, making his eyes snap wide open. Despite the tongue being totally foreign, the words echoing in his mind ring loud and clear. The boy stammers out that the Death Hunter has arrived, leaving the man stunned as he asks if he's returned so soon. Meanwhile, the camera shifts to another part of the cavern. Terran scoffs, thinking it's utter foolishness to trust a handful of guys to deal with this whole mess. He decides staying in the shadows is his safest bet, knowing full well that being identified would ruin everything. Walking up to a local trader, Tyran points at a powder and inquires about it, learning that it's saltpeter. Tyran racks his brain, remembering that he's definitely come across this name somewhere. Flipping open his trusty book, he starts scanning the pages for confirmation. Discovers that people abandoned using it, simply because they didn't have all the required components for the formula. When Tyran asks the vendor if he carries any sulfur, the trader just gives him a blank stare, having zero clue what that is. Neighboring shopkeeper interrupts, pointing out that sulfur is extremely rare and only harvested near active volcanoes. Tyran mutters to himself that if he had this info earlier, he would have detoured through Kama. The seller tries upselling him some rare brown sugar instead, but Tyran politely declines, mentioning he isn't into sugary things. Short while later in a secluded spot, Tyran pulls out his slingshot and locks his target. He takes aim and launches a shot straight into a nearby boulder. Stone strikes with tremendous impact, sending shockwaves through the rock. He observes how much deadlier his attacks become when swapping ordinary pebbles for compressed sand. To top it off, he can manipulate the projectile's structure right in mid-flight. With only a handful of rocks left in his pouch, every shot needs to be calculated precisely. Not only is this move powerful, but it's perfect for tripping up foes or blinding them instantly. Thinking back to the situation, he ponders what business those high-end mighty nobles could possibly have spent days doing inside. Part of Tyran considers cutting his losses and taking off to a whole new city. On paper, taking that route sounds like a foolproof escape. Peering from behind a boulder, he calculates that if he slips in quietly, he can always make a high-speed break for it if spotted. Sudden echo catches his ear, forcing him to instantly drop low behind cover. A pair of sentries stroll by in casual conversation, grumbling about how all the racket being made is totally uncalled for. One guard absent-mindedly kicks a stray pebble lying on the path. Watching them, Tyran questions why the guards are treating those poor folks with such blatant disrespect. Creeping down the staircase, faint shadows begin dancing against the far wall. Driven by curiosity, Tyran pokes his head around the corner to catch a glance. He catches sight of a small gathering, surrounding what appears to be a captive in chains. Terrified, the prisoner stammers out a plea, asking what they plan to do with him. Tyran overhears a guard barking at the captive, shutting him up by warning him that speaking isn't permitted. At first, he mistook them for simple thugs, but the whole setup feels far more twisted. One of the goons shouts at the prisoner, ordering him to drag the heavy crates straight toward the shaft. Tyran pauses in second thoughts, debating whether to follow them, though he notices a surprisingly fresh breeze wafting from the depths. Setting his doubts aside, he begins carefully treading down into the gloom. Tyran analyzes the situation, suspecting that someone is utilizing high-level beast-taming magic. A mustachioed man leans over, nervously asking if Lord Purga is faring all right. Tyran listens closely, as the guy whispers that all hell will break loose if Purga's enemies get wind of this operation. Suddenly, all the pieces fall right into place for Tyran. This single secret explains why they've been squatting inside the tomb all these weeks. He pauses briefly, mulling over the sheer scale of what he's just uncovered. Even though walking into this means risking his neck, he realizes it presents a golden opportunity. Their sketchy motives are irrelevant to him. All that matters is retrieving the prize stashed deep within. Without another second of hesitation, he drops straight down into the darkness of the pit. Out of nowhere, a blinding white light swallows his entire field of view. After a moment of disorientation, Tyran successfully sneaks into the interior. Rubbing his throbbing temples, he scolds himself for acting like a total fool. It hits him that a snake like Purga wouldn't hesitate to betray anyone, let alone honor a favor. A sharp shriek pierces the air, drawing his gaze over toward the source. He spots a young fellow dropping limp onto the cold stone floor. Purga grins, declaring the progress smooth, and commands his goons to drag in more thralls from the entrance. He orders them to silence the racket, adding heartlessly that executing excess mouths will help preserve their rations. Witnessing this ruthless display, the full picture comes crashing down on Tyran. He recognizes this monster as Purga Zahar, a ruthless psycho who slaughters people over water without blinking, making any hope of reward a pipe dream. Tyran's eyes stretch wide in absolute disbelief. It dawns on him that he miscalculated the situation completely. He isn't the predator stalking the shadow, he's the prey. Eons ago, giant behemoths used to reign supreme over Enrol's lush valleys. Fueled by endless cruelty, they held humanity in bondage, draining their life force daily. However, fate shifted on one moonless night, shrouded in utter darkness. Out of the darkness, a mysterious figure emerged. This was the legendary Night Hunter, originating from Freya's divine clan. Raining down deadly arrows, he wiped out the giant race, granting humanity freedom. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the human leaders presented him with 3 of their finest maidens to marry. Among his offspring, the first lineage gained invisibility, the second mastered shadow manipulation, and the third inherited deadly venom. When the Night Hunter eventually ascended, his 6 children turned on each other in a bloody feud for control of the desert. The eldest, possessing invisibility, abandoned the senseless war and went into hiding. Meanwhile, the second brother with shadow powers and the third who wielded poison fought viciously for total power. Ultimately, the eldest sibling returned, crushed both rivals, and claimed absolute lordship over the desert. That victorious warrior went on to become the founding father of the Zahar bloodline. Out of nowhere, an eerie voice reverberates, asking Tyran if he is indeed the Night Hunter. He's left baffled as to why anyone would bring up that ancient legendary name at this exact second. Tyran ponders whether this cryptic voice is connected to the Zahar aristocrats who barged into the tomb. It enters his head that he himself might carry a trace of that ancient lineage. Sensing danger behind him, Tyran snaps his head around in alert. He feels positive that a hidden presence is lurking nearby. Tyran picks up on a subtle blue aura pulsating from down the corridor. Squinting through the darkness, he tries to make out the shape. Step by quiet step, he begins stealthily closing the distance. A second later, Tyran locks eyes on a beast standing with its back facing him. The creature is practically salivating, eager to tear into human flesh. Tyran recoils inwardly at how genuinely repulsive the monster looks. Detecting a shift in the air, the beast spins around violently to glare at him. Tyran catches his breath, realizing his cover is officially blown. Instantly, the monster lunges forward with terrifying speed. Observing its insane mobility, Tyran shifts into a stance to counter. Unleashing a surge of energy, Tyran blasts not just one, but 3 beasts simultaneously. Reeling from the blow, the creatures panic as searing heat scorches them. Seizing the moment while they recover, Tyran leaps back to get some space. He puzzles over how these beasts managed to trace his exact coordinates so quickly. Fortunately, he deduces that their tracking radius is fairly limited. Flipping a small stone into the palm of his hand, Tyran flings it upward. Using one of his custom rocks is crucial if he wants to maintain the advantage. Without pause, he follows up with a rapid-fire assault. Scoring a bullseye, he drops one of the beasts instantly. Remaining beasts don't give a damn about their fallen ally. Tyran notes their heartless behavior with mild amusement. He watches as the surviving creatures turn tail and sprint off, abandoning the corpse. Extending his palm, Tyran attempts to siphon the dead monster's lingering mana. He keeps his eyes glued, waiting to verify if the extraction succeeds. Slowly, blue strands of energy begin flowing out of the carcass. This confirms his theory that these entities are pure magic constructs. Glancing at his palm, Tyran sifts through the confusing clues. The overall energy he harvested turns out to be surprisingly meager. Given his current stats, he ought to feel a significantly larger surge than this weak trickle. To make matters weirder, his sacred relic remains totally unresponsive. Can't help wondering what kind of bizarre spawn he just fought. When that same ghostly voice speaks up again, Tyran groans, thoroughly annoyed by the constant whispering. Right at that moment, an unfamiliar presence registers nearby, making him turn. Catching the sound of approaching heavy boots, he quickly leaps back into hiding. A heavy-footed squad sweeps into the cavern section. The squad leader barks a sharp command for everyone to freeze. Men instantly halt, staring down at the lifeless monster at their feet. One guard queries if their mark ran in this direction, but his squadmate sighs, admitting they've been hopelessly lost for hours. Urga growls at them, warning that a hidden spy is lurking in the shadows close by. When a soldier wonders if a rescue team arrived, another shoots it down, pointing out that an entire squad would have alerted them ages ago. Vowing to flush out the intruder, Purga orders his men to lay traps everywhere. He initially commands them to torch the room to hunt the spy down. However, he reverses his decision, preferring to let the rat roam freely as live bait for the dungeon beasts. Tyran remains motionless in the shadows, quietly tracking their departure. Crossing his arms, he smirks at how utterly incompetent the entire squad is. 3 agonizing days, Tyran and Purga's squad play a tense game of hide-and-seek inside the labyrinth. Utilizing the enhanced vision granted by his artifact, Tyran easily spots every snare laid for him. Ironically, Purga's clumsy henchmen end up triggering their own traps. To avoid going in circles, Tyran begins carving subtle marks into the maze floor. Several corridors are totally choked by hordes of weird monsters. He decides to let Purga's squad act as his personal meat shields to clear the path. Forfeiting the tiny trickle of mana from those creatures doesn't bother him in the slightest. He casually spectates as the mercenaries battle for their lives against the horde. It isn't long before Purga's squad begins collapsing from total fatigue. One warrior whines in desperation that the horde seems entirely bottomless. Another soldier groans that had he anticipated this endless siege, he wouldn't have executed their human sacrifices so eagerly. Tyran bristles with disgust at how vile and heartless these mercenaries are. Fresh waves of beasts pour into the chamber, plunging the fight into utter bedlam. Tyran calculates that this absolute chaos provides his ideal window to move. While those idiots draw all the aggression, he'll freely explore the uncharted chambers. Navigating deep into the passage, a colossal stone portal looms before him. Tyran freezes in his tracks, gazing up at the monumental gateway. Awed by its imposing height, he ponders whether this door leads straight out of the maze. Suddenly, something catches his attention, causing his eyes to widen. The giant carved eyeball embedded in the archway begins swiveling in its socket. Boom reverberates as the eyeball inquires if he is the chaser hunter. Scanning him more thoroughly, the eye revokes its statement, declaring entry strictly forbidden. Magical eyeball angles itself downward to inspect him further. Its gaze locks directly onto the unique artifact strapped to his belt. Instantly, the eye shifts tone, announcing that the necessary requirement is fulfilled. It presents him with the choice, asking if he desires to step inside. Tyran pauses, contemplating the strange class name uttered by the portal. That particular specialization stems from a bloodline power he hasn't unlocked. The portal repeats its question, demanding a quick decision on entering. It dawns on him that the eye's focus was never on his person, but on the relic at his side. He inquires about the term Wave Walker. The entity confirms unrestricted access to that lore. The spirit clarifies that it permits breathing underwater, while heavily enhancing physical prowess in aquatic zones. He asks about the eyeball's identity, and it introduces itself as the gateway's guardian spirit. Comparing it to the mystical librarian, he probes about the inner contents, the origin of this place, and how to escape. Spirit states that whoever gathers the 4 relic pieces and slays the labyrinth lord inherits the title of Mind Hunter. Tyran stands speechless, stunned by the revelation. Out of nowhere, the stone portal begins violently vibrating. The spirit mumbles that all 4 required catalyst types have been sensed nearby. It issues a stern warning regarding hostile trespassers approaching the gateway. Announcing immediate divine judgment, it summons the terrifying labyrinth lord onto the field. Tyran drops into a battle-ready posture, steadying his breath for the coming clash. The deafening groan, the monumental stone doors swing inward. A gigantic, terrifying entity emerges from the darkness beyond. Tyran can barely wrap his mind around the monstrous threat standing before him. Standing right, there is none other than the ultimate boss of the labyrinth. Grinning maliciously, the creature sneers that he's a mere fraud, declaring all pretenders must be purged. Without panicking, Tyran whips out his slingshot and pulls the band tight. He launches a fast, lethal projectile straight between the monster's eyes. He immediately follows up by unleashing a wave of golden and azure magical blasts. The beast casually crosses its armored arms, soaking up the barrage. Looking down arrogantly, the creature laughs off the strike, mocking that it didn't hurt at all. Tyran grimaces, deeply troubled by the boss's absurd defense. It becomes painfully clear that taking this absolute unit head-on is pure suicide. The colossal beast roars, commanding him to freeze right where he stands. Hearing their leader's decree, every lesser creature in the vicinity perks up. The entire horde swarms forward in unison, eager to shred the kid. Slipping through their claws with agile bounds, Tyran leaps past the mob and sprints for his life. Purga catches his breath nearby, thinking how narrowly he escaped annihilation. However, scanning the tunnel, he spots yet another hideous beast walling off his exit. He instinctively erects a magical barrier to shield himself from impact. To his utter horror, the creature pulverizes his barrier like brittle glass. Reaching for his scabbard, he unsheathes his blade in desperation. Flashing downward, he lands a solid strike on the creature's hide. Sprinting blindly down the corridors, panic fuels a storm of chaotic thoughts in his head. The situation hits absolute critical when the towering boss monster materializes right before him. Without missing a beat, the boss unleashes a devastating strike. Purga slides slickly beneath its swinging arm, scrambling back up to keep fleeing. He desperately assures himself that victory over the single foe will end the nightmare. The boss monster grunts, visibly infuriated by the slipperiness of its prey. All the while, Purga tries desperately to conjure a counter-strategy. Pushing his body beyond its limits, he kicks his speed into overdrive, sprints aimlessly through the dark, obsessed with putting distance between himself and the beast. Rejoining his squad, Purga begins furiously hacking through any monster standing in his way. He rapidly falls into formation, alongside his remaining comrades. He pants heavily, asking his men if they're still in fighting shape. His battle-worn allies nod, confirming they're holding the line. Just then, a mercenary perks up, nervously asking if the rest hear an ominous sound. The rest of the party freezes, straining their ears to locate the noise. Out of the thick shadow, an eerie silhouette slowly takes shape. Terrified out of his mind, one man starts chanting crazy gibberish about the night hunter coming for them. Before they can react, the gigantic boss monster appears, casting a massive shadow over them. Purga screams at them to forget fairy tales and move their legs before they get slaughtered. Bellows that staying paralyzed in fear guarantees every single one of them gets killed. The young soldier freezes, jaw agape under the crushing pressure of the beast's aura. Rallying their last bit of courage, the warriors rush forward in a desperate attempt to overwhelm the boss. Their sole remaining strategy is to throw everything they have at it to end this nightmare. However, the warrior leading the charge gets flicked aside like a harmless fly. It becomes clear that the boss is simply toy-testing these foolish humans for fun. Enraged, one fighter screams at the creature to perish, only for his ultimate strike to be effortlessly swatted down. Within seconds, the entire party gets relentlessly decimated by the monster's overwhelming counteroffensive. Looking at the battlefield, one of the fighters realizes shit is about to hit the fan, especially now that even the weakest monsters are diving straight into the fight. He can tell that if this chaos continues, not a single one of them is walking away from this alive. Right at that moment, a sudden flicker of motion catches his eye off to the side. To his surprise, even a helpless little rat is desperately scrambling and putting up a fight just to stay alive. Meanwhile, another warrior's eyes turn bloodshot with raw fury as he tightens his grip on his battle axe. Putting every ounce of strength into his legs, he rushes in and swings hard at the monster's leg. Taken totally by surprise, the massive beast loses its balance and staggers sideways. Seeing the creature trip up, the warrior actually lets out a triumphant laugh right in its face. His arrogance doesn't last, though, because a split second later, the monster crushes him and sends him soaring through the air. Watching his ally get tossed like a ragdoll, his comrade's eyes stretch wide in absolute horror. At that moment, he's convinced that they're completely finished. He realizes that even if he somehow makes it out of this hell alive, his reputation and political career are burnt to ashes. Every single drop of this absolute nightmare rests squarely on the shoulders of that beast. Unable to cope, the guy just keeps whining, dumping all the blame onto the creature. Amidst his desperation, he spots something jammed into the monster's spine and yanks it free. He squeezes the weapon in his hand and begins slashing wildly as if it were a full-length blade. Driven by sheer adrenaline, he dashes straight back into the fray for another round. Each hit he delivers packs way more weight and deadly force than the last. Out of nowhere, a brilliant azure radiance illuminates the whole surroundings. Assessing the grim scene around him, he accepts that he's completely out of options. He roars at the top of his lungs, commanding the creature to drop dead permanently. His blow leaves a fresh gash on the monster, but hurting it only fuels the beast's berserk fury. The guy gets a sickening sinking, feeling that he's about to meet a gruesome end. Without even breaking a sweat, the beast plunges its claw straight through his torso. Lapsed in a pool of his own blood, the youth mentally rebinds his choices, wondering where it all collapsed. Life is quickly slipping away, and the glow in his eyes begins to dim. With every defender wiped out, he questions what the beast is glaring at next, wondering if its thirst for slaughter is still unquenched. Tyran observes the brutal massacre unfold without uttering a single word. Standing over the dying young man, Tyran watches as the guy undergoes a tragic epiphany. He was the powerless rat trapped in this trap all along. Locking its glare onto them, the monster growls that it has at last tracked down its target. Tyran winds up his strike, aware that as long as he channels raw lethal force, he can wipe it out. In the meantime, the gate guardian taunts Tyran, mocking him as nothing more than a phony night hunter. Brushing off the meaningless insults, Tyran keeps his eyes locked and his focus razor-sharp on his blade. He unleashes a full-power slash, but it merely leaves a faint nick on the creature, a minor injury that only piques the beast's interest. Evaluating his enemy's insane durability, Tyran quickly determines a one-hit KO is totally off the table. Acknowledging that he misjudged the firepower needed, he decides to retreat and formulate a fresh strategy. Tyran dashes backward instantly, putting some much-needed breathing room between himself and the boss. His retreat drives the beast livid, furious that this human landed a pathetic hit and then had the nerve to sprint off. Glancing down at his enchanted compass, Tyran confirms that his biggest handicap right now is insufficient raw offensive power. Though the circumstances are dire, he's left with no option but to trigger his ultimate fallback option. Speed is everything now, as the monstrous opponent is bearing down on him at terrifying speed. Bracing himself for the giant enemy, Tyran begins nimbly weaving around its relentless strikes. He unleashes a tier of combat prowess that completely overshadows whatever he exhibited earlier. Adjusting his stance, Tyran computes that a single deeper slice to a vital spot will be enough to put the beast down for good. At the same time, the creature howls in rage, accusing Tyran of being a heartless monster for slaughtering its offspring and causing it endless agony. Tyran is eager to wrap up this battle immediately, a desire the enraged boss completely shares. Tyran understands that he only gets one more shot, and it must be a decisive execution blow, so he channels every drop of remaining energy into a single, devastating finisher. Yet shockingly, even that insane amount of force fails to instantly slay the creature. Writhing in agony, the wounded beast screeches and casts a desperate look toward the unconscious humans nearby. Luckily, its agony is short-lived, as Tyran instantly leaps forward, aiming directly for its exposed throat. The beast lets out an ear-splitting shriek, but the overwhelming momentum behind Tyran's blade ensures there's no surviving this. Radiating a blinding light, both Tyran and his blade illuminate the gloom as he drives the strike home. The beast's agonizing cries cut short as it finally collapses dead. Having drained so much stamina, Tyran pauses to catch his breath and stabilize his body. He admits to himself that without the bloodline ability he inherited from Dolph, this fight would have been an absolute nightmare. Tyran finally grasps the underlying mechanism of the holy artifact. Although his knowledge of the Wave Knight is limited, he can feel that the mimicry skill is functioning properly. Unfortunately, this borrowed power is steadily draining away, with roughly half an hour left before it expires completely. Glancing down at the dying noble, Tyran notices that his ribcage and lungs have been completely crushed and pierced. It's obvious right away that saving him is totally out of the question. The noble desperately pleads for his life, but Tyran literally lacks the power to patch up fatal wounds like that. Mid-plea, the remaining spark of life drains from the man's body, and he draws his final breath. Tyran reflects on how even a powerhouse like Purga was completely chewed up and spit out by this dungeon. And he wasn't the only casualty either. Every single one of his men and allies suffered the exact same grim ending. Now, their corpses are nothing more than mana nourishment for Tyran, who recalls Purga as a ruthless tyrant who treated commoners and knights like disposable trash. Yet despite his rotten personality, Purga still battled like a demon against the labyrinth's horrors until his last breath. As Tyran begins siphoning Purga's mana, he figures this man's name is going to stay etched in his memory for a while. He sucks every last drop of mana from all the corpses and surrounding energy sources. Once finished, Tyran inspects the divine compass, spotting a rainbow of new hues pulsing on its surface. He's tempted to experiment with combining multiple bloodline traits, but wisely chooses to hold off for now. Main takeaway is that his current combat power is at least double what it was when he walked into this hellhole. Having amassed power that would take an average aristocrat a century of training to achieve, he recognizes he must toss the tracking device to keep the Zahars off his back. Cover his tracks completely, he activates detection magic to hunt down and destroy any lingering traces of his mana. Harnessing his energy, Tyran systematically obliterates every single object or surface that carries his unique signature. Bit by bit, every shred of evidence linking him to the labyrinth vanishes into thin air. Against all odds, he really pulled it off. The supreme boss of the labyrinth was dead by his hands. Fast forward a bit, and Turan is back in front of that gigantic main chamber door. He questions whether clearing the zone means he can simply shove the heavy doors open now. Sure enough, his hunch is dead on. With just a gentle nudge, the massive doors swing inward smoothly. However, the sight waiting on the other side completely kills any lingering hype. The room holds nothing except a deserted throne and a shimmering rift right in the center, clearly meant as the getaway portal. Right next to the throne rests a pristine, well-preserved manual. Volume draws his interest, and upon flipping it open, he identifies it as a detailed research log documenting the ascension path of a night hunter. Following the blueprints inside this journal, undergoing a high-tier class change is legit achievable. Though the text is packed with complex magic formulas, Turan quickly realizes executing the ritual solo is way beyond his solo capability. The notes further clarify that the portal was designed to trigger the moment a valid host matched its criteria. The mastermind behind it even built in an auto-suck feature to lock onto and draw in only that exact individual. Connecting the dots, he figures out that the Night Hunter class is a hybrid synthesized from 4 distinct branches: Hunter, Stalker, Shadow, and Alchemist. Suddenly, the mysterious pull he felt toward this chamber earlier makes total sense. Skimming the ingredient checklist, he notices bizarre catalyst demands, like body parts harvested from a dreaded rotjaw beast. On top of that, it called for pure DNA samples harvested from ancient giants. Mana acted as the primary fuel, capable of bypassing the mortality cap by putting the subject into deep hibernation. Dawns on him that he's looking at the records for the Earth Mother Goddess Project, an earlier attempt that ultimately crashed and burned. While 90% of the complex theory flies right over his head, one core truth stands out crystalline clear. The architect wanted to create the ultimate night hunter, and thanks to his holy artifact, the gate incorrectly identified Turan as a prime candidate harboring all 4 bloodlines. Even the flame madman used to blabber about some deity revealing a forbidden way to artificially synthesize bloodlines. Leaping headfirst into the swirling vortex, he contemplates whether someone could truly bind a bloodline permanently using such dark methods. Surviving the chaotic spatial transit, he gets dumped unceremoniously right onto the scorching desert sands. Scanning the endless dunes, he deduces that he's ended up somewhere along the outer boundaries of Baneful. Just as he catches his bearing, glowing script begins magically forming across the sand particles. Turns out his spirit eagle is throwing a massive tantrum, absolutely pissed that they're running more than 48 hours behind schedule. Soothing the agitated bird, he hitches his pack securely onto his shoulders and readies himself to move out. Grabbing tightly onto the talons of his legendary creature, he launches into the sky toward his next goal. The bird swoops low at breakneck speed, whipping up a massive sandstorm in its wake. Cruising through the air, he maps out his game plan for once he assassinates one of the high-value candidates tied to the Zahar Patriarch. He knows he'll have to vanish from the desert sector for a few months until the heat around his bounty dies down. Once the dust settles, his priority will be picking up the trail to hunt for information regarding his missing mother. Nudging his aerial mount, he redirects their flight vector toward their intended destination. As they cover more ground, the scorching desert scenery rapidly morphs into a desolate, icy tundra. They had crossed into the notorious Gray Zone, a historic war zone where Arabian and Zahar forces clashed in bloody battles. Peering toward the ground, he's shocked to spot a huge procession of civilians trudging through the snow. From the air, it looks like a desperate mass evacuation from some incoming catastrophe. It's obvious the refugees are completely evacuating the border settlement known as the Gray City of Kalamat. Skeletal squad of guards stationed nearby is equally stunned to see an outsider riding in. A mysterious guy wearing weird attire with a gigantic predator bird perched on his shoulder naturally turned every head. Sentries squint at his facial features, a spark of vague recognition lighting up their eyes. They immediately drop into deep bows, offering humble apologies and asking if he's an elite scion from one of the grand high noble clans. He quickly realizes their brown-nosing behavior kicked in the second they sensed his mana output and marked him as a mage. Minding himself to gear up in plain rags next time to keep a low profile, he casually responds that he's merely a wandering traveler. When he requests the guards to set him up with quarters courtesy of the local lord, they solemnly reveal that the realm currently has no ruler. Hanging his head in sorrow, the sentry explains that their lord was slaughtered recently during a violent raid launched by dark elves from the Western Front. He further discloses that the entire territory is completely devoid of any remaining aristocrats or order-keeping knights. Without warning, the guard collapses onto his knees and begins wildly pleading at his boots. Desperate guard passionately begs him to take up the mantle and govern as the new lord of Kalamat. The insane request completely blindsides Roy, considering he was just making a quick pit stop to execute his mission. Considers the demand far too massive a headache, particularly because locking himself down to a dead-end town is the last thing he wants. Even so, turning a completely blind eye to these suffering citizens doesn't sit right with him. So, Roy instructs the desperate guard to spill the full background story from the beginning. Moving into a secluded chamber, the man lays out the timeline, stating the nightmare officially began 3 weeks prior. A group of veteran monster hunters turned up butchered on the Western Highway, their forged steel blades sheared completely in half by a single clean slash. Given that the crime scene was barely a day's ride away, they dispatched 2 elite knights to investigate. Yet 3 days passed without a word from either. The man adds that even the Lord's young heir rode out west backed by a platoon of knights, and not a single soul returned. A lone wounded knight managed to drag his dying body back, coughing up a single word, spirit, before passing away. Panicked by the grim warning, the entire populace packed up and fled, terrified the unseen horrors would sweep in and massacre the remaining townspeople. When Roy inquires about support from surrounding cities, the youth admits they dispatched countless SOS runners, but every nearby lord turned a deaf ear. Roy reasons that the neighboring lords are simply terrified of dragging the threat to their own doorstep. And honestly, he can't fault their self-preservation. Pushing his chair back, Roy stands up, acknowledging the crisis while pointing out that taking on an unknown demonic invasion is beyond his pay grade. The youth drops right back onto the cold floor, weeping that the helpless flock trapped in this valley desperately needs a shepherd to guide them. Metaphor triggers a memory in Roy, recalling a woman once breaking down the hierarchy where lords rule over helpless sheep. Roy asks if that specific livestock analogy is standard terminology in this region. Nodding eagerly, the young man confirms that literally everyone in the local territory speaks, using those terms. Aristocracy play the shepherds, the armed knights act as sheepdogs, and the peasant class makes up the defenseless flock. Roy connects the dots, suspecting his mother was either born in this province or spent a significant chunk of her life here. Reaching down to unzipper his pack, he pulls out a sketched portrait of a young woman around 20 named Bidgie and asks if the face rings a bell. Apologizing profusely, the youth admits he doesn't recognize the face, but immediately promises to plaster wanted-style search posters across every corner of the city. Roy realizes that if he wants to leverage their help to uncover his mother's roots, ensuring the town's survival is non-negotiable. He looks the young man in the eye and clarifies that officially ruling as their lord is off the table. That said, he commits to stepping up as their temporary guardian until the danger passes. Upon hearing those words, a massive wave of relief washes over the youth, filling him with joy. Roy steps outside and announces to the gathered crowd that he will hold down the fort and shield the village until the western threat is erased. A youth in the crowd whispers in awe that their messiah has finally descended to deliver them from doom. However, a cynic scoffs in response, muttering that handsome faces don't scare off bloodthirsty abominations. Instantly, a villager barks at the hater to close his trap and show proper gratitude to their new guardian. Roy picks up on the vibe, understanding that their skepticism isn't malice. It's sheer, crippling trauma. The locals are terrified of building false hope, only to watch their savior get slaughtered like the last ones. He decides that to put the skittish flock at ease, the shepherd must flex his muscles. So he prepares to put on a raw show of ultimate power. Bickering crowd snaps silent in an instant, fixing every eye on Roy's next move. Roy lifts his hand and begins drawing out his magical energy, opting for a light flex of his true capability. First, he drops the thermal energy of his flames, while simultaneously condensing the magical fire into a hyperdense core. Since he has zero intention of harming the innocent onlookers, he shapes the spell purely for maximum visual shock value. A fraction of a second later, a breathtaking eruption of pure light and magic detonate into the sky. Roy lets the magic expand, pushing its aura to blanket the entire horizon. The shockwave of released mana is so overwhelming that nearby villagers are forced to throw their arms up to guard their eyes. Once the blinding light settles, the terrified townsfolk slowly lower their hands to take in the aftermath. Villagers freeze in awe, muttering among themselves that the heavens above look like they're burning down. Erupting into wild cheers, the crowd breaks out in celebration, realizing they might actually survive this ordeal after all. Watching from above, Tyran assumes this flashy flex is more than enough to pump up the villagers' morale to peak euphoria. In truth, the harsh reality hasn't changed. They're still stuck dealing with food shortages, pointless political debates, and lethal sub-zero weather. The administrative chaos is spiraling, and if he doesn't put his foot down, this council meeting will spill over into the next morning. Tyran shuts down the entire council by bluntly declaring that he's taking full personal responsibility for feeding the populace. While the elders blindly trust his combat prowess, not a single person can fathom how their champion intends to summon food out of nowhere. The strategy is simple. mind control the wild beasts into marching straight to the gates, slaughter them for immediate rations, and preserve the rest in salt for the long winter. The townsfolk are utterly baffled that an archmage-tier entity would employ reality-warping sorcery just to run mundane errands. Tyran reassures them, pointing out that northern High Lords regularly spam lightning magic across depleted farmlands just to enrich the soil post-harvest. Since what he's pulling off is basically standard high-tier utility magic, he mounts his giant eagle and launches into the sky. From a bird's-eye perspective, he identifies all those glowing heat signatures scattered across the peaks as mountain wildlife. Fixing his domain, he psychically commands the entire creature horde to march in formation and assemble right outside the city gates. With the telepathic command sent, Tyran circles the sky to confirm the beast pack is actually obeying. Watching the beasts fall in line, he muses that controlling fierce monsters is barely any harder than driving ordinary livestock. When the starving, frostbitten locals witness a gigantic army of game walking right to their doorstep, their minds are utterly shattered. Rubbing their eyes in disbelief, they angrily question why their former noble rulers never bothered using magic to feed them like this. Putting Tyran on an even higher pedestal as a legendary archmage, they waste no time skinning the game and passing around fresh meat. Positioning himself outside a luxurious manor, Tyran commands the guards to unlock the doors and transform the mansion into a shelter for the homeless. The mandate leaves the servants bewildered, wondering aloud where their new ruler intends to set up his own private chambers. They're left speechless when Tyran casually responds that the simple town hall suits him fine, since it's already got a functional cot. Villagers tearfully whisper among themselves, worshipping their new savior for sacrificing his own luxury to make sure everyone is fed and housed. Truth be told, Tyran couldn't care less about their hero worship or praise. All he really cares about right now is getting the city back on its feet, so he can finally hunt for leads about his mom. Before long, word of his insane accomplishments spreads like wildfire throughout the land. Over at Biggin Castle, a scout breaks the news to the Lord that this new leader is already setting up trade routes. Taking in the report, the Lord of Biggin pauses and asks about the age of this mysterious new ruler. Meanwhile, in Balin Castle, rumors are flying about a young boy whose magical spell literally illuminated the entire horizon. They assume a kid with that level of terrifying power was either blessed with absurd luck or raised by an elite clan from day one. Down at Heron Castle, the rulers are furious, complaining that his arrival next to Arabian's forces couldn't have come at a worse moment. Because every territory calls him something different, nobody can pinpoint his true lineage. As Tyran quietly manages the city, everyone around him, friend or foe, agrees that playing nice is their safest bet. Completely unbeknownst to him, the powers of the Grey Zone officially accept Tyran as Kalamath's legitimate guardian. While plotting his next step, Tyran finds his eyes drifting back to the painting of his mother. The 8 major cities and 100+ villages spread out here. He realizes she could easily be hiding somewhere in this vast land. Out of nowhere, an assistant comes bursting through the doors with urgent news. He begs forgiveness for previous dead ends, swearing that this latest lead is 100% legit. He mentions a traveler named Igon, who insists that a woman matching the portrait checked into his in 18 years back. Tyran's heart races, realizing the timeline lines up flawlessly with his mother's disappearance. Right at that moment, a group of citizens surrounds him, showering him with gratitude for saving them from starvation. Tyran gives every single one of them his attention, hearing out their kind words. Yet deep down, his mind is fixed on one thing alone, questioning that traveler to confirm if it was truly his mother. The traveler begins his story, mentioning how he owned a bustling inn before losing his livelihood. In those days, civil war between 2 dominant noble houses had plunged the entire city into pure mayhem. Nobody knew when the next strike would hit, leaving the townspeople paralyzed with dread. Right amidst all that madness, a young lady arrived at his doorstep. He recalls her being around 20 years old, visibly expecting a child. She was visibly terrified, acting as if she was actively escaping pursuers. Back then, he couldn't grasp what sort of monster would leave such a stunning woman to fend for herself in that state. When Tyran presses him on why he assumed she was deserted, the traveler reveals he caught her softly whispering to her belly. He quotes her exact sentence, a desperate prayer to her baby, pleading with him never to become like his father. He adds that she then asked for a map toward the west, proving she wasn't a local. Even her steed gave off the vibe of hailing from some distant, exotic land. It boasted a stunning golden coat, radiant enough that anyone could tell it was a noble thoroughbred. Retiring to his chambers, Tyran cautions himself not to get ahead of his thoughts, though he feels deep down that the lady was indeed his mother. Even so, he's left haunted by her words, wondering why she was so desperate for her son not to follow in his father's footsteps. Catching a sudden motion beside him, Tyran glances over. It turns out to be his giant eagle, scrawling out a note asking if he's hurting inside. Once he assures her he's okay, the eagle notes down that he always looks heartbroken whenever BJ is mentioned. Stunned by how observant the bird is, Tiran asks if she recalls his mom, but the creature simply shakes its head. Stroking her feathers softly, he chuckles that they're practically in the same boat, since he's been motherless for as long as he can remember. Hearing those words, the eagle locks eyes with Tiran for a silent moment. Immediately after, she drops her head and begins jotting down another message. She proudly displays her note, declaring that her name from now on is BJ. Tiran just stands there, totally bewildered by her sudden declaration. The bird writes back, explaining she wants the name BJ, so he stops feeling down about losing the original BJ. He asks if she's trying to fill his mother's shoes, reminding her that taking on a name is a serious deal. Without hesitation, the bird writes back that she's dead serious and truly desires to be named BJ. Surrendering to her persistence, Tiran agrees that if it means that much to her, BJ it is, leaving the eagle utterly overjoyed. He offers her a warm grin, telling her he's relying on her partnership from this day forward. Pushing open the window, Tiran decides that their break is officially over. Gripping onto the eagle, the pair launch into the clouds to begin their aerial patrol. In the streets below, townsfolk gaze up and roar in approval, begging him to stay as their guardian forever. Hearing the cheers, Tiran sighs, knowing he can't remain forever, and that departing later will only hurt more. This exact emotional baggage is why he always avoided forming attachments to any place. Shaking off the thought, the duo gets down to business with their routine round. Scanning the area with his sensory magic, Tiran picks up 0 dark elf signatures, wondering if they've already packed up and fled. If they really pulled out, that poses a whole new issue. At least if they were nearby, he could just wipe them out in one go. However, if they've regrouped elsewhere, they remain a constant shadow ready to ambush at any time. Glancing toward the horizon, a bizarre sensation triggers his senses. He registers the magic signature of a caster, carrying easily double his own mana capacity. Without warning, that massive aura locks onto him and surges forward at high speed. Tiran's instincts kick in instantly, ordering BJ to dive south without hesitation. As the incoming spellcaster closes the gap, Tiran finds the flight pattern strangely familiar. His jaw drops as the identity of the pursuer hits him. Terrifying mage chasing them down turns out to be Mesa all along. She's equally caught off guard to stumble upon Tiran out in the wild. Descending from the skies, both of them touch down on the terrain below. Mesa remarks that while it's only been 3 months, he looks like he's grown up dramatically. She points out that he genuinely comes across as an entirely new person. In her eyes, he finally carries the aura of a grown-up man. Feeling left out, the eagle nudges Tiran with her beak for attention. The bird quickly scrawls out a line, asking about the identity of this female spellcaster. Noticing the inquiry, Tiran officially introduces the two to one another. BJ puffs her chest out proudly the moment they compliment her writing skills. Mesa admires their dynamic, admitting she'd kill to have a loyal companion like BJ. Then she switches tone, asking why Tiran is roaming these risky lands given the current dangers. Tiran fills her in, taking his time to lay out the entire crazy narrative. Mesa nods in understanding, suspecting her faction might be responsible since a powerful necromancer fled when they wiped out a subterranean realm. She theorizes that this runaway mage is building a force out east while laying low in the territory of the blind dwarves. Tiran cuts in, asking if she means the mythical blind dwarves from ancient folklore. Mesa confirms it and breathes a sigh of relief that Tiran didn't venture deeper east, as entering the gray zone is strictly off-limits for them. When Tiran questions if Zahar is the reason behind the ban, Mesa nods, validating his guess. She checks the time and mentions she needs to head out before her prolonged absence raises flags. Bidding farewell, Mesa promises to catch up on all his adventures the next time they cross paths. The quick wave, she launches into the air and zips back toward her destination. Turning around, Tiran catches sight of something hilarious. The eagle is back to scribbling furiously on the dirt floor. Her new note states that Mesa's aura matches her surprisingly well. Tiran teases the bird, asking if she would have picked Mesa as her partner had she met the mage first. Panicking, the eagle frantically writes that Tiran is her one and only, and Mesa doesn't hold a candle to how happy he makes her. Reflecting on the whole encounter, Tiran realizes the puzzle isn't fully solved yet. There's one particular detail that keeps bugging his mind. Can't figure out why both his mana and Mesa's vibe match so effortlessly with this eagle. Fast forward a bit, and Tiran is back inside the walls of Kalamat. He's busy honing his spells when a guard bursts in to announce the arrival of high-class delegates. Seeing the confused look on Tiran's face, the guard clarifies that a whole delegation of lords has pulled up. They turn out to be envoys sent from neighboring territories. Stepping inside, the head representative bows, requesting proper hospitality for their visit. Tiran agrees to entertain them, but demands to know their real agenda first. A noble wearing a family crest steps to the front, offering to speak for the entire alliance. Drops the bomb. They want to form a massive matrimonial pact combining 7 noble houses with Kalamath's leader. They offer their daughters as concubines, hyping up their beauty, brains, and potential to expand his royal line. Turan instantly sees right through them. These opportunists only showed up to leech off his victory now that the Western danger is eliminated. One lord argues that a ruler needs staunch allies to stay in power, so merging their bloodlines is a win-win. Turan offers a cold smile, thanking them for the pitch before flat-out rejecting it. Rather than leaving them empty-handed, he pitches a bizarre counterdeal. Whichever noble house digs up the most solid intel on a mystery woman from 20 years ago gets the throne of Kalamath. The entire delegation stands frozen in total disbelief. They can't wrap their minds around someone handing over a whole kingdom just for clues about a random female. Before they can process it, Turan drops one final clause. The future lord must pledge absolute protection to Kalamath's citizens, or they get stripped of their title instantly. The lord asks why he gives a damn about peasants, given he's already gone above and beyond for the common folk. Turan shrugs with a faint smile, admitting he doesn't have a deep reason himself. He remarks that when you strip away the titles, he's nothing more than a humble valley shepherd. Deep inside, he reflects that his only dream was to tend to his flock in peace. Suddenly, a sharp spike in energy cuts his thoughts short. He senses the overwhelming aura of a top-tier knight who just breached the city hall uninvited. Sensing a potential threat, Turan parkours across rooftops, sprinting to intercept the trespasser. The instant he lands, he barks an order to draw the knight's focus. Armored figure turns back at an agonizingly slow pace. The moment Turan catches sight of his face, he locks up in complete disbelief. Standing tall right in front of his eyes is none other than Kjorn himself.